Lu Ren was awakened by a mixed odor of soiled decaying leaves and an indescribable feral scent. His last memory was at 3 in the morning, the faint blue glow of his computer screen illuminating his bloodshot eyes, the dense lines of World of Warcraft classic plugin code on the screen seemingly mocking his life as a hardcore gamer. A violent wave of dizziness hit him, and he remembered cursing something like, "Who the hell wants to work this shitty job?" And then, nothing. Shoo, so hard. He groaned, trying to push himself up, but his palms pressed against the cold, damp soil and sharp stones, sending a jolt of pain. He snapped his eyes open. Not the familiar ceiling of his rented room, no hum of computer fans, and certainly no unique fragrance of piled-up takeout boxes. Before him were towering ancient trees that blocked out the sky, their gnarled branches reaching like monstrous arms into the gray sky. The air was so humid it could be wrung out, carrying the unique, vibrant, yet perilous breath of a primeval forest. Wah! What? Lu Ren was completely dumbfounded, his mind blank. Hangover. A prank. A company team-building exercise in immersive survival. This was way too expensive. He struggled to his feet and looked around. The tall trees were ones he had only seen in botanical gardens. The ground was covered in thick, unfamiliar ferns dotted with bizarrely shaped mushrooms whose vivid colors screamed, "Poison, do not eat." In the distance came the crisp but unfamiliar calls of birds, and further away the low growl of some beast. This special effect is way too realistic, isn't it? He instinctively pinched his thigh. Ouched. He winced in pain. Not a dream. Panic like icy vines instantly constricted his heart. He was wearing the crumpled plaid shirt and jeans he had on when he crossed over worn-out canvas shoes on his feet, and his pockets were empty except for a lighter, half a pack of cigarettes, and a phone with only 5 battery. Phone. He pulled it out like a lifeline. No signal, not even 1 bar. The time displayed was gibberish. The screen flickered a few times and went black, refusing to respond no matter how many times he pressed the power button. It's over. Lu Ren sat back down on the ground, a wave of despair washing over him. A standard modern office worker with no physical strength, whose wilderness survival knowledge was limited to Bear Grylls documentaries and only the edited versions inexplicably thrown into this godforsaken place. Calm down, Lu Ren, calm down. He took a few deep breaths, trying to analyze the situation using the logical thinking honed by years of debugging bugs. First, eliminate alien abduction. Too costly. Second, eliminate company team building. The boss isn't that generous. So that leaves. An absurd thought that made his heart race surfaced. A transmigration. At that moment, a rustling sound came from the nearby bushes. Lu Ren instantly froze, holding his breath, not daring to move. He forced himself to shrink into the shadow at the base of a giant tree, his eyes fixed on the source of the sound. The bushes shook a few times, and a small figure emerged. It was only about waist height to Lu Ren, hunchbacked, covered in coarse brownish fur. It had a head resembling a goblin or a dog. A head with pointed ears, a protruding snout, and half a squirming, unknown insect dangling from its mouth. The most striking feature was a burning, crooked candle stuck on top of its head, wax dripping onto its fur unnoticed by the creature. It clutched a rusty, seemingly about to fall apart mining pick in one hand, while its other claw was shoving the insect into its mouth, making smacking sounds. A goblin. Lu Ren almost screamed, clamping his hand over his mouth. As a casual World of Warcraft player, he instantly recognized this iconic creature. A specialty of the Azeroth newbie zone, harmless, but numerous. Harmless, but numerous little monsters. Is this really World of Warcraft? The kobold seemed not to have noticed him, munching on the insect, its small eyes scanning the surroundings warily, the candle flame flickering with its movements. Lu Ren's heart was in his throat. According to the game's lore, kobolds were usually timid, but if provoked or in numbers they became trouble. He prayed this one would finish eating and leave. But things didn't go as hoped. The kobold finished its insect, licked its claws with relish, and then its small nose suddenly twitched vigorously. Its gaze locked precisely onto the direction of the tree root, where Lu Ren was hiding. Damn, Lu Ren cursed inwardly. The smell of modern laundry detergent or sweat on him was like a lighthouse in this primitive forest. Grr. The kobold let out an unintelligible growl, its small eyes gleaming with greed and vigilance. It raised the broken pickaxe, took a few short steps, and tentatively moved toward Lu Ren. Run. That was the only thought in Lu Ren's mind. He bolted from behind the tree and sprinted madly into the dense forest. Wah! The kobold was startled, then enraged, emitting a sharp, piercing shriek as it chased after him, brandishing its pickaxe. Its speed was surprisingly fast, and with its familiarity with the terrain it darted left and right through the trees, quickly closing the distance. Lu Ren had never run so fast in his life. His lungs felt like they were about to explode, sweat blinding his eyes. He ran blindly, branches slapping his face with stinging pain. The gore sounds and the scraping of the pickaxe behind him were like death knells. Help! Is anyone there? Hell! Just as he was about to be caught, even smelling the kobold's odor of candle wax and decay, a sudden buzz sounded in his mind. A translucent soft blue glowing square abruptly appeared in the center of his vision, as if projected directly onto his retina. Azeroth Survival Assist System Beta 1.0 Complaining Edition Initializing. User identity confirmed Lu-Rin carbon-based organism weak constitution abnormal mental fluctuations. Binding complete. Newbie gift pack. Error. Insufficient energy gift pack delivery failed. TSK. Detected low-level threat Kobold Miner LV1 EX1. Status extremely agitated possibly because you smell like a spam can. Scanning available basic skill library. No class certification detected. User status unemployed how sad. Warning threat distance too close. Initiating emergency protocol opening skill fusion trial edition permission. Please concentrate and choose 2 basic skills for forced fusion. Warning fusion result uncontrollable side effects unknown. System is not responsible. Countdown 5, 4. A cold, clearly mocking and disdainful mechanical voice echoed in Lu-Rin's mind, while on the screen quickly flashed 2 extremely crude skill icons, one a rough axe silhouette warrior heroic strike, the other a twisted ball of light mage arcane missile. Holy crap. Cheat device. Lu-Rin was both surprised and delighted, but mostly terrified. The countdown beat mercilessly in his mind. The stench of the beast was already upon him. Choose. Just those 2. Fuse now. Lu-Rin roared in his mind with no time to think. Selection confirmed heroic strike arcane missile. Fusion beginning. Energy collision. Warning user mental strength too low. Forcibly merging. Obtain temporary skill arcane throw heroic edition effect hurl any small object in your hand or nearby infused with extremely unstable arcane energy with heroic momentum. Power. Depends on luck. Accuracy. Depends on faith. Side effects. Pray for yourself. The system's voice carried a tone of I knew it. Just as the kobold's rusty mining pickaxe was about to smash into the back of Lu-Rin's head at the last moment. Lu-Rin felt a strange power surge through his body, roughly taking over his arm movements. He almost instinctively with all his might grabbed at something beside him. His hand closed around a wet, cold object, half a rotten log, or a moss-covered stone. He didn't even see what it was. Fuck it. Survival instinct overwhelmed fear and reason. Imitating the posture of a warrior's charge from the game, he twisted his waist, turned, and with all his might hurled the unknown object at the charging kobold. At the same time, he felt a violent, chaotic, extremely disobedient energy crazily surge through his arm into the projectile. Buzz. The rotten log, or stone, burst into dazzling, highly unstable purple arcane light the moment it left his hand. It dragged a twisting, shimmering tail of light, like a drunken comet along a ridiculously erratic, chaotic parabolic path, wobbling toward the kobold. The kobold was also startled by the sudden glowing object, its charging momentum faltering as it instinctively tried to block with its pickaxe. However, the trajectory of that Arcane Throw Heroic Edition was too bizarre. It didn't hit the kobold's head nor its chest, but instead arced in midair and precisely. Bang! It struck the burning candle on the kobold's head. Crack! The candle snapped, the burning wick shattered, and sparks flew everywhere. Wah! The kobold let out an earth-shattering, agonizing scream. Like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. It dropped the pickaxe, its claws frantically patting its head where hot wax had burned it and sparks had singed a patch of fur. More importantly, its light. The sacred candle it relied on for survival in the dark mines. Gone. The intense pain and fear of darkness instantly overwhelmed this low-level creature. It no longer cared about Lu-Rin the spam can. Clutching its smoking head, it let out terrified whimpers, rolled and scrambled, and fled back into the bushes, disappearing without a trace. Lu-Rin remained in his throwing pose, staring in disbelief, his heart still pounding, his arm trembling from the excessive force and the impact of the chaotic energy. Did it work? He looked at his hand incredulously. The violent power was gone, leaving only fatigue and slight numbness. Battle over. Threat neutralized. Method extremely undignified. Skill effect evaluation. Hit target candle caused effect target panic retreat. Physical damage minor burns. Mental damage unknown may cause permanent fear of darkness. User status physical exhaustion slight. Mental turbulence fusion side effects hand tremor mild tinnitus. Congratulations, you survived, rookie. The system's summary was filled with undisguised sarcasm. The immense fatigue of survival washed over him. Lu-Rin's legs gave way, and he sat down heavily on the ground, gasping for breath, his shirt soaked with cold sweat. He looked at the direction where the kobold had disappeared, then at his own hand, suddenly feeling absurd and somewhat amused. Arcane Throw. Hitting a candle. He couldn't help but chuckle, the laughter sounding somewhat out of place and neurotic in the silent forest. This cheat device was way too crappy. Where was the promised world-shattering power? It ended up being used to hit someone's candle. But it was surprisingly effective. He struggled to stand up, but a violent dizziness hit him again. The The scene began to spin, his ears rang, as if 1,000 bees were holding a concert. Ugh! He dry-heaved, a sign of mental exhaustion. This side effect is way too real. Lu Run leaned against a tree trunk, taking a while to suppress the nausea. He checked himself. Aside from being disheveled, his clothes were torn in a few places, and he had some scratches, but no serious injuries. I need to get out of here quickly. He looked nervously at the bush where the kobold had vanished. Who knew if it would come back with more relatives to seek revenge, or attract something worse? Lu Ren forced himself to stand, identified a direction purely by instinct, and headed toward where the trees seemed slightly sparser and the terrain appeared lower. He now had only one vague goal: find civilization, or at least find a relatively safe place to spend the night. The system interface didn't disappear, but shrank into a tiny translucent icon floating in the upper right corner of his vision. He tried to mentally click on it. The interface expanded. Azeroth Survival Assist System Beta 1.0. User Lu Ren. Status: weak, physical exhaustion, mental turbulence. Class: unemployed. Weaver of all things. Inactive skills: Arcane Throw Heroic Edition. Temporary cooldown. Side effect: residual period. Map not unlocked. Find a reference point or communicate with local creatures. Mission: survive. Priority: highest. Notes: newbie village. The nearest intelligent being settlement seems to be to the northeast. Signal weak. For reference, only don't blame me if you get lost. The map area was pitch black, with only a faint blinking dot marking roughly the northeast direction. Northeast. Lu Ren looked up at the sky, fragmented by the dense canopy, barely identified the direction, and trudged forward unsteadily. Every step felt heavy. The system's weak status truly reflected in his body. The forest seemed. After walking for an unknown time, the sky gradually darkened. The light in the forest grew dimmer, and various strange sounds increased, keeping his nerves on edge. Just as he was about to despair, considering whether to find a tree hollow to hole up for the night, a sound came from ahead. Not the roar of a beast, nor the rustle of wind through leaves. It was the sound of water, the gurgling of a stream. Water meant there might be a path, or even a village. Lu Ren's spirits lifted, and his fatigue seemed to lessen. He quickened his pace, pushing aside the thick vines and foliage. The view suddenly opened up. A clear stream not too wide appeared before him, its waters sparkling golden in the setting sun. More importantly, on the opposite bank, a path clearly worn by foot traffic wound along the stream into the distance. A path. There's a path. Lu Ren almost wept with joy. He stumbled to the stream, cupped the cool water, and gulped it down. The sweet taste made him feel half alive again. He couldn't wait to cross the river and follow the path to find that blinking, intelligent being settlement. However, when he raised his head about to look for a shallow spot or rocks to cross, his gaze swept across the bushes by the path on the opposite bank. He instantly felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave, his blood freezing. On the opposite bank, less than 20 meters away in the shadow beside the path, stood a figure. No, that was no ordinary traveler. The figure was extraordinarily tall and burly, far beyond normal, wearing a crude leather armor, stained with mud and dark red blotches. It was facing away from Lu Ren, hunched over, eating something, making a chilling chewing sound. What made Lu Ren's scalp tingle most was that the exposed skin of the figure was an unhealthy gray-green, muscles bulging yet lifeless, and under the greasy, tangled hair the outline of protruding fangs was faintly visible. At its feet there seemed to be scattered pieces of torn, blood-stained cloth and bones. An orc in the middle of eating. Lu Ren's heart pounded so hard it felt like it would leap out of his throat. He immediately clamped his hand over his mouth, stifling the scream that almost escaped. His body was as stiff as a rock, his breath stopped. The kobold was just an appetizer. This was the true nightmare of the Azeroth newbie zone. The orc seemed to sense something. Its chewing stopped. That fanged, hideous head slowly, with suffocating pressure, turned toward Lu Ren's direction. Turbid, brutal, and hungry yellow eyes, like two burning, ghostly flames in the dim light, instantly locked onto the small, trembling figure by the stream. Lu Ren's mind went blank, leaving only the crimson warning flashing wildly on the system interface. Warning. High-level threat detected. Target: Orc Marauder LV5. Status: hungry, extremely aggressive. Advice: run immediately. Right now. Or try your Arcane Throw again. There doesn't seem to be a candle on its head. Good luck. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. The murky yellow beast's eyes locked onto Lu Ren like searchlights, the pure brutality and hunger in that gaze making him feel as if he had been stripped naked and thrown into a frozen wasteland, every cell screaming danger. He could even smell the heavy scent of blood drifting from the opposite bank, mixed with the unique stench of the orc's sweat and rotting flesh. Orc Raider LV5. The system's crimson warning still flashed wildly at the edge of his vision, like a death god's countdown. Run. 20 meters away, hindered by the stream and dense vegetation, was nothing short of a fool's dream for a modern person with weak legs. Lu Ren had no doubt that the orc's terrifying, explosive power could allow it to pounce and tear him apart the moment he turned around. Fight. With what? Use Arcane Throw to hit its head. The system said the target's head doesn't seem to have a candle. And that damn skill was still on cooldown. The hand tremors and tinnitus from the side effects hadn't fully subsided. The orc let out a low, threatening growl from its throat, dropped the half-eaten bloody remains of an unknown animal from its claws. Lu Ren forced himself not to look closely and slowly straightened, its massive body over 2 meters tall. Under its crude leather armor, knotted gray-green muscles bulged with explosive power. Its large, calloused and grimy hands slowly reached for a rusty, but menacingly bladed woodcutter's axe hanging at its waist. It was about to strike. Extreme fear instead gave birth to a strange clarity. Lu Ren's brain overclocked at an unprecedented speed, adrenaline surging wildly. He couldn't die. Killed by a beginner village mob, even if it was an enhanced version right after transmigrating. That would be a disgrace to all transmigrators. Cheat system. System. Daddy. Help. Think of something. Lu Ren screamed frantically in his mind, his eyes fixed on the terrifying giant shadow that was stepping with heavy strides, preparing to wade across the water. Warning. Threat level too high. User survival rate below 5. Skill Arcane Throw Valiant version cooldown remaining 8 seconds. 7 seconds. Available basic skill library rescanning. Detected strong mental fluctuations from user survival instinct max. New skill unlocked taunt warrior basic. Skill description: use insulting language or actions to enrage the target, forcing it to attack you. Effect: forced aggro. Side effect: the target might tear you apart even more thoroughly. Use. The system's voice was still chillingly calm, or rather indifferent. Taunt. Lu Ren nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. What kind of solution was that? Did he think he wasn't dying fast enough or miserably enough? But watching the orc already step into the stream, the cold murky water only reaching its calves, it was grinning cruelly, revealing sharp, white fangs approaching step by step. No time to hesitate. Cooldown still had 5 seconds. Taunt it is. At least it could buy a few seconds. Use it. Use it now. Lu Ren roared in his mind. Skill taunt activated. Please improvise on your own. The system only provides mental guidance amplification effect. Tip: the more obnoxious, the more effective. On the system screen, a distorted tongue-out grimace icon flashed and disappeared. At the same time, Lu Ren felt a strange, highly provocative energy flow gather in his throat. Improvise. The more obnoxious, the more effective. Lu Ren, looking at the orc radiating deathly aura right before him, had a brain twitch and blurted out, "Hey, that green-skinned big guy." His voice was slightly distorted by fear, but under the energy boost of the taunt skill, it pierced through the gurgling of the stream with an indescribable, incredibly punchable, penetrating power. The orc's waiting motion paused, noticeably a flicker of confusion in its yellow eyes, as if it didn't understand, but the targeted malice made it very uncomfortable. "What are you looking at?" "I'm talking to you. You look like a toad that got blasted by a goblin bomb." Lu Ren was desperate. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well have some fun before death. He racked his brains for online and in-game trash-talking vocabulary, and with the taunt skill's impetus, his words came out like a machine gun, green on top, stinky all over. "Even a kobold's candle is brighter than your head. Was your mother stepped on by an ogre when she gave birth to you? With your IQ, you probably can't even catch a murloc. Waste. Scum. Alive wastes air, dead pollutes the land. Come on. Come and hit me if you dare." Lu Ren had never been so sharp-tongued in his life. Oh, every word was filled with ultimate insult and provocation, coupled with the system's mental pollution effect precisely hitting the orc's simple and crude nerves. Effect. Outstanding. Roar. A deafening roar filled with supreme rage erupted from the orc. The sound was so loud it made Lu Ren's eardrums ache, and the stream seemed to ripple. The orc's yellow eyes instantly filled with ferocious bloodshot veins, all reason burned to ashes by the overwhelming fury. It was completely enraged. Food. Caution. To hell with all that. Now there was only one thought in its mind: this noisy, venomous, insignificant bug. Crush. Tear apart. Chew into pulp. Boom. The orc's massive body erupted with terrifying speed, no longer carefully waiting, but charging recklessly, like a mad rhinoceros plowing through the stream. Water splashed several meters high from its immense force. It raised the rusty but gleaming woodcutter's axe high with a berserk momentum, as if to cleave Lu Ren and the ground beneath him apart. Now. Arcane Throw. Smash it. Lu Ren roared in his mind. The skill cooldown had just ended. That familiar, violent, chaotic energy once again flooded into his arm. But this time he had no time to grab any rotten wood. In desperation, almost instinctively, he threw the only thing he could grab. The smartphone with only 5 battery and a completely black screen. With all his might at the orc charging toward him. Go. Spiritual successor of Nokia. Buzz. The moment the black phone left his hand, it erupted with a more blinding and unstable purple arcane light than before. This time the light trail was longer, the trajectory more twisted and mad, like a drunken firework technician's sky monkey drawing a bizarre shape in the air, aimed directly at the orc's face, twisted with rage and full of fangs. The orc's eyes were only on Lu Ren, the source of hatred, and it paid no attention to the flying pebble. In fact, it disdained to dodge. Its axe was already swinging down with deathly wind pressure toward Lu Ren's head. A hair's breadth. The phone, infused with chaotic arcane energy, didn't hit the orc's face nor its axe, but made a bizarre sharp turn in midair and plummeted. It hit precisely on the big toe of the orc's massive foot, which had just stepped out of the stream onto the slippery cobblestones on the bank. Crack! A crisp teeth-grinding sound of bone breaking rang out, accompanied by the mournful sound of the phone screen shattering completely. Ow! This time the scream was an octave higher than the kobolds earlier, filled with unbelievable agony and shock. The orc's berserk charge was instantly halted by the piercing pain. Its massive body lost balance. The raised axe also lost its aim, and it struck the ground less than half a meter from Lu Ren with terrifying force. Boom! Soiled gravel grass clippings mixed with purple arcane energy fragments exploded. The powerful blast sent Lu Ren flying. Lu Ren felt as if he had been sideswiped by a speeding truck, flying uncontrollably backward and crashing heavily onto the grass several meters away, his internal organs dislocated, stars dancing before his eyes. He couldn't help spitting out a mouthful of saliva with a rusty taste. As for the orc, it was holding its right foot, which was now a bloody mess with a clearly broken or even shattered big toe, hopping wildly on one leg, while letting out a roar of extreme pain mixed with fury. Roar. Pain. Damned little bug. Tear you apart. Ow. It tried to pounce again, but the moment its injured foot touched the ground, a piercing pain shot through, severely distorting its movements. It could only rage impotently like a furious one-legged giant. Opportunity. Lu Ren, enduring the excruciating pain and dizziness that felt like his whole body was falling apart, scrambled to his feet. He saw the orc's axe deeply embedded in the ground, and the orc temporarily incapacitated by the pain. Must run. Strike while it's down. No, while it's down, flee for your life. Without any hesitation, he turned and sprinted along the path by the stream. This time he used every ounce of strength, squeezing out the last bit of potential from his body, not even caring that his lungs were wheezing like a broken bellows. The orc's pained roars and angry curses, though unintelligible, they were definitely not nice words, behind him were the best motivation. System. Navigation. Northeast direction. Lu Ren shouted in his mind as he ran. Navigation initiated. Locking onto a weak signal source. Intelligent creature gathering point. Course correction. Proceed along current path for approximately 1.7 kilometers. Warning. User vital signs declining. Speed below safety threshold. On the system screen, a flashing arrow pointed ahead on the path next to a small warning icon for tachycardia. 1.7 kilometers. A distance that would be tiring even for a light jog now felt like a chasm. Lu Ren gritted his teeth, dragging his aching body, desperately pumping his legs. He could feel the murderous gaze behind him, like a physical tether nailed to his back. The orc's angry roars, though diminished by distance, hadn't stopped, instead mixed with the terrible sounds of trees being snapped by brute force. The monster was still pursuing. It was chasing despite its limp. Fear seized Lu Ren's heart again. He dared not look back, only ran forward. The path was uneven, full of potholes, and the woods on both sides looked eerie in the dim light, as if hiding more unknown dangers. He didn't know how long he had run. His lungs were burning, his legs felt like lead, and every breath tasted of blood. Just as Lu Ren felt he was about to collapse from exhaustion, the terrain ahead seemed to change. The trees became sparser, and he could vaguely see a relatively open wetland with low shrubs and weeds. The stream curved here, forming a small weedy shoal. And in the water, near the shoal, Lu Ren saw several short, upright walking figures. They had smooth, scale-covered greenish skin, large, protruding eyes, and held crude harpoons or wooden clubs. They were gathered around something splashing in the shallow water, making mrglglglgl. Excited cries. Murlocs. He instinctively wanted to detour, but the orc's roars and the sounds of trees being snapped were getting closer. The greenskin monster was about to catch up. Warning. New threat cluster detected ahead. Murloc scouts LV-23-X4. Status excited, possibly dividing spoils. Rear threat orc raider LV-5, distance 120 meters. Status berserk, movement speed medium, affected by foot injury. Suggestion: use the environment to create chaos. Murlocs are extremely sensitive to noise and bright light. The system gave an extremely dangerous hint. Use the environment. Create chaos. Lu Ren looked at the group of Murlocs excitedly shouting around their spoils, possibly a big fish, then glanced at the orc pursuer getting closer, and a crazy plan instantly formed in his mind. Though risky, it was his only chance. Lu Ren took a deep breath, using his last ounce of strength, and shouted toward the Murlocs at the shoal as loudly as he could, while frantically, mentally commanding the system. Hey, you little fish spawns. Look here, he shouted, pointing behind him in the direction of the pursuing orc. There's a big green dummy. It said you Murlocs are scale-covered weaklings, only fit to be its bait. It also wants to crush all your eggs, steal all your fish. MRGLGLGLGL. He imitated the Murloc's call, trying to enhance the taunt. Skill taunt group guidance version activated. Mental overload warning. The system's voice had a hint of surprise. A more intense, wider range provoking energy spread from Lu Ren, precisely enveloping the 4 Murloc scouts. The Murlocs, who had been excitedly gathered around the spoils, suddenly froze in unison. Their protruding large eyes slowly, with incredulous fury, turned toward the direction Lu Ren was pointing, just in time to see the massive green figure, limping face twisted with rage, waving its fists, the axe still stuck in the mud from before, charging toward them. MRGLRGLRLGL. Translation: Damn greenskin scum. How dare you insult the noble Murlocs? GRMLMLMLM. Translation: Protect the eggs. Kill it. The piercing, furious Murloc screeches instantly drowned out Lu Ren's voice. The 4 Murloc scouts instantly abandoned their prey, raised their harpoons and wooden clubs, and with comical but not slow steps charged at the orc with indomitable momentum, like 4 green water arrows howling as they pounced. Seeing this opportunity, Lu Ren used his last bit of strength to dive into a dense, low purple bush beside the path that emitted a strange odor, holding his breath to completely conceal himself. He panted heavily, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would shatter his ribs. He carefully parted a small gap in the foliage and nervously looked toward the small shoal battlefield. An utterly absurd skirmish erupted instantly. 4 fearless Murloc scouts wielding crude weapons furiously besieged the food-injured, enraged orc raider. Harpoons clanged against the orc's thick leather armor, wooden clubs struck its muscular arms like tickling, but they were numerous, agile, and targeted its lower body, especially the injured foot, while constantly emitting sharp noises that drove the orc even more berserk. The orc roared repeatedly, each swing of its massive fists bringing a whistling wind, but the Murlocs were slippery, always dodging at the last moment. It tried to stomp these annoying little creatures, but the injured toe sent a piercing pain with any effort, severely distorting its movements. The scene was a chaotic mess, with mud splashes, Murloc slime, and orc roars all mixed together. Fight! Fight hard! Hopefully they kill each other. Lu Ren hid in the bush, covering his mouth, praying nervously with a hint of schadenfreude. However, the orc was a high-level monster after all. After the initial chaos and disadvantage from its foot injury, it gradually adapted to the Murloc's attack rhythm. It suddenly grabbed a Murloc that had jumped up to poke its eyes, its muscular thick arm erupting with terrifying power. MRGL. The Murloc let out a short, shrill scream. Crack. A clear, teeth-grinding sound of bone breaking. The poor Murloc scout was directly crushed by the orc's single hand. Green, viscous blood and bits of internal organs splattered from the orc's fingers. The remaining 3 Murlocs seemed shocked by their comrades' gruesome death, their movements faltering slightly. The orc flung the limp Murloc corpse away like a rag, its yellow beast eyes becoming even more crimson and ferocious from the kill. It panted heavily, though its foot injury limited it. Its fierce aura was even more terrifying. Its murky gaze swept over the remaining 3 cowering Murlocs, then suddenly turned toward the purple bush where Lu Ren was hiding. It hadn't forgotten. The instigator of it all. That damned little bug. Even across dozens of meters and the chaotic battlefield, Lu Ren still felt that murderous, venomous gaze pierce through the bush and nail itself onto him. The orc let out a low, thunderous growl from its throat, dragging its injured foot, ignoring the remaining Murloc's harassment, step by step, steadily and slowly advancing toward the bush. With each step, the ground seemed to tremble slightly. Lu Ren's heart sank to the bottom. Cold sweat soaked his tattered clothes. It's over. Even this couldn't kill it. Despair overwhelmed him again. He collapsed in the bush, feeling as if all strength had been drained, unable to even move a finger. The earlier frantic sprint and 2 force skill uses, especially the group taunt, had completely drained his already weakened body and mind. His vision began to darken, and the system's warning sounds became indistinct. Warning. User on the verge of unconsciousness. Mental energy severely depleted. Threat approaching. Distance 50 meters. 40 meters. Available options. None. Initiating emergency protocol. Deep sleep recovery. Force start. 3. 2. No. Can't sleep. If he slept, he was truly dead. Lu Ren used his last shred of willpower to resist the overwhelming drowsiness, staring fixedly at the massive shadow drawing closer. The orc's ferocious face was clearly visible in the dim light, its fangs still stained with the Murloc's green blood. In this desperate moment at the brink of life and death, whoosh, 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 several sharp whistling sounds suddenly rang out. 3 arrows gleaming with cold light shot out like venomous snakes from the woods behind the bush where Lu Ren was hiding. They struck precisely in the path of the orc, forming a triangular pattern deeply embedded in the ground, their fletchings still quivering. A resonant, authoritative, and wary middle-aged male voice rang out with a commanding tone. Halt, filthy green-skinned beast. This is Elwyn Forest, territory of the human kingdom. Drop your weapons and surrender. Otherwise the next arrow will pierce your throat. The 3 arrows, like warnings, embedded themselves before the orc, followed by a stern rebuke that sounded like heavenly music, instantly dispelling the shadow of death that loomed over Lu Run and the drowsiness that had nearly consumed him. The massive orc raider abruptly halted, its crimson beastly eyes turning warily toward the direction of the arrows, a low growl rumbling from its throat. It clearly recognized the arrow's standard issue human military equipment, and from the sound of it, there might be more than one person. Growl. The orc, its bloodshot eyes filled with reluctance, glared at the bush where Lu Rin was hiding, then at the corpse of the Murloc on the ground, and the 3 remaining Murloc scouts who cowered but still eyed him hungrily. The excruciating pain in its toes, the exhaustion, and the sudden threat of armed humans put pressure on the bloodthirsty beast. It let out a furious, venomous roar, hesitated, no longer spun around, and with its injured foot plunged into the dense forest from which it came, its heavy footsteps and the snapping of branches quickly fading. Safe was I saved. Lu Ren's taut nerves suddenly relaxed, and the willpower that had sustained him vanished like a popped balloon. The system's cold prompt echoed, as if from a far external threat eliminated. Forced deep sleep recovery initiated. Cannot resist. Before his eyes, everything sank into a warm, reassuring darkness. He didn't even get to see his savior's face before losing consciousness completely. After an unknown period, Lu Run regained a vague awareness amid jolts and noise. He felt as if he'd been stuffed into a shaking box lying on a hard wooden board. Every jolt made his battered body protest silently. His ears were filled with the clatter of metal armor, heavy footsteps, and a rough male voice complaining. Captain, this kid looks like a refugee. Skinny, small, not even a decent wound, just dirty. Is he really worth carrying back? I think he just fainted from fear. That green-skinned beast must have run off because of us. Shut up, guard. Another steady, authoritative voice spoke. The one who had driven off the orc earlier. His very presence there is strange. In the heart of Elwyn Forest, a human in strange clothes, unarmed, being chased by an orc, and stirring up murlocs. There might be a horde plot behind this. Carry him steadily, don't jostle him. He's important evidence, and trouble. Yes, Captain. The one called guard muttered, clearly unconvinced. Lu Rin struggled to open his heavy eyelids. His blurred vision gradually cleared. He was lying on a crude wooden cart padded with some straw. The cart was pulled by 2 equally tired brown draft horses moving along a relatively wide, hard-packed dirt road. The road was no longer flanked by the dense primeval forest, but by sparser oaks and maples with sunlight dappling through the leaves. The air smelled of horse sweat, earth, and the scent of cooking smoke. He slowly turned his stiff neck and saw several soldiers in chainmail wearing blue surcoats with a griffin emblem, carrying spears or swords, walking before and after the cart. They looked tired but alert. These were the ones who had saved him. The tall, middle-aged man with a neatly trimmed beard and sharp eagle-like eyes walking at the front must be the captain. Cough, cough. Lu Rin tried to speak, but his throat was parched, only managing a raspy cough. Hey, awake. A burly young soldier with a shallow scar on his face guard leaned, in his tone a mix of surprise and impatience. Kid, you're lucky. One more step, and you'd have been the orc's dinner. So where are you from? How did you get so deep into the forest? And why did you provoke an orc? Guard. The captain turned and scolded. Let him catch his breath. We're almost at Gold's Hire. Hand him over to Marshal Mares. Gold's Hire. Lu Ren's heart jolted. This really was Azeroth. The starting zone. He struggled to sit up, but the pain and weakness in his body made it impossible. Don't move. Guard roughly pressed his shoulder, making Lu Rin wince. You're as weak as a woman. Save your strength. Lu Rin had to give up, lying on the cart, staring at the sky, feeling the rhythm of the jolts. The system's interface hovered silently in the corner of his vision, the status bar still showing weakness, deep recovery. He tried to mentally open the map module. Map module loading. Detected entry into human settlement range. Unlocked Gold's Hire partial. On the screen, a small area lit up from the pitch-black darkness. A clear icon of a building labeled Lion's Pride Inn appeared at the center of his vision, surrounded by faint marks for blacksmith, general store, garrison, etc. A dotted line representing his current route stretched toward the inn. Finally, I'm here. A complex wave of emotions surged through him. Relief at surviving, anxiety about the unknown, and a strange sense of belonging at finally entering the starting zone. The cart turned a corner, and a peaceful town appeared before him. Low but sturdy wooden stone houses lined the road, their roofs covered with dark brown thatch or red tiles. Chimneys puffed out cooking smoke, and the air was filled with the sweet smell of baking bread and the rich aroma of stew. There were few pedestrians, mostly farmers or craftsmen in coarse linen, occasionally a hunter in leather armor passing by. A few brightly colored chickens pecked leisurely by the roadside, and the sound of a blacksmith's hammer echoed from afar. Everything exuded the serene atmosphere of a medieval countryside, a stark contrast to the forest's danger. Lu Rin greedily breathed in the air filled with the scent of daily life, and his tense nerves finally completely relaxed. The cart stopped in front of the largest building in the town center. a two-story wooden house with a prominent sign of a drinking mug. The sign showed a majestic golden griffin with the words Lion's Pride written in common below. At the inn's entrance, a middle-aged man in a fine silk vest with a slight paunch and a neatly trimmed mustache rubbed his hands together and approached with a professional warm smile. The innkeeper, Old John. Oh, Honorable Captain Blake. Heart Patrol. Old John's eyes swept over the disheveled Lou Run on the cart, his smile faltering for a moment before quickly returning. And this is a special guest we picked up in the forest, John. Captain Blake dismounted nimbly, dusted himself off, and gestured at Lou Run. Strange clothes, found unconscious by a creek, being chased by an orc raider. No obvious injuries, just collapsed. I'll leave him to you. Get him some food, find a place to stay. When he's recovered, Marshal Mares will question him. An orc? In the heart of Elwyn Forest. Old John gasped, his mustache trembling. His eyes darted toward Lou Ren with suspicion and unease. All right, Captain. Leave it to me. Guard, give me a hand. Carry this, guest inside. With guards' reluctant grumbling and Old John's directions, two soldiers carried Lou Run like a sack into the warm, noisy inn hall. A strong smell of ale, roasted meat, tobacco, and sweat hit him. The hall was dimly lit with a roaring fire and the fireplace crackling. Several heavy wooden tables were surrounded by a diverse crowd, leather-armored adventurers, boasting loudly, dust-covered merchants murmuring about business, farmers silently drinking cheap ale. The noise of conversation, clinking mugs, and waiters' shouts blended into a lively atmosphere. Lou Ren's appearance instantly drew everyone's attention. He was placed on an empty bench near the fireplace. His tattered plaid shirt was caked with mud and grass, his jeans torn in several places, his canvas shoes barely recognizable, and his face streaked with dirt. He looked like he'd crawled out of a dumpster. In this relatively clean environment, he seemed like a savage who had stumbled into civilization. Whoa, Old John, where did you dig up this treasure? A burly dwarf warrior with a thick beard and a massive two-handed axe on his back roared, taking a big gulp of ale. Look at those skinny arms and legs. Can't even beat a rabbit, huh? How did he survive this long? A human female rogue in tight leather armor with a fiery figure but sharp eyes twirled a dagger and openly scrutinized Lou Ren with disdain. Tisk, that fabric. Never seen it before, but it's really ragged. A plump man in a silk robe who looked like a merchant shook his head. Curious, mocking, and contemptuous gazes focused on Lou Ren like spotlights, making him feel extremely uncomfortable, his face burning. His social anxiety as a corporate drone was amplified in this otherworldly inn. Go on. Mind your own business. Old John waved off the curious onlookers, then forced a smile at Lou Ren. Don't mind them, guest. Rest here. I'll have the kitchen bring you some hot food and a basin of hot water to wash your face. He turned to a sharp-looking young waiter, Tom. Quick, get this, sir, an special with extra meat. And a basin of hot water. Right away, boss. Tom the waiter stared curiously at Lou Ren. Lou Ren glanced over and scurried toward the back kitchen. Soon a large mug of frothy, richly malt-scented beer, a heaping plate piled high with thick, gravy-drenched stew and potatoes, and a hefty slice of dark rye bread were set on the table before Lou Ren. The aroma of the food violently assaulted Lou Ren's famished nerves, making him involuntarily swallow. Meanwhile, a basin of warm water and a clean, coarse cloth towel were placed beside him. Take your time, call if you need more. Tom set down the items and cast a few extra glances at Lou Ren before leaving. Lou Ren, disregarding any pretense or the stares of others, let his overwhelming hunger conquer all. He practically lunged at the food, grabbing a spoon and wolfing it down ravenously. The coarse dark rye bread scraped his throat, and the stew carried a spice he'd never tasted, but at that moment it was all divine. The scalding food flowed down, sending a surge of warmth through his body, dispelling the chill and weakness. Though bitter, the ale greatly quenched his thirst. High-energy food intake detected. Physical recovery accelerating. Mental state stabilizing. Spirit recovery in progress. The system gave positive feedback. Just as Lou Ren was burying himself in the meal, greasy-lipped, a voice brimming with curiosity and inquiry sounded beside him. Hey, mate, where are you from? That outfit of yours sure is something special. Lou Ren looked up, nearly choking. A brown-haired lad about 17 or 18, wearing a faded linen shirt and a brown leather vest with a few freckles on his face, had somehow settled onto the bench next to him. He blinked, his knowledge-hungry eyes staring intently at Lou Ren. Lou Ren was at a loss. Say he was a time traveler. He'd probably be bound and burned as a madman or heretic. I'm Pete, light whisper. The lad introduced himself, quite forward. I'm the town's apprentice, learning smithing from Uncle Frank Iron. I heard Uncle John say you were chased by orcs. My God, is that true? Can you tell me in detail? What did the orc look like? Was it especially fierce? How did you escape? And I heard you even lured in some murlocs. That's so thrilling. The lad fired off questions, his face brimming with longing for adventure. Lou Ren felt his head spinning. Seeing the lad's sincere, eager eyes, he couldn't bring himself to outright refuse. While chewing vigorously, he mumbled vaguely in response. Well, it was pretty fierce. Lucky. Ran fast. Lucky. Pete was clearly unsatisfied with that answer. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice mysteriously. Mate, don't fool me. I heard Guard and the others muttering that you used some weird magic. Smashed the orc's toes. With a black, glowing little box. What was that? A gnome's new invention. Or some lost ancient artifact. Lu Ren's heart skipped a beat. The phone. The orc had seen it, and the soldiers had seen the wreckage. He instinctively patted his empty pocket, a chill running down his spine. If someone with ill intent got wind of that thing. Warning. User's possession of otherworldly artifact may be leaked. Potential risk exists. The system also issued a timely warning. No, you saw wrong. It was just a stone. Yeah, an ordinary stone. Lu Ren quickly denied, his voice flustered. What magic do I know? I'm just a lost, unlucky bloke. A stone. Pete looked at him skeptically. Guard said it shattered into pieces with tiny glowing wires and weird little squares inside. You saw wrong. Definitely saw wrong. Lu Ren raised his voice, drawing curious glances from nearby tables. He quickly lowered his head, shoveling stew into his mouth, mumbling, I don't know anything. I'm full. Thanks for the meal. He just wanted to end this dangerous conversation. Old John approached at the right moment, holding a brass key, a shrewd merchant's smile on his face, perfectly easing the tension. Guest finished eating. Your room upstairs is ready, the one at the end of the second floor. Quiet. Hot water will be sent up shortly. Rest well. He handed the key to Lu Ren, then turned stern to Pete. Pete, don't disturb the guest. Uncle Frank Iron is looking for you everywhere. Have you finished today's iron billets? Pete shrank his neck, clearly a bit afraid of the blacksmith uncle, but reluctantly gave Lu Ren one more glance before getting up with a scowl. All right. Mate, when you've rested you must tell me about your adventure. I mean, your lost experience. With that he left the inn, looking back every few steps. Lu Ren breathed a sigh of relief, taking the key as if it were a lifeline. Thank you, boss. Just call me Old John. Old John chuckled. The room and meal. Captain Black said to put it on the guardhouse's tab. We'll settle after Magistrate Marius's questioning. Rest easy. Guided by Old John, Lu Ren dragged his still weary, but somewhat recovered body up the creaky wooden stairs to the corner room on the second floor. The room was small but clean. A wooden bed with thick linen sheets, a small wooden table, a chair, and a simple washstand. A small half-open window offered a view of the stable corner in the inn's backyard, the setting sun's glow coating everything in a warm golden hue. The air carried the faint scent of wood and hay. An unprecedented sense of safety and exhaustion washed over him simultaneously. Lu Ren locked the door, though the latch looked flimsy, walked to the bed, and collapsed heavily into the soft bedding, almost moaning with comfort. Finally, temporarily safe, he closed his eyes, feeling the ache in his body and the fatigue in his spirit. The day's events, brief as they were, had been more thrilling and perilous than his past 20-plus years combined. Gnolls, orcs, murlocs, guards, innkeepers, curious lads. The world of Azeroth unfolded before him in a brutally vivid manner. With a thought, he summoned the system interface. Azeroth Survival Assist System Beta 1.0. User Lu Ren. Status: mild weakness, recovering. Occupation: unemployed. Myriad Weaver. Inactive skills: Arcane Throw, Valiant version. Temporary cooldown ready. Taunt Warrior. Basic proficiency. Beginner cooldown ready. Map: Gold's higher. Partially unlocked. Quest: survive. In progress. New tip: user has initially integrated into a human society node. Gold share. Reputation System Beta activated. Reputation System. Lu Ren curiously clicked on the new option with his mind. A list unfolded. Gold's higher. Residence: neutral 0-100. Note: they are curious and mildly wary of your eccentric attire and origins. Stormwind Guard. Gold shear detachment neutral 50-100. Note: Captain Black considers you a troublesome but valuable lead. Guard thinks you're a burden. Old John Lyons. Pride and friendly 10100. Note: merchant nature keeps him friendly to a guest whose bill is paid by the guardhouse. Pete Light Whisper. Gold shear blacksmith apprentice friendly 15100. Note: the lad feels an admiring curiosity toward an adventurer. Magistrate Marius unknown. Note: a key figure to be met soon. Reputation System. That's a common game mechanic. It seems interpersonal relationships are important in this world too. Lu Ren silently noted. He then opened the skill panel, looking at those two life-saving yet frustrating skills with mixed emotions. Arcane Throw Valiant version was still temporary while Taunt had stabilized. He tried to sense the grayed out occupation option, labeled Myriad Weaver inactive. Scanning activation conditions for composite occupation. Myriad Weaver. Basic condition: master at least 3 core skills from different class systems. Current warrior: taunt, mage, arcane, missile, temporary fusion, medium. Progress 23. Special condition: obtain a weaving opportunity, successfully fuse energies from different systems in a life or death crisis, altering the tide of battle. Achieved. Warning: official activation will be accompanied by an energy baptism and mental shock. Current environment: safety unknown. User status: not optimal. It is recommended to find a safe location. Activate now. Yes, no. The system presented a momentous choice accompanied by a red warning. Activate the occupation and become a true Myriad Weaver. Lu Ren's heart pounded. This was undoubtedly a crucial step toward becoming stronger. But the system's warning also made him cautious. An energy baptism. Mental shock. Here in this unfamiliar room with the magistrate still waiting to question him. What if he caused a big commotion? He hesitated, staring at the tempting yes option, then at the simple room and fragile lock. Just then a clear, steady footstep approached, stopping outside his door. Knock, knock, knock. 3 measured raps sounded, carrying an official sternness. A low, serious voice came through the door, one he hadn't heard in the inn's main hall. Guest inside, I am the magistrate of Goldshear, Marius Stormman. Regarding your encounter in Elwyn Forest, I have a few questions that need your cooperation. Please open the door. The thin wooden door seemed to transform into a 1,000-pound steel barrier in an instant, cutting off the deep, solemn voice of the town marshal Marius outside, yet pouring double the invisible pressure into this cramped-in room. Lu Ren's heart was hammering so violently it felt like it would leap out of his throat. Activate the profession. Energy baptism. Spiritual shock. At this critical juncture. What a joke. He had no doubt that if he clicked yes, now the next second this fragile room would be blown to pieces by the uncontrolled energy. And then he would be taken down on the spot as a dangerous heretic or a runaway magical experiment, or even executed summarily. User choice no. Lu Ren mentally roared this choice, swiftly closing the system interface. The gray profession option vanished instantly, but the lingering allure and throbbing sensation remained deep in his heart. Phew. He let out a long sigh, forcing himself to calm down. Now was not the time to think about this. The marshal named Marius outside the door was the imminent trouble. He quickly sorted his thoughts. Unknown origin, disheveled attire, chased by orcs, and suspected of using strange magic. A phone wreckage. This looked like the standard profile of a spy, a heretic, or a troublemaker. The marshal's interrogation was definitely a trap. What to do? Tell the truth. A transmigrator. A system. A golden finger. He would probably be taken for a madman and locked up in an asylum or tied to the stake. Lie. Fabricate an identity. He only knew the geography, history, and customs of Azeroth from the game's surface, which wouldn't withstand a thorough questioning. One wrong detail could spell doom. Lu Ren felt his CPU brain was about to burn out. His white-collar crisis management experience seemed utterly feeble in the face of this otherworldly political interrogation. Thud, thud, thud. The knock came again, heavier than before, with an unmistakable note of impatience. Guest, please open the door and cooperate with the investigation. Marius' voice remained steady, but the pressure was stronger. Coming. Hold on. Lu Ren hurriedly replied, his voice slightly distorted from tension. He scrambled off the bed, rushed to the washstand, splashed some cold water from the basin on his face to appear more alert, and rubbed his cheeks vigorously to bring some color to his pale complexion. He glanced down at his beggar-like clothes and realized with despair that this only made him look more suspicious, but there was no help for it now. Taking a deep breath, Lu Ren walked to the door, pulled out the flimsy wooden latch, and slowly opened it. Outside stood a tall, sturdy, middle-aged man, wearing a crisp Stormwind standard leather armor and a deep blue cloak. He had neatly trimmed brown hair and a short beard, a chiseled, resolute face, and sharp gray eyes as piercing as an eagle's, seeming to see through a person's soul. At his waist hung a simple but well-maintained longsword, his right hand resting naturally on the pommel. He exuded an aura of seasoned, battle-hardened authority. This was Marshal Marius Stormman. Behind him stood 2 fully armed guards, one of whom was Guard, who had earlier complained about Lu Ren being a burden. Guard crossed his arms, looking impatiently up and down at Lu Ren, his eyes filled with scrutiny and suspicion. Lu Ren. Marius' gaze fell calmly on Lu Ren. Not hostile, but carrying a weight that made Lu Ren feel completely exposed. Yes. It's me, Marshal. Lu Ren forced his voice to stay steady, bowed slightly, and tried to appear. I am Marshal Marius Stormman of Goldshear. Marius nodded slightly in return. Captain Black has given a preliminary report on your encounter in the Elwyn Forest. But I need to verify some details with you in person. May I come in? His tone was a question, but his eyes made it clear it was not a request. Of course. Please come in. Lu Ren quickly stepped aside, his heart pounding. The room was tiny, and with 3 armed men inside, the space became even more cramped and oppressive. Marius walked to the center of the room and slowly glanced around the sparse furnishings. Guard and the other guard stood one on each side of the door, subtly blocking Lu Ren's retreat. Sit. Marius pointed to the only chair in the room, then walked to the window, his back to Lu Ren, looking out at the fading twilight and the lanterns lit in the inn's backyard, as if trying to create a less tense atmosphere. Lu Ren cautiously sat on the hard wooden chair, feeling as if he were sitting on a bed of nails. Mr. Lu Ren. Marius turned around, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on Lu Ren again. Captain Black said they found you unconscious by a forest stream, being chased by an orc raider. Can you tell me in detail how you ended up in that forest, and what happened when you encountered the orc? The core question. Lu Ren's palms began to sweat. He forced himself to meet Marius' scrutinizing gaze, his mind working at unprecedented speed. I can't recall much, Marshal. Lurin decided to use the oldest but hardest to disprove excuse: amnesia. He put on a pained and confused expression, rubbing his temples. I only remember waking up in that terrifying forest surrounded by huge trees I'd never seen. I was scared, hungry. And then I encountered a small monster with a candle on its head. A kobold, Marius interjected. Yes, a kobold, Lurin suddenly realized. It chased me. I ran for my life. Somehow, I picked up a stone and hit the candle on its head, and it ran away. He deliberately blurred the details of Arcane Throw. Later I walked along a stream trying to find a way out. And then I encountered that green giant. Lurin's face showed genuine fear. It was terrifying. It seemed to be eating something. And when it saw me, it charged. I was scared out of my wits and ran for my life. It chased me so closely. I don't know what happened. Maybe I was too scared. I picked up something and threw it at it. I think I hit its foot. Then it howled in pain. I took the chance to run, and later I met Murlocs. And then I blacked out. He attributed the orc's toe injury to his panicked luck, never mentioning the taunt skill or the phone. Marius listened silently, his gray eyes like deep pools betraying no emotion. He waited until Lurin finished, then spoke slowly. You said you can't recall how you got to the forest. No memory at all. Where is your hometown? Your family? I really can't remember. Lurin clutched his head in agony, his voice carrying a hint of appropriate sobbing, half acting, half genuine stress. My mind is blank. I only remember my name. Nothing else. It's as if something hit me. He hinted that a head injury might have caused the amnesia. User acting evaluation awkward, but barely passing. Target Marius trust 10 continuously declining. The system popped up an untimely sarcastic comment. Lurin. Internally screaming, shut up system. Don't expose me. Head injury. Marius raised an eyebrow slightly, his gaze sweeping over Lurin's relatively clean forehead and cheeks, where there were no obvious bruises. Captain Black reported that you had no visible external injuries. Maybe internal injuries. Lurin bluffed stubbornly. Or a mental shock. Marius made no comment, his gaze shifting to Lurin's out-of-place clothes, the fabric and style of your clothes. I've never seen anything like them. This doesn't seem to be from the Kingdom of Stormwind, or even any known region of the Eastern Kingdoms. Can you explain this? Lurin was at a loss. This was the biggest flaw. I don't know. I woke up wearing this. He could only continue to blame the amnesia. Marius was silent for a moment, the air in the room seeming to freeze. Guard let out an undisguised snicker at the door, clearly sneering at Lurin's amnesia story. Then one last question. Marius' voice remained steady, but Lurin felt a chill. Guard and the others found some peculiar fragments at the scene. He paused, his gray eyes sharp as knives, as if piercing through Lurin's disguise. A black hard block broken open to reveal extremely intricate non-metallic non-wooden structures inside, and some glowing threads. What was that? Captain Black said the orc's toe injury seemed to have been caused by that object. Where did you get it? The fatal blow. Lurin felt his back instantly soaked with cold sweat. The phone wreckage. This thing was impossible to explain. Any lie would be powerless against this concrete evidence. What to do? Lurin's mind went blank, his lips trembling, his face pale. Under Marius' all-seeing gaze and Guard's undisguised sneer, the immense pressure almost suffocated him. He could feel that his clumsy performance and flawed story had already exhausted the patience of this experienced marshal. Those gray eyes were rapidly turning from suspicion and vigilance into cold scrutiny. Detected user facing a major trust crisis. Potential threat level increased. Marshal Marius suspicion high alert. Suggested options: 1. Keep bluffing, success rate 1. 2. Confess everything, rot in jail. 3. Create chaos, seize the chance. Warning. Physical confrontation, success rate 0.01. The system presented 3 options, all leading to dead ends. Just as Lurin felt he was about to break down, and Marius seemed ready to wave the guards to take him away for further investigation. Bang. Crash. Suddenly a loud noise came from the inn's common room downstairs. The sound of a heavy object smashing on a table, followed by the sharp clatter of broken dishes and a woman's terrified scream. You bastard. You dare to spill my drink. A rough, savage male voice roared, drowning out the inn's usual din. He was the one who started groping. A tearful female voice retorted. Damn. Ungrateful wench. Brothers trash this place. Let this cheap inn know the consequences of offending the Defias Brotherhood. Another sinister voice rang out. Immediately more sounds of smashing, shouting, screaming, and overturned tables erupted from downstairs. Clearly a violent conflict had broken out in the inn's common room. And judging by the arrogant tone, it's the people from the Defias Brotherhood. This sudden turn of events instantly shattered the tense standoff in the room. Marius' face abruptly darkened, a cold gleam bursting in his eyes. Scum of Defias, how dare you cause trouble in Shanjin town? He whirled around and barked orders to the 2 guards. Guard Ramond, Follow me downstairs. Take control of the situation. Yes, sir. Guard and Ramond immediately straightened up their hands on their sword hilts, exuding murderous intent. Marius cast another glance at Lu Run, who was frozen stiff in his chair, his eyes complex and tinged with lingering suspicion. However, the urgent commotion downstairs clearly took higher priority. You? Stay here. Don't go anywhere. Wait for me to finish handling things downstairs. With these words, he stormed out of the room like a whirlwind, taking the two guards with him, their heavy footsteps thudding down the stairs. The door was pulled shut by Marius as he left, but not locked apparently. He thought Lu Rin neither dared nor could escape. In an instant, the room was left with only Lu Rin alone. He slumped into the chair, gasping for air, cold sweat trickling down his temples. In that moment, just now, he truly felt he was about to be arrested as a spy. The sounds of fighting roars and shattering from downstairs grew more intense, mingled with old John's frantic "You band of robbers. Guards. Lord Marius. Saved. For now." Lu Rin's heart throbbed with residual fear. But the look in Marius' eyes before he left told him this was far from over. After the downstairs situation was handled, he would still have to face a severe interrogation. Moreover, the Daifia Brotherhood members causing trouble. Could it affect the upstairs? Just as he had that thought, bang. Crack. The wooden door of his room was violently kicked open from outside. The frail lock and latch snapped with the impact. A tall, thin man in a filthy leather armor with a hideous scar across his face and vicious eyes burst. He carried a short-handled axe stained with wine and wood shavings, clearly one of the Daifia members causing trouble downstairs. Behind him followed a similarly disreputable accomplice holding a dagger. Damn, there really is someone up here. This shabby and has quite a bit of loot. The scar-faced man grinned lecherously, his gaze greedily sweeping over Lu Rin and the shabby room, eventually settling disappointedly on Lu Rin's ragged clothes. Huh. So he's a pauper. What kind of rags is he wearing? Bad luck. Boss, this kid has delicate skin, doesn't look like a local. Maybe he's hiding something valuable on him. Catch him and sell him to the goblins. The dagger-wielding thug eyed Lu Rin maliciously, licking his lips. Lu Rin's heart instantly sank to the bottom. Just after sending away one demon, another plague god arrives. And two armed thugs at that. He instinctively sprang from the chair and backed away repeatedly until his back hit the cold wall, with nowhere left to retreat. You? What do you want? Lu Rin's voice trembled with fear. What do we want? The scar-faced man brandished his axe, stepping closer with a Catan mouse smirk on his face. Kid, you've run into the Daifia brothers on business. If you're smart, hand over all your valuables. Then come quietly with us. Otherwise. He raised his axe, the threat unmistakable. The other thug also grinned viciously, blocking the doorway, his dagger glinting coldly in the dim light. It's over. Trapped between wolves and tigers. Lu Rin despaired. Marius and his men must be pinned down by other Daifia members downstairs. No help to be had. Rely on himself. Unarmed against two armed thugs. Detected imminent threat. Daifia thugs, LV3, X2. Available skills: Arcane Throw, Valiant version, cooldown complete, taunt cooldown complete. Warning: the room is cramped, selection of thrown objects is limited. Taunt may enrage the target, leading to instant death. New tip: the core feature of the hybrid class Myriad Weaver, chaotic energy perception, has been passively activated. Detected ambient arcane energy, weak and faint natural energy within the wooden structures, chairs, table, bed. Suggested attempt: use mental guidance of energy to perform preliminary weaving manipulation. Risk: extremely high mental energy not fully recovered. Effect unknown. The system at this critical moment offered an extremely bold and unreliable suggestion. Mental guidance. Weaving manipulation. Lu Rin looked at the scar-faced man pressing closer and the gleaming axe in his hand, then glanced at the only weapon in the room. The hard wooden chair he had just been sitting on. He might as well try anything. Valuables. Yes, I have them. Lu Rin suddenly forced an extremely fawning smile onto his face, leaning slightly forward while his right hand was hidden behind his back, fingers spread. With all his mental strength, he frantically tried to communicate with the so-called ambient energy from the system prompt in. That chair. Oh, where? Hurry up and take it out. The scar-faced man's eyes lit up and he paused. It's right behind you. Lu Rin suddenly pointed at the empty corner behind the scar-faced man. Almost simultaneously. Taunt. Activate. Lu Rin roared in his mind. A powerful mental wave of extreme contempt and insult instantly enveloped the scar-faced man. The scar-faced man was startled by Lu Rin's finger and the sudden mental contamination, instinctively turning his head slightly to look behind him. In that lightning flash moment when his attention was diverted, a faint but tangible chaotic energy, mixed with pale purple arcane light and pale green natural aura under the frantic drive of Lu Rin's will, coiled around that hard wooden chair like invisible tentacles. Get up, damn it. Lu Rin roared in his heart, using all his strength to mentally lift that chair. The heavy hard wooden chair let out a groan of strain and actually began to wobble, and float in midair, defying the laws of physics. About 10 centimeters off the ground. What the hell? The thug blocking the door, seeing this unnatural sight, was so frightened his eyes nearly popped out. The scar-faced man also whirled around just in time to see the floating chair. Magic! The scar-faced man's face instantly drained of blood. These low-level Daifia thugs feared nothing more than the mysterious mage lords. Now is the time. Lu Ren focused all his mental energy, using his will to control the floating chair, and fiercely pushed it toward the scar-faced man. There was only one thought in his mind: smash. However, he severely overestimated his control over this newfound power. The chair did not shoot toward the scar-faced man like a cannonball as he wished. Instead, it wobbled violently in the air, then like a drunkard veered and spun, slamming at an extremely awkward angle toward the scar-faced man's cheek. Smack! Clatter! A crisp, loud sound like a slap exploded in the room. The scar-faced man was struck solidly on his left cheek by this heavy chair's lap. The immense force combined with the weight of the chair sent him spinning 360 degrees on the spot. Several bloody teeth mixed with saliva sprayed out. The axe in his hand clattered to the ground. His vision filled with stars, the world spinning, he collapsed with a thud and passed out cold. The thug blocking the door was completely dumbfounded. He stared blankly as his boss was knocked out by a flying chair's slap. This was beyond the comprehension of his limited mind. Demon. He's a demon. The thug let out a terrified scream, abandoning all thoughts of mission and comrades, scrambling to turn and flee the room. Lu Ren was also stunned. He looked at the unconscious scar-faced man on the floor, and the shattered chair. The impact had been so strong that 2 of the chair legs had broken, then, at his own slightly trembling hand. Was that solved? The power of the myriad weaver. Though the method was extremely bizarre and comical, but he had no time to think. The fleeing thug had seen his secret. He must stop him. Stop! Lu Ren shouted instinctively while again focusing his mind to mentally grab the scattered broken chair legs in the room. This time, perhaps due to his previous experience or a burst of potential under crisis, he felt his control was a bit smoother. 2 broken hard wooden chair legs wrapped in faint chaotic energy wobbled, but floated up more quickly like 2 short spears controlled by an invisible hand. Shoot! Lu Ren's mind moved. Whoosh! Whoosh! The 2 wooden legs shot through the air, accurately aimed at the thug who had already reached the door and was frantically trying to pull the latch. Shoot! Lu Ren's mind moved. Whoosh! Whoosh! The 2 wooden legs shot through the air, accurately aimed at the thug who had already reached the door and was frantically trying to. The excruciating pain instantly made the thug lose his balance, banging his head against the door panel with a dull thud. Then, clutching his bleeding wrist and throbbing rear, he curled up on the ground, shrieking, incapacitated. The room fell silent in an instant. Only the sounds remained: 1 thug unconscious, the other whimpering, and Lu Ren's own heavy breathing like a bellows. He looked at the chaotic room, the unconscious scar-faced man, the wailing thug, the shattered chair, and his own ragged clothes. Myriad Weaver formal activation progress 1. First weaving manipulation telekinetic control completed. Effect evaluation comical but effective. Mental energy consumption 70. User on the verge of secondary depletion. The system provided its assessment. Lu Ren leaned against the wall, slowly sliding down to sit on the floor, completely drained, not wanting to move a finger. Too thrilling. Too exhausting. However, before he could catch his breath, thump, 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 thump. A series of urgent, heavy footsteps came from the stairs, again, rapidly approaching. It was Marius. He had dealt with the commotion downstairs and was coming up. Lu Ren looked at the thug writhing and screaming at the doorway, then at the unconscious scar-faced man and the shattered chair on the floor, and his own obvious state of having just fought. Suspense. The door was shoved open violently. Marius' tall figure appeared at the door. His leather armor was stained with some wine, and with shavings, his face grim. Clearly the fight downstairs had not been easy. His sharp gray eyes, like searchlights, instantly swept over the messy scene in the room. 2 incapacitated Daifia members, the shattered chair, broken wooden legs. And Lu Ren slumped in the corner, pale, gasping, but with a hint of strange energy fluctuation still lingering in his eyes. Marius' pupils contracted sharply. His hand on the sword hilt tightened instantly. Behind him, Guard and Ramond also gasped in shock, staring in disbelief at the scene before them. This? Did you do this? Marius' voice was terrifyingly low, filled with unprecedented shock and deeper suspicion. He stared fixedly at Lu Ren as if looking at a monster in human skin. Time seemed to freeze in the weighty silence of martial Marius' interrogation. The room was a mess, with the groans of 2 Defias thugs as the only background noise. Marius' sharp gray eyes, like 2 cold scalpels, were fixed on Lu Ren, who was slumped in the corner. His gaze was a mixture of shock, scrutiny, vigilance, and a complex emotion that Lu Ren could not decipher. Guard and Raymond behind him were on high alert, their hands already on their sword hilts, ready to take down this dangerous element at Marius' command. Lu Ren's heart seemed to be gripped by an invisible hand, almost stopping. The dizziness from exhaustion and mental strain surged like a tide, but he knew he must not fall now. He had to explain. Otherwise his newly activated weaver career might end in the prison of Shanjin Town or on the gallows. It's them. Lu Ren raised his hand with all his strength, pointing at the unconscious Scarface and the screaming thug on the ground. His voice was hoarse, but filled with urgent justification. They kicked in the door. Wanted to rob me. And tried to take me away. I was just defending myself. He tried to make his eyes look innocent and terrified. I don't know what happened. I was too scared. That chair. It flew by itself. Really. Like a frightened wild horse crashing around. He never mentioned weaver or telekinesis, attributing everything to extreme fear and accident. Though this explanation was bizarre in a world of magic and monsters like Azeroth, it was not entirely impossible for an ordinary person pushed to the brink to unleash some accidental magical power. Especially with Lu Ren's pale face and feeble breath, he looked exactly like an apprentice mage suffering from mental exhaustion. Marius said nothing but slowly paced to the broken chair, crouched down, and carefully examined the fractured. His fingers brushed over the splinters, his brow furrowed. He then looked at the clear, almost embedded chair leg imprint on Scarface's unconscious face, and the wooden splinters stuck in the thug's wrist and buttocks, before finally turning his gaze back to Lu Ren. Self-defense. Marius' voice was unreadable. With a chair. You defeated two armed Defias thugs. One of them is Bone Crusher Mori. He pointed at the unconscious Scarface, a tough guy even in the Brotherhood. Lu Ren's heart was in his throat. He could only force himself to nod, his eyes filled with a bewildered and helpless, I don't know what happened look. The system's sarcastic evaluation popped up again. Marius was silent for a moment, as if weighing the pros and cons. From downstairs came the faint noise of old John directing the crew to clean up, along with the groans of the injured guards. Clearly, though the Defias attack had been suppressed, it had caused damage and panic in Shanjin Town. A mysterious person with seemingly unstable magical power who had just helped repel the Defias thugs. Locking him up directly didn't seem the best option, especially when the town's forces were weakened. Guard Raymond Marius finally spoke, his voice returning to its usual calm. Drag these Defias scum to the dungeon and keep a close watch. Pry their mouths open and find out the purpose of this attack and their accomplices. Yes, sir. Although guard shot Lu Ren a reluctant glare, he and Raymond roughly dragged out the unconscious Mori and the screaming thug, leaving two messy drag marks and a few bloodstains on the floor. Only Marius and Lu Ren remained in the room. The atmosphere was still heavy. Marius walked to the window, looking out at the scattered lights of Shanjin Town in the night. With his back to Lu Ren, he said slowly, Mr. Lu Ren, your origin and your ability are full of mysteries. As a marshal, it is my duty to suspect you, even to arrest you. Lu Ren's heart sank again. However, Marius paused, turned around, and his gray eyes met Lu Ren's directly. Your actions tonight objectively helped to subdue the thugs who broke into the inn, preventing greater chaos and casualties. Moreover, the Defias Brotherhood is our common enemy. They lurk in Shibu Wilderness, threatening the heart of Baofeng Kingdom like a cancer, and even extending their reach into Erwin Forest. Just today they attacked our patrol and tried to create panic in Shanjin Town. Marius' tone was filled with deep hatred for the Defias. So he shifted his tone with an undeniable authority. I will give you a chance, and also give myself a chance to observe. Lu Ren jerked his head up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. You may stay in Shanjin Town for now, Marius said solemnly. But you must accept my supervision. Your range of movement is limited to the Lion's Pride Inn and its vicinity. Without my permission, you are not to leave the town limits. I will have someone watch your every move. At the same time, you must work for your food and lodging. Old John won't let you freeload forever. The garrison won't pay for the damage caused by your accidental magic either. He pointed at the broken chair and damaged door. Finally, Marius' gaze became extremely sharp. I need you to prove your value and goodwill towards Shanjin. The Defias threat is imminent. We need all the strength we can unite. If you truly want to establish yourself here, use your actions to dispel my doubts. Supervision, restricted freedom, working to pay off debts, and proving value. The conditions were harsh, but compared to being thrown into a dungeon or driven into the perilous forest, this was a huge turnaround. I understand. Thank you, Marshal. Lu Ren nodded without hesitation, his voice filled with gratitude for surviving the ordeal and a hint of urgency. I will follow the rules. I will work. I will prove myself. As long as he could stay, there was hope. Marius gave him a deep look as if searching for any trace of deception on his face, and finally nodded slightly. Remember your words. Tomorrow morning, go to the inn's kitchen and find old John. He will give you work. Take care. With that, he turned and strode out of the room, leaving behind a mess and a mentally exhausted Lu Ren. The door was closed again, though the lock was broken. Lu Ren leaned against the wall and let out a long sigh, feeling as if all the bones in his body. In just one night, he had experienced an orc chase, a marshal's interrogation, a Defias attack, activated his profession, and fought thugs with his mind. It had been more thrilling and draining than a year of 996 work. He struggled to crawl to the bed and collapsed into the relatively intact bedding, not even wanting to move a finger. The severe mental strain gave him a splitting headache and dark spots before his eyes. The system's prompt sound became weak as well. Lu-Ren didn't even have the energy to mock the system. He fell into a deep, dreamless sleep almost instantly. When Lu-Ren opened his eyes again, the glaring sunlight streamed in through the broken window, casting bright patches on the floor. From downstairs came the faint bustle of the inn, the chatter of guests, the shouts of waiters, the clinking of cups and plates, all filled with the breath of life. He felt his body still aching, but the mental fatigue had mostly faded and the headache had eased. Hunger, like a waking beast, began to roar fiercely. World Quest. Lu-Ren curiously opened the new prompt. Indeed, the gamified quest system had come online. This immediately gave Lu-Ren's chaotic life in this foreign world a clear sense of direction. Working to pay off debts was the basis of survival, raising reputation was the foundation for establishing a foothold, and resolving the Defias threat was both an opportunity to prove his value and a guarantee for his main quest of survival. Gurgle. His stomach protested strongly again. Lu-Ren struggled to get up, splashed cold water from the basin on his face again, straightened his even more tattered clothes. The battle last night had added a few more tears, took a deep breath, and pushed open the creaky door. The inn's hall had returned to its usual bustle, though a faint smell of alcohol and burnt odor lingered. A few tables and chairs were clearly newly replaced or repaired, and there were still some wood shavings and water stains not completely cleaned from the floor. Many guests were talking about last night's attack, their eyes occasionally glancing at Lu-Ren as he descended the stairs, filled with curiosity and scrutiny. Steeling himself against the stairs, Lu-Ren crossed the hall, and following Marius' instructions, headed for the side door leading to the kitchen. Pushing aside the greasy curtain, a stronger wave of heat mixed with the odors of oil, stewed meat, spices, and baked bread rushed at him. The kitchen was spacious, but packed with stoves, chopping boards, piles of ingredients, and busy figures. The slightly plump old John stood in front of a huge soup pot, frowning as he stirred the bubbling contents with a long-handled ladle. He was sipping the thick soup, muttering, "Damn Defias. Cost me 3 barrels of good ale. And those plates. Damn it. I told you to watch the oven. The bread is burning." "Coming, boss," shouted young Tom, scrambling out of a pile of potatoes and rushing toward the smoking oven. "And you, the new one." Old John's sharp eyes caught Lu-Ren hesitating at the door, and he immediately redirected his fire, his mustache twitching. "You're Lu-Ren, right? Lord Maris has arranged it. From now on, you're my scullion. Room and board, no pay. Do well, and ITLL count toward your debt. Do poorly and you're out." "Got it." "Yes, boss." Lu-Ren nodded hastily. "Good." Old John pointed casually at a mountain of mud-caked potatoes and carrots in the corner. "See that? Your first task. Wash them all clean. Peel them. Cut them into chunks. The stew needs them for lunch. If you don't finish, no food." He then glared at a burly kitchen hand who was slacking off with a dull look in his eyes. "Big guy, keep an eye. Don't let him slack off." The kitchen hand, called Big Guy, grunted obediently, walked over to Lu-Ren, handed him a rusty peeler and a battered wooden basin, and said in a muffled voice, "Wash. Wash potatoes." Lu-Ren looked at the mountain of potatoes and carrots, then at the peeler, so dull it probably couldn't even cut paper, and his vision went dark. How long would this take? His hands, used only to typing on a keyboard, had never done such rough labor. But when under someone's roof, one must bow the head. Lu-Ren resignedly sighed, rolled up his sleeves, though they were already torn, and squatted down to start working. The icy well water, the rough potato skins, the strain of using a dull knife. Every aspect was a torment for Lu-Ren, a modern corporate slave. He clumsily peeled, his efficiency pitifully low, and he often cut off large chunks of potato flesh, causing even Big Guy, who was supervising, to frown, though he said nothing. Time passed slowly. Lu-Ren's back and waist ached, his fingers were pale and wrinkled from the cold well water, and he had nicked himself twice with the broken knife. The peeled potato chunks in the basin formed a pitiful little pile far from the goal. Hunger, exhaustion, and frustration intertwined. Physical exertion increasing. Spiritual energy recovery stalled. Detected accumulation of negative user emotions. Suggestion: make use of environment and skills. The system gave a vague hint. Use skills. Use taunt to make the potatoes jump into the basin. Or use arcane toss to shoot potatoes like cannonballs to peel them. Lu-Ren looked at the lumpy potato in his hand, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He tried to concentrate his mind to sense the potatoes, but felt nothing except the cold touch and the smell of earth. Just as Lu-Ren felt he was about to be defeated by this pile of potatoes, the kitchen curtain was violently flung open. A short figure burst in like a cannonball, nearly knocking over the bucket beside Lu-Ren. It was a gnome. He barely reached Lu-Ren's waist, but sported an explosive bright purple mohawk. He wore a brown leatherwork suit stained with grease and unknown grime, covered in pockets and strange metal parts, with a pair of goggles as thick as bottle bottoms, one lens cracked. In his arms he held a metal cylinder that looked highly unstable, emitting wisps of white smoke, and a low hum, his face a mix of mania and anxiety. John, old John, help, give me a bag of flour. Fine flour, the best. The gnome's voice was shrill and urgent like a rooster with its neck stepped on. Bang! Old John slammed the ladle on the pot rim and roared irritably, Nomo. You again. How many times have I told you? My kitchen is not your explosion lab. Get out. Don't cause trouble here. Do you want to blow up my stove? It's not an explosion. It's really not this time. The gnome, named Nomo, jumped in agitation, raising the metal cylinder. It's my super portable, fully automatic bread baking assistant prototype Mark III. Its core coolant pipe is leaking. The internal pressure is skyrocketing, temperature out of control. If we don't immediately use high-purity, low-moisture, uniformly granular fine flour to absorb and cool it, it will boom in at most 3 minutes. He made an exaggerated explosion gesture. The force is enough to blow off your kitchen roof. Old John's face instantly turned pale. You madman. Get that thing out of here. It's too late to take it out. Even moving it might trigger it. Nomo was almost in tears or panicking. Quick. Flour. Just 1 bag. Absorb the leaking active coolant, and it'll be safe. I promise. Everyone in the kitchen was terrified. Tom's spoon clattered to the floor. Big Guy instinctively covered his head, and the other helpers stepped back in fear. Old John looked at the metal cylinder spewing white smoke and humming ever louder than at his kitchen he had run for years. His face drained of color, lips trembling, clearly torn between great loss and potential disaster. Second by second the hum from the metal cylinder grew shrill, and piercing its surface temperature seemed to rise, and the white smoke became thicker. 3-minute countdown. Death, threat imminent. Lu Ren's heart pounded wildly. He looked at the dangerous device, then at the several unopened bags of flour piled in the corner. An extremely bold or suicidal idea flashed through his mind. Flour. Over there. Lu Ren pointed sharply at the flour bags in the corner while using all his mental strength to frantically drive the barely recovered spiritual energy, locking his mind on 1 bag of the cleanest fine flour. The chaos energy perception, passive of the weaver of all things, was fully activated. He strove to capture the existence of that flour bag, attempting to pull it over. Weave. Move, damn it, he roared in his mind. Buzz. A faint but highly concentrated chaotic energy, blending arcane blue light and natural green, instantly coiled around the 50-pound bag of flour. The bag shook violently. Not enough. Lu Ren felt his spiritual energy being drained like a pump, his vision darkening. But he gritted his teeth, squeezing out the last bit of power. Rise, he roared in his mind. Under the horrified gaze of everyone, the flour bag actually wobbled and floated off the ground, though it floated less than 20 centimeters and extremely unsteadily. Nomo, catch it. Throw it in. Lu Ren shouted hoarsely, using his mind to control the floating flour bag and fiercely shove it toward the gnome. The trajectory was still crooked. Nomo was first stunned by the flying flour spectacle, but the gnome's reaction speed was top-notch. He instantly understood Lu Ren's intention. As the flour bag wobbled in front of him, his small body erupted with astonishing jumping power, leaping like a monkey and grabbing the flying flour bag. Thanks, buddy. Nomo yelled, holding the flour bag, and with a perfect baseball pitcher's stance, using all his strength, he slammed the entire bag of flour hard into the humming, smoke-spewing metal cylinder in his hand. Splat! The flour bag hit the opening at the top of the cylinder, perhaps a designed feed port, and the bag burst. Snow-white flour cascaded down like a waterfall, instantly engulfing the entire metal cylinder. Sizzle. Plop. A violent sound like cold water hitting a red-hot iron rang out. A huge cloud of white dust mixed with steam erupted, instantly filling the entire kitchen. Everyone was choked into violent coughing, their vision a vast white expanse. The buzzing. Beep. The sharp whine of the metal cylinder visibly weakened, changed pitch, and finally emitted a deflating beep before falling completely silent. The lingering white mist slowly settled. The kitchen was dead silent. Everyone was turned into snowmen by the dust, staring blankly at the center of the room. Nomo crawled out of the flour pile, wiped the white powder from his face, revealing a manic joy of survival. He rushed to the flour-covered, now silent metal cylinder, carefully brushed away the flour to check it, then jumped up excitedly. Success. Pressure dropped. Temperature normal. Crisis averted. Huh. Imagenius. He completely forgot the danger of a moment ago. Old John slumped onto a stool, looking at the chaotic kitchen that looked like a blizzard had just passed, flour everywhere, wanting to cry, but having no tears. My flour. My kitchen. Nomo. And you. He pointed angrily at Lu Ren, also covered in white and still coughing. You. Boss. Calm down. Calm down. Nomo hurried over with a flattering smile. Look, the kitchen is saved. The roof is still there. What's a little flour loss? He'll pay. Double. He patted his chest, raising a cloud of flour. Then he turned to Lu Ren, his small eyes behind the thick goggles sparkling with excitement and curiosity. Hey, buddy, that flower summoning trick was awesome. How did you do it? Telekinesis, new engineering levitation technology, or some lost magic. Imnomo Banzho. Let's be friends. Lurin slumped on the ground, coughing violently, spitting out flour, feeling completely drained. He looked at the chaotic kitchen, the furious old John, the excited gnome engineer. Weaver of all things manipulation telekinesis, advanced application success. Effect prevented a kitchen explosion. Spiritual energy consumption, 99. User near coma. Reputation update, old John Lyons pride and friendly, 15,100 neutral duro 100 note. Although you saved the kitchen, maybe the flour disaster made his blood pressure skyrocket. Double compensation can't heal the trauma. Nomo Banzho no Marigan exile engineer friendly, 30100. Note you saved his precious invention and himself. He is fanatically interested in your mysterious ability. Gold's higher residence neutral 5,100 friendly, 20,100 note rumors up. The new weirdo used flower magic to stop the gnome's explosion experiment, saving the lion's pride in and half of Gold's higher. Although the method was bizarre, the outcome was just. Lu Ren. This reputation gain is. Just then a figure in a blue apprentice robe, somewhat familiar, rushed into the kitchen panting. It was the blacksmith apprentice Pete Chinyu. Lu Ren. So you're here. Pete was startled by Lu Ren's snowman appearance, but then urgently shouted, quick. Come with me to the guard station. Lord Maris is looking for you. Emergency mission. It's about the Defias. It seems. They hijacked our supply convoy. Lu Ren's vision went dark, and he almost fainted. Just after handling the flower crisis, his spiritual energy depleted, and now the Defias. Maris, prove your worth, mission. Came so soon. And on hell difficulty. Urgent mission. The Daifia have hijacked the supply convoy. Pite's breathless shout like a thunderclap instantly shattered the dizziness caused by Lu Ren's mental exhaustion and the flower disaster, and also dispelled old John's impending rage and Nomo's incessant questioning. Daifia, them again. And they directly hijacked the supply convoy vital to the lifeline of Shanjin town. Maruisi's so-called opportunity to prove value had arrived in an extremely brutal and dangerous manner. Lu Ren didn't even have time to brush off the flour on his body, nor could he pay attention to old John's "you just wait kid" look and Nomo's enthusiastic shouts of talk later. He was grabbed by the arm by Pite and stumbled out of the smoke-filled kitchen through the still noisy, but noticeably more tense hall, heading straight for the security station in the town center. A small squad of fully armed guards had already gathered at the entrance of the security station, the atmosphere grim. Captain Bulake's face was ashen, inspecting his long sword and shield. Jia Erda and several other guards also wore solemn expressions, organizing their equipment. The air was thick with the scent of leather steel and a faint, elusive smell of blood. Maruisi Tumen stood on the steps, his posture as straight as a spear, his deep blue cloak fluttering without wind. His sharp gray eyes swept over the disheveled Lu Ren, who was covered in white flour like a walking flour sack, and furrowed his brow almost imperceptibly, but said nothing. Report. Lu Ren is here. Pite shouted, standing at attention, then stepped aside, his face bearing the unique excitement of youth and the tension of battle. Good. Maruisi's voice was low and forceful, with an unquestionable authority. The situation is urgent, so I'll make it brief. An hour ago, the supply convoy we sent to Baofeng City to deliver this month's tax silver and emergency medicine was ambushed by the Daifia Brotherhood near the Suimu Gangshao in eastern Erwin Forest. The messenger escaped with his life to report back. The convoy guards are in grave danger. The tax silver and medicine must not fall into Daifia's hands. They are crucial for Shanjin town to survive the winter and face the orc threat. He looked sharply at the crowd. Bulake, take a team and head to Suimu Gangshao immediately. Clear the scene, search for survivors, and recover as many supplies as possible. Jia Erda, take 2 men to escort Pite to the south watchtower and strengthen the guard to prevent Daifia from staging a diversion. Yes, sir. Sir. Bulake and Jia Erda solemnly accepted the order. Finally, Maruisi's gaze fell on Lu Ren with a look of scrutiny and a hint of barely perceptible expectation. Lu Ren, you come with me. To the scene. I need your eyes. Let's see what tricks these Daifia scum are up. Obviously, Lu Ren's bizarre chair magic and telekinesis, though causing a flower disaster last night, had given Maruisi some ideas about his unstable but potentially useful abilities, especially when facing possible traps or magical devices set by Daifia. Lu Ren's heart sank. To a real battlefield, facing the brutal bandits who had just slaughtered the convoy guards. What could his newly activated only one mastery and mentally exhausted myriad weaver ability possibly do? As cannon fodder. But he had no choice. Refuse. That would mean giving up the chance to prove his worth and telling Maruisi that he was cowardly and incompetent. With the Daifia threat escalating, he had no doubt that Maruisi would immediately eliminate him as an unstable factor. Yes, Sir Sheriff. Lu Ren gritted his teeth and replied, trying to make his voice sound less shaky. He quietly clenched his fists, his nails nearly digging into his palms, using the pain to dispel his fear. Triggered emergency mission shadow of Suemu Gangshao. Mission objective: follow Sheriff Maruisi to the ambush site, investigate the Daifia traces, and search for clues. Mission difficulty: see dangerous warning. User status is extremely poor. Mental power 10, physical stamina moderately depleted. Survival rate in combat is below 30. Suggestion: immediately activate the core ability of the composite class to improve survival guarantee. The system issued a harsh alarm. Activate the core class ability. Lu Ren's heart stirred. Last night in the room, the system had prompted him that he could activate Myriad Weaver, but he was interrupted by Maruisi. Now at the critical moment of life and death, there was no other choice. Activate. Activate now. Lu Ren roared without hesitation in his mind. Confirmed. Core activation procedure of the composite class Myriad Weaver initiated. Energy infusion begins. Merging Warrior Taunt Mage Arcane, Missile Temporary Carrier Robe Shadow Step, Environmental Energy Simulation. Warning: insufficient mental power. Forced fusion will cause intense pain and mental shock. Continue. Yes, no, yes. 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 Lu Ren roared in his heart. Better to endure pain than die. A torrent of indescribable violent and chaotic energy surged from the void, violently pouring into Lu Ren's limbs and bones. It felt like countless red-hot steel needles were wildly stirring in every nerve of his body, or like being stuffed into a high-speed spinning washing machine, his internal organs churning violently. The intense pain made his vision go dark, and he let out a muffled groan. His body uncontrollably swayed, nearly falling. What's wrong? Maruisi, who was about to set off, keenly noticed Lu Ren's abnormality and turned to ask, his eyes sharp. Nothing. Nothing. Just a bit dizzy. Lu Ren endured the soul-tearing pain, forcing a smile that was uglier than crying, and in an instant his forehead was covered with cold sweat as big as beans. Maruisi gave him a deep look, asked no further questions, but said in a low voice, "Follow me. Don't fall behind." Then he mounted a tall brown warhorse, spurred it, and dashed out first. The other two guards followed closely. Lu Ren gritted his teeth, forced his almost collapsing body to keep up, and ran desperately behind a guard. Every step brought tearing pain throughout his body, and the dizziness from mental exhaustion clung to him like a bone-devouring worm. Energy fusion in progress. Pain threshold exceeded. Mental resilience slightly increased. Core skill Myriad Weaving initially unlocked. Dark Shadow Step basic. Skill description: briefly channel chaotic energy to simulate the shadow step effect of a rogue. Effect: instantly perform a small spatial blink displacement in a specified direction within 10 meters, with a faint shadow concealment effect on the movement trajectory, more deceptive than practical. Cooldown long. Cost large amount of mental power. Side effect: brief stiffness upon landing 0.5 seconds, and direction control is extremely unstable novice stage. The system prompt came with the intense pain. Dark Shadow Step. Spatial displacement. Although there were many limitations and the side effects were terrible, it was a life-saving divine skill. Just as a glimmer of hope rose in Lu Ren's heart, swish. Thud. A sharp crossbow bolt shot out from the dense forest by the roadside with a piercing sound. The target was aimed directly at the back of the guard running diagonally ahead of Lu Ren. Watch out. Lu Ren's pupils contracted, and he screamed. But it was too late. The guard heard the warning and was about to turn around, but the crossbow bolt had already precisely pierced the gap in his chainmail, deeply embedding into his shoulder blade. Ow! The guard screamed and fell to the ground. Ambush. Take cover. The other guard reacted quickly, throwing Lu Ren to the ground while raising his shield. Thud, thud, thud. Several more crossbow bolts struck the guard's raised shield with dull sounds. Maruisi reined in his warhorse, his long sword already drawn, his eyes as cold as frost, instantly locking onto the direction from which the bolts came. But he did not charge immediately, because the attackers were hidden in the dense forest, their positions unknown, and a reckless charge would be suicidal. Daifia rats. Maruisi growled, form a formation. Protect the wounded. The two guards, including the one who had thrown Lu Ren to the ground, immediately formed a back-to-back shield wall around the fallen comrade, warily watching the direction of the crossbow bolts. Lu Ren was thrown to the ground, dazed and disoriented, his already painful body suffering even more. He struggled to lift his head and saw the wounded guard with a crossbow bolt in his shoulder, blood gushing out his face, pale, groaning in pain. In the dense forest, several figures in dark red robes holding powerful crossbows could be vaguely seen moving behind the bushes like venomous snakes waiting for an opportunity. Ambush. Another ambush. The Daifia were audacious enough to set another ambush near Shanjin town, and their target was clear to intercept their team heading to investigate the scene. Kill them. A sinister command came from the forest. Several Daifia crossbowmen raised their crossbows again. This time their targets were clearly Maruisi and the two shield guards, who were clustered together and restricted in movement. Maruisi's eyes sharpened. He gripped his longsword ready to withstand the bolts and charge. At the crit, Lu Ren lying on the ground saw the gleaming crossbow bolt tips. The fear of death instantly overwhelmed his physical pain and mental discomfort. He didn't want to die. Even more, he didn't want to see the guard who had just saved him die because of protecting him. Taunt. Lu Ren almost instinctively used his last shred of mental power to activate the skill. Target the source of that sinister, commanding voice. A powerful spiritual wave of extreme provocation instantly crossed the distance and precisely struck the hidden Daifia leader deep in the forest. Huh. A muffled sound of shock and anger came from the forest. Obviously, this sudden mental pollution that insulted his ancestors to the 18th generation made the leader's blood rush and lose his cool. Kill that freak in white first. He's up to something. The leader's furious voice rang out, pointing at Lu Ren, who was lying on the ground conspicuously covered in flour. All the crossbowmen's bolts instantly turned and aimed at Lu Ren. Lu Ren, damn it. The taunt pulled too much aggro. Several crossbow bolts with the screech of death tore through the air and shot toward Lu Ren, who was lying on the ground and almost unable to move. The angles were tricky, sealing off all possible dodge space. I'm done. Lu Ren's heart turned cold. Fatal threat. Multiple crossbow bolts locked. Available skill Dark Shadow Step cooldown complete. Warning mental power only 5. Using it will inevitably cause unconsciousness. And direction is uncontrollable. The system issued its final warning. Use it. Must use it. Unconscious is better than becoming a hedgehog. Dark Shadow Step. Activate. Lu Ren let out a desperate roar in his mind. He frantically poured his remaining mental power into that newly unlocked, extremely unstable skill. Lu Ren's body was instantly enveloped in a thin, distorted layer of shadow energy. The next moment, his figure blurred in place like a television screen with poor signal. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The crossbow bolts shot into the ground, grazing his blurred afterimage. However, just as the system warned, the direction was uncontrollable. Lu Ren did not dodge backward or sideways as he had expected, but thump. He, in an extremely clumsy face-down posture, instantly blinked forward, toward the dense forest where the crossbowmen were hiding. About 3 meters. And the landing was accompanied by a noticeable spatial ripple distortion. Then, bang, he fell flat on his face, eating dirt. His position was exactly in the open space between Maruisi, the shield guards, and the Daifia crossbowmen. He was less than 5 meters from the bushes where the crossbowmen were hiding. And due to the skill's side effect, his body was stiff after landing, lying like a stone, unable to move. This sudden, unbelievable displacement stunned everyone. Maruisi and the shield guards. He charged over. Suicide. The Daifia crossbowmen. How did this freak suddenly flash right in front of us? A brief silence. Kill him. The sinister leader was the first to react, though shocked, his killing intent grew stronger. Several crossbowmen fumbled to reload their crossbows. The distance was too close. Reloading the crossbows took time. Those precious few seconds. Good opportunity. Maruisi's eyes flashed with sharp light. Though he didn't understand Lu Ren's bizarre faceplant blink, it had undoubtedly created an excellent opportunity. Like an arrow from a bowstring, he leaped from his horse, his long sword turning into a cold gleam, and rushed at the nearest crossbowman with astonishing speed. At the same time, he shouted, "Shield guards, charge!" The 2 shield guards also reacted, roaring, and charged into the bushes where the crossbowmen were hiding like bulls with their shields. The battle erupted instantly. Lu Ren, lying on the ground, heard the roars, clashing of weapons, twanging of crossbow strings, and screams so close that he was scared out of his wits. He could feel the cold crossbow bolts almost grazing his scalp. He desperately wanted to move, but the stiffness in his body had not yet faded. He could only lie there like a salted fish, praying that stray arrows would not hit him. Dark Shadow Step side effect ends. Mental power completely exhausted. Forced unconsciousness procedure initiated. 3, 2. The system's countdown was like a death knell. No, can't faint. If I faint, it's really over. Lu Ren used his last shred of willpower to resist the encroaching darkness and desperately lifted his head. He saw Maruisi like a war god, swinging his longsword, instantly killing 2 crossbowmen. One shield guard knocked over a crossbowman and was beating him with the hilt of his sword. The other shield guard was firmly protecting the wounded man on the ground. The sinister leader, who had been giving orders, saw the situation was bad, screamed, and turned to flee into the depths of the forest. Trying to run, Maruisi snorted, flicked his wrist, and his longsword flew out of his hand. Thud! The longsword, as if it had eyes, precisely pierced the leader's thigh, pinning him to the ground. The battle ended in a flash. Of the 4 Daifia crossbowmen, 3 were dead, and 1 was seriously wounded and captured. Maruisi walked over, stepped on the wounded leader's chest, and pulled out his longsword, letting the man let out a pig-like scream. His cold gaze swept across the battlefield, finally landing on Lu Ren, who was still lying on the ground like a dying salted fish, his expression complex and unreadable. Drag him over. Maruisi pointed at Lu Ren and ordered a guard. The guard walked over, grabbed the limp, glassy-eyed Lu Ren like a chicken, and dragged him in front of Maruisi. You. Maruisi looked at Lu Ren's face, pale as paper and covered in cold sweat, and his disheveled appearance caked with dirt, grass, and flour. He was about to ask about the strange blink earlier. Thump. Lu Ren could no longer hold on. The darkness from complete mental exhaustion overwhelmed him. His head lolled, and he fainted, collapsing limply to the ground. Maruisi. Guard. Sir, the guard was at a loss. Take him. And this live prisoner. Maruisi's mouth twitched, but he said nothing more, just waved his hand. This place is not safe to linger. Speed up, head to Suemu Gangshao. The unconscious Lu Ren was laid across the back of a pack horse and continued with the team. Maruisi personally interrogated the captured Daifia leader using harsh methods, and soon pried open his mouth. The team arrived at Suemu Gangshao in a silent and oppressive atmosphere. A small camp built beside several huge weathered rocks, originally a rest stop. The sight before them made even the battle-hardened Maruisi and the guards gasp. The camp was in a mess. Several cargo wagons were overturned, wheels broken, and goods, mainly grain and linen, were scattered everywhere, trampled beyond recognition. The draft horses lay in pools of blood, long dead. The ground was littered with broken weapons, shattered shields, and large amounts of dark red, not yet fully dried bloodstains. The pungent smell of blood mixed with dust filled the air. But, strangely, there were no corpses. Not a single guard's body. Only the bloodstains and battle marks clearly told of a brutal massacre that had occurred here, but the victims who should have been there had vanished as if from the face of the earth. Search. Maruisi's face was livid, his voice like ice. Search every inch carefully. See if there are any survivors. Or traces of bodies being dragged away. The guards immediately dispersed and began searching nervously. Maruisi crouched down, dipped his finger in the sticky dark red blood on the ground, brought it to his nose, and sniffed, his brow furrowed. The blood hasn't dried yet. Not long ago. His sharp gaze swept over the distribution of bloodstains and dragging marks, his face growing more and more grim. Sir, there's a discovery here. A guard shouted from behind a large rock at the edge of the camp. Maruisi immediately went over. Behind the rock on the relatively clean ground, a symbol was drawn with something dark red, seemingly coagulated blood. An extremely crude, yet eerie symbol, a twisted, bizarre pattern resembling several eyes superimposed on each other. In the center of the pattern, there seemed to be a few strands of grayish-white powder like ash. WH. What the hell is this? The guard's voice carried a tremor. Maruisi stared fixedly at the symbol, his face becoming unprecedentedly grave and somber. He recognized the symbol. Though crude, its unique, twisted, and evil aura was extremely similar to the dark ritual symbols recorded in the secret files of the 7th Intelligence Department involving necromancy and desecration of the dead. This is definitely not something that Daifia bandits should have. Immediately clean up this symbol. Bury it with soil. Do not touch those powders. Maruisi ordered sternly, his voice carrying a hint of trepidation he himself did not notice. He abruptly stood up, his gaze fixed on the deeper, darker depths of Erwin Forest, as if there lurked shadows 100 times more terrifying than the Daifia. Things are much more complicated than we thought. Maruisi's voice was terrifyingly low. He glanced at the still unconscious Lu Ren on the pack horse, his eyes extremely complex. This is no longer simple pillaging. Behind the Daifia, or in the depths of the forest, something has awakened. This is far more dangerous than the Daifia themselves. A cold wind carrying a decaying smell blew from some corner of the forest, stirring up dust and dead leaves, making a whimpering sound. Above the buried, evil symbol, a wisp of grayish-white powder was lifted by the wind, swirling, and silently drifted into the depths of the forest like an ominous omen. The unconscious Lu Ren seemed to sense something as well. On the jolting horse, his brows furrowed in pain, and his body twitched unconsciously. The last shred of mental power remaining in his mind seemed to capture an extremely vague, cold, malevolent whisper fragment, like the hiss of a viper directly drilling into his consciousness. Flesh. To dust. The dead. To rise. Lu Ren felt as if he had been stuffed into a spinning washing machine, tumbling through endless darkness, and fragments of whispers, cold, viscous, and reeking of decay, clung like bone worms, echoing repeatedly in the depths of his chaotic consciousness. Flesh. Return to dust. The dead. Resurrect. Each echo brought a soul-freezing chill and bone-deep fear. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He wanted to struggle, but could not move. Only the eerie whispers grew clearer and closer, like a cold snake's tongue licking his nerve endings. Just as he felt he was about to be completely devoured by the pure darkness and terror, a warm, tenacious spiritual force with a metallic hardness like the dawn's light suddenly pierced through the viscous darkness. This force was not vast, but exceptionally condensed and pure, bearing a will to guard order and sever falsehood. Wake up! A deep, majestic voice like a bronze bell exploded directly in the depths of his soul. It was Maruisi. Lu Ren, like a drowning man grabbing a floating log, suddenly yanked his consciousness back from that terrifying abyss. Huh, huh. He gasped and abruptly opened his eyes. The harsh light made him squint instinctively, and it took several seconds to adjust. He found himself lying on a hard plank bed covered with rough linen, above him the familiar, slightly moldy wooden ceiling of the inn. The air was filled with the familiar scent of ale, stewed meat, and faint medicinal herbs. The Shawangzio Inn. He had returned. Awake! A calm voice sounded beside him. Lu Ren turned his head with difficulty and saw the Sheriff Maruisi Saitoman sitting on the only chair by the bed. He still wore his crisp leather armor, his deep blue cloak draped over the chair back, and his long sword was unsheathed and placed at hand. In his hand, he toyed with an object, a short scroll wrapped in coarse animal hide, looking somewhat aged. His face revealed neither joy nor anger, only his deep gray eyes like a hawk's scrutinizing Lu Ren as if trying to penetrate his skin and see the secrets of his soul. Maruisi. Lu Ren's voice was hoarse, his throat feeling like sandpaper. How do you feel? Maruisi's tone was not particularly concerned, more like a routine inquiry. Headache. No strength. Lu Ren told the truth. The aftermath of mental exhaustion weighed on him like heavy lead. Forcing the use of unstable magic with depleted mental energy, it's lucky you didn't become an idiot, Maruisi said flatly, his tone ambiguous between sarcasm and statement. He casually placed the animal hide scroll on the small wooden table by the bed, making a soft thud. Do you recognize this? Lu Ren's gaze fell on the scroll. The animal hide was old, edges worn, tied with a dark red string that seemed to have some similarly dark stains, like dried blood. He shook his head. No, I don't recognize it. It was found on the captured Daifia leader. Maruisi's eyes sharpened. At the Suemu outpost you also saw that sinister symbol. This scroll was found near the place where the symbol was drawn. Lu Ren's heart sank. Suemu outpost. The pools of blood and the missing guards' bodies. The cold, eerie whispers. The terrifying memories surged back, making his face even paler. Daifia. Where did they take the guards' bodies? Lu Ren's voice trembled, even he didn't notice. That's exactly what I want to know. Maruisi's tone turned grave. No bodies. Only bloodstains and signs of battle. And this. He pointed to the scroll. And that symbol. The archives of the Junshin Chichu have records of similar symbols. They are often associated with the darkest, most blasphemous necromancy. Only bloodstains and signs of battle. And this. He pointed to the scroll. And that symbol. The archives of the Junshin Chichu have records of similar symbols. The prisoner only said they received orders to ambush the convoy, kill all the guards, and then gather the bodies in one place. After that he didn't know. He said he was only on perimeter duty and saw several strange men in black robes reeking of decay appear and take the bodies. He dared not approach. Those men made him feel like being stared at by the dead. Maruisi repeated the prisoner's testimony, frowning. Then he was captured by us. The trail has gone cold. He picked up the scroll, weighing it in his hand. This scroll cannot be opened. The string and the animal hide seem to be sealed by some evil energy. Forcibly breaking it might trigger a trap or destroy its contents. I need to know what secret lies within. This could be the key to finding the missing guards and uncovering the mastermind behind the Daifia. Maruisi's gaze focused again on Lu Ren with a look of scrutiny and testing. Lu Ren, you seem to have a peculiar perception of energy, especially chaotic energy. Last night at the inn you manipulated a chair. Today on the battlefield you used that strange blink. Though you nearly killed yourself. He paused, a faint hint of expectation in his tone. Can you try to sense this scroll? See if you can find a way to open it safely. Or at least sense the nature of the energy inside. Lu Ren looked at the ominous scroll, his scalp tingling. Let him sense something related to necromancy. Are you kidding? The cold, venomous fragments of whispers still ached in his mind. He instinctively wanted to refuse. But Maruisi's sharp, scrutinizing, and unquestioning gaze made him swallow his refusal. This was another chance to prove his worth, an extremely dangerous one. If he refused, the trust Maruisi had in him during the observation period would likely shatter instantly. If he tried and was consumed by the evil energy in the scroll, the consequences would be dire. He'll try. Lu Ren's voice was parched. He had no choice. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart and still throbbing head. He closed his eyes, concentrated, and carefully guided the tiny bit of mental energy he had just recovered, about 10, attempting to tap into the core ability of the Myriad Weaver chaotic energy perception. A faint ripple-like perception spread from Lu Ren, cautiously touching the animal hide scroll on the wooden. The moment his perception touched the scroll, a cold, viscous, malevolent, and death-tainted dark energy, like a sleeping viper awakened, burst forth from the scroll. This energy was full of blasphemy and despair, frantically assaulting Lu Ren's feeble perception. Lu Ren grunted, feeling as if a cold iron hammer had struck his soul. Countless needles seemed to stab into his mind. The cold whisper fragments instantly became clear and piercing. Sacrifice. Flesh. Awaken. Lord of Bones. An overwhelming nausea and dizziness surged like a tidal wave. Lu Ren's face turned deathly pale, cold sweat drenching his hair in an instant. He swayed and nearly fell off the bed. What happened? Maruisi stepped forward, grabbing Lu Ren's shoulder, asking in a deep voice, his eyes sharp as a blade. He had obviously noticed Lu Ren's sudden abnormality and the fleeting cold fluctuation from the scroll. No. No. Lu Ren shook off Maruisi's hand, a purely instinctive fear reaction, panting heavily, his eyes filled with terror. Too strong. Too evil. Inside. All death and resentment. Something. Whispers. It wants to devour me. Forcibly opening it will bring disaster. Maruisi looked at Lu Ren's frightened expression, then at the scroll lying quietly on the table. His face, even sensing, was so perilous. The consequences of forced breaking would be unimaginable. The clue seemed to have hit a dead end. Just then a rapid, rhythmically unique knock sounded at the door, accompanied by a sharp, excited voice. Hey, Lu Ren. My dear flower mage. I heard you're awake. Open the door. The great Nuo Banzho has come with gifts and genius ideas. It was the gnome engineer. Maruisi frowned, clearly displeased by the uninvited guest. But Lu Ren felt as if he had grasped a lifeline. Nuo, that gnome obsessed with amazing abilities. Maybe he had a solution. At least he could distract Maruisi and let him catch his breath. Let him in, Sheriff. Lu Ren said weakly. He might be able to help. Maruisi paused for a moment, then finally nodded slightly. The door opened, and Nuo, with his explosive purple mohawk, rushed in like a cannonball. Today he wore a relatively clean, only relatively blue work jumpsuit, but his goggles still had a crack. He didn't carry an explosive cylinder this time, but a bulging linen bag that smelled of machine oil, and, wow, the big shot is here too. Nuo saw Maruisi and gave an exaggerated, irregular salute, then his attention was immediately drawn to the animal hide scroll on the wooden table. What's this? An ancient treasure map? Or a lost engineering blueprint? Let me see. He curiously reached out to grab it. Don't touch. Maruisi and Lu Ren shouted almost simultaneously. Nuo's hand froze midair, and behind his thick lens glasses his eyes blinked. What? Is it dangerous? Very dangerous, Maruisi said gravely. It may involve dark magic. Dark magic. Instead of being afraid, Nuo's small eyes blazed with even more fervent light. Great. Energy. Unknown forms of energy. This is even more exciting than flower-absorbing coolant. He circled the table twice, eyeing the scroll like a rare treasure. Sealed. Evil energy. Interesting. Let me think. Suddenly he shoved the aromatic linen bag into Lu Ren's hands. Here. For you. Apology and thanks. Double fine flour-baked, super tough breadsticks. Absolutely filling. Then he ignored Lu Ren, and from his pocket-laden work pants quickly pulled out various strange little tools, a magnifying glass set, with a poor-quality crystal, a buzzing metal box, several clips attached to colored wires. Nuo, don't mess around. Maruisi warned, his hand on his sword hilt. Don't worry. Sheriff, I have a sense of proportion. Nuo said without looking up, carefully clipping the edge of the scroll with his small clips, then bringing the buzzing metal box close. I just want to use my energy spectrum harmonic resonance detector. He patted the little box proudly to scan its energy wave frequency. Never touch the core seal. Science. We must be scientific. Lu Ren hugged the bag of breadsticks that were still warm and exuded an enticing aroma of wheat. He watched Nuo tinkering with his devices, then glanced at Maruisi, whose face was dark with displeasure. He felt a splitting headache coming on. Nuo's scientific detection began. He was completely absorbed, his thick, bottle-bottom glasses almost pressed against the scroll, muttering to himself. The fundamental energy wave frequency is in the 7th sector of the shadow quadrant, with a strong negative entropy decay characteristic. Wow, the purity of this deathly resentment. It's like concentrated essence of a graveyard. Wait. This superimposed secondary wave, strange. How is it a bit like a distorted form of arcane energy? But not quite the same. Although Maruisi couldn't understand the jargon, he could tell from Nuo's increasingly excited and solemn expression that the energy contained in the scroll was far more complex and dangerous than he had imagined. Lu Ren, clutching the breadstick, nibbled on it. The breadstick was indeed quite tough, like chewing on a leather belt, but very filling while trying to recover his mental energy. At the same time, he secretly used his faint chaos energy perception to observe the scroll from a distance with extreme caution. This time, with the interference of the weak energy fields emitted by Nuo's strange instruments, the evil aura of the scroll itself seemed to be slightly diluted. Lu Ren forced himself to endure the discomfort, striving to capture the secondary wave Nuo had mentioned. A distorted form of arcane energy. A thought stirred in Lu Ren's mind. The core of the Myriad Weaver was the fusion of different energies. He had a natural affinity for arcane energy, though through the temporary medium of arcane missile. He attempted to use the little mental energy he had recovered to carefully simulate the purest, most primordial arcane energy fluctuation, like a slender thread, emitting a faint purple glow, and gently tentatively touched the chaotic secondary energy field at the periphery of the scroll. A miraculous thing happened. When the pure arcane energy thread simulated by Lu Ren came into contact with the chaotic secondary energy field around the scroll, the dark energy, filled with death and resentment, did not react violently, as before. Instead, it seemed to encounter something of the same origin, but more noble, producing a trace of extremely weak resonance. Or rather, a fearful retreat. The invisible cold shell energy field of the scroll itself at the point of contact with the arcane thread simulated by Lu Ren fluctuated and faded slightly. Extremely slightly. Only a tiny bit. Fleeting. But Lu Ren keenly caught it. Neither Maruisi nor Nuo noticed anything. Chaos perception advanced successfully captured subtle energy field changes. Analysis: the outer seal of the target scroll contains composite energy dominant necromantic death, secondary distorted arcane. Pure arcane energy can produce weak interference neutralization effects on the distorted arcane component. Suggestion: continuously output a minuscule amount of pure arcane energy attempting to create a tiny breach in the outer seal, which may assist in releasing the physical binding string animal hide, without triggering the core trap. Risk: requires extremely precise control. Any excess or contact with the core necromantic energy will cause a severe backlash. The system offered an extremely bold and delicate operational plan. Lu Ren's heart raced. There was a chance, but the risk was enormous, like walking a tightrope over a bottomless abyss. He looked at Nuo still fiddling with his instruments, and Maruisi, whose expression was grave. An even bolder or suicidal plan began to take shape in his mind. Nuo, Lu Ren suddenly spoke, his voice slightly strained from tension. What's up, my flower mage? Nuo looked up, confusion in his eyes behind the goggles. Your detector, can it detect very weak energy guidance? Lu Ren tried to make his tone sound like a curious layman. Of course, the great Nuo detector can even capture the energy fluctuations of a goblin's fart. Nuo proudly puffed out his small chest. Then, what if I try to use a tiny bit of my method to gently touch the periphery of this scroll, not the core seal, just the very outside? Could you monitor the energy reaction and see if there's any dangerous change? Possibly a change in the energy field. Lu Ren cautiously made his request while using his eyes to signal to Maruisi that this might be the only way to safely unlock it. Maruisi's gray eyes narrowed instantly, his sharp gaze sweeping between Lu Ren and the scroll, clearly weighing the risks and potential gains. Finally, he nodded slowly and said in a deep voice, "We can try. But Nuo, if the detector shows any violent fluctuation in the core energy, stop immediately. Lu Ren, don't overdo it. I don't want to carry another unconscious person back." Understood. Nuo rubbed his hands together excitedly, immediately adjusting his detector, several small crystals pointing at the scroll, and Lu Ren. "Come on. Let me see the magical energy control of the flower mage." Lu Ren took a deep breath as if about to perform a delicate surgical operation. He put down the half-eaten super tough breadstick, closed his eyes, and sank his entire mind into the weak ocean of mental energy. He carefully guided the thread-like mental energy, once again simulating a pure arcane energy fluctuation. This time he did not probe, but instead extremely slowly and precisely, like embroidery, condensed this pure arcane energy into a needle finer than a hair, aimed at the connection point between the dark red bloodstained string and the animal hide scroll, and with extreme gentleness, pierced it. As Lu Ren's arcane energy needle touched it ever so slightly, Nuomo's detector immediately emitted a faint, continuously pitch-changing buzz. Several of the low-quality crystals on the detector flickered with different colored lights. Energy fluctuation. Detected external energy injection. Nature. Pure arcane. My God. It really is arcane. Nuo whispered in shock, his small eyes wide, staring at the detector readings. The target's outer distorted arcane field is being neutralized. Interference. Effective interference. The core necromantic seal. Stable. Stable. No reaction. Continue. Lu Ren. Keep going. Amazing. Lu Ren kept his eyes closed, fine beads of sweat on his forehead, his entire mind focused on the slender energy needle at the tip of his finger, the fingertip of his mind. He could clearly sense that under the continuous soaking of pure arcane energy, the connection point between the dark red string and the animal hide, which had been welded by some sticky, evil energy, was gradually becoming loose. The distorted arcane energy, like dirt meeting its nemesis, was slowly being dissolved. This was an extremely slow and mentally exhausting process. Lu Ren's mental energy drained like water from an open sluice gate. He felt his head beginning to ache again. But he gritted his teeth and persisted, controlling the stability and precision of the energy output. Time passed minute by minute. The room was silent, broken only by the faint buzz of the detector and Lu Ren's increasingly heavy breathing. Maruisi kept his hand on his sword hilt, his eyes sharp as an eagle's, ready to react to any sudden situation. Finally, pop! A very faint sound like a bubble bursting rang out clearly in the silent room. At the spot where Lu Ren's arcane energy needle had been continuously dissolving, a tiny, almost invisible break point appeared between the dark red string and the animal hide scroll. The evil energy connecting them had been temporarily neutralized and dispersed. Now, Lu Ren's eyes snapped open, a glint of sharp light flashing in his gaze. He didn't need to say a word. Gnawing, who had been staring at the scroll with absolute concentration, moved with the agility and precision characteristic of a gnome. He reached out with his gloved hand as fast as lightning and, using a pair of extremely delicate tweezers, apparently carved from some bird's beak bone, precisely clamped onto the exposed end of the dark red string at the breakpoint. A gentle tug. The dark red string, as if it had lost its adhesive qualities, silently and completely peeled off from the animal hide scroll. No energy backlash. No explosion. No black mist. Success. Yeah. Awesome. We did it. Gnawing jumped up in excitement, holding the evil string in his hand like a trophy. Maruisi also visibly sighed in relief, his grip on the sword hilt loosening slightly. He looked at Lu Ren with a hint of genuine surprise and recognition for the first time. Lu Ren, on the other hand, collapsed against the headboard, as if drained, panting heavily, his face pale, but a relieved smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Although it was only the physical seal that had been broken, it was the crucial first step. Gnawing eagerly and carefully unrolled the old animal hide scroll. On the scroll, drawn with a dark red ink that smelled of rust and a faint fishy odor, was an extremely crude map and some twisted bizarre runes. The map depicted a portion of the Elwyn Forest with several key locations marked in the same dark red Shanjin town, the Samu outpost, and a place deep in the forest heavily circled and marked with twisted runes. At the bottom of the scroll, in the same dark red script, seemingly common, but with uncanny deformations, a few lines of small text were written: on the night of the full moon, the place where the bones whisper. Take the blood of the living as a guide, the flesh of the dead as fuel. Awaken the slumbering shadow, open the portal to the netherworld. The servants of Shadowfang offer this to our master. Shadowfang, portal to the netherworld, the place where bones whisper. And the words about sacrificing the living to awaken the dead. A chill instantly swept through the entire room. The night of the full moon. Maruisi's voice was icy cold. He abruptly looked up at the sky outside the window, where dusk was falling and a nearly full pale moon was slowly rising from behind the eastern treetops. It's tonight. As if to confirm Maruisi's words and to echo the evil prophecy of the scroll, a mournful, prolonged, and utterly agonizing and venomous horn sound, like a death knell from the depths of hell, suddenly came from deep within the Elwyn Forest. It instantly tore through the tranquility of Shanjin town at dusk. The horn sound was incredibly penetrating, carrying a bone-chilling coldness and despair that struck directly at the soul. The room downstairs fell into a dead silence, then erupted into even greater panicked uproar. The necromancer's horn. Maruisi's face turned extremely grim. He grabbed his long sword and cloak. It's the summoning of the necromancer. They're starting. Before he finished speaking, boom, boom, boom. From the outskirts of Shanjin town, near the forest, came several dull, thunderous explosions. Then came the roar of collapsing houses and the terrified screams of people at their peak of fear. Attack! It's the undead. So many undead. They're coming out of the forest. A guard's anguished cry came from the south side of the town, filled with boundless terror. Lu Ren struggled to sit up from the bed and looked out the window. The sky to the south of the town was already stained red by several rising fires and plumes of smoke. Vaguely at the edge of the firelight and twilight, some stiff, twisted silhouettes were surging like a tide from the dark forest, rushing toward the nearest houses and the panicked townsfolk. The frigid aura of death, accompanied by the mournful horn, swept over Shanjin town like a tangible cold wave, instantly drowning everything. In Lu Ren's arms, the half-eaten super tough breadstick fell to the floor with a thud. The soul-rending horn of the undead, like a death knell from the abyss, instantly froze the brief respite within the Lion's Pride Inn. Immediately after the explosions, roars and agonizing screams from the southern part of the town struck everyone's hearts like a branding iron. Undead. It's the undead. They're breaking into the town. Help! My child! My child is still in the south. Panic exploded like a plague within the inn. The guests, who had just been discussing the flower mage, were now reduced to primal fear. People screamed, shoved, and stumbled about like headless flies, trying to find a safe corner or rush to the door to save their loved ones. Tables and chairs were overturned, cups and plates shattered. A scene of apocalyptic chaos. Silence. Marius Storman's roar exploded like a thunderclap. His tall figure leaped onto the bar counter, his cloak rustling, his long sword drawn, the cold blade glinting in the flickering lamplight. Everyone, Listen to my orders. Women, children, and the elderly go upstairs immediately. Block the stairs with tables and chairs. Men, grab any weapon you can find. Chair legs, fire tongs, kitchen knives. Guard the front and back doors of the inn. Guards, follow me to the south. Hold off those bone racks. His iron-willed commands like a sea anchor instantly quelled some of the panic. Old John reacted swiftly, bellowing orders to the staff to move heavy tables and chairs to block the stairway. Pete Chinyu, pale-faced yet with unwavering determination, grabbed a thick firewood club and followed closely behind Marius. Lu Ren struggled to get up from the bed. The dizziness from depleted spiritual energy and the ache in his body had not yet subsided, but the threat of death, like a drenching of ice water, forced him to squeeze out the last ounce of strength. He looked at Marius, his eyes questioning. In his current state, going along would be suicide. You? Marius' gaze swept over Lu Ren, then glanced at the ominous beast-hide scroll and the dark red string spread out on the table, his eyes sharp as a blade. Stay here. Use that pitiful mental energy of yours to keep studying this scroll, especially the location of that bone whisper ground. Find it. This might be the key to stopping this disaster, he said, rapidly, brooking no dissent. Nomo, you stay too. Assist him. Use your science. The safety of the inn is temporarily in your hands. Understood, Chief Constable. Defend the bread. Defend the inn. Leave it to me. Nomo immediately puffed out his small chest, and from somewhere produced two wrench-shaped weapons that crackled with arcs of electricity and looked extremely dangerous. Sir, take me. I can fight, Pete urged eagerly. Follow me, lad. Marius wasted no words. With a wave of his hand, he led the remaining two guards and Pete, like an arrow loosed from a bow, bursting through the chaotic crowd and out of the inn's gate, charging toward the southern part of the town where flames and screams raged. Find the bone whisper ground. He could barely concentrate. Hey buddy, stop daydreaming. Nomo jumped onto a chair and gave Lu Ren's arm a firm slap. Find the bone whisper ground. He could barely concentrate. Hey buddy, stop daydreaming. Nomo jumped onto a chair and gave Lu Ren's arm a firm slap, quite hard. Quick, study the scroll. He'll stand guard. And, optimize the inn's defenses. His small eyes glittered with excitement as he began placing some clinking, unstable-looking metal contraptions on the inside of the inn's main door. Lu Ren took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He walked to the table and looked at the beast-hide scroll again. A crude map, twisted runes, and that bone-chilling phrase, on the night of the full moon, the bone whisper ground. His gaze locked onto the heavily circled mark deep in the forest. The map was very rough, marking only a few major landmarks: Shanjin Town, Soimu Outpost, Donggu Logging Camp east of Shanjin Town, and a thick line representing the main road. The Bone Whisper Ground mark was located deep in the forest near the edge of the map with no obvious reference points around it. Only a twisted rune like a cross of bones. No coordinates. No distance. How was he supposed to find it? Quest update urgent. Locate the Bone Whisper Ground. Analysis: insufficient information on the scroll map. Suggestion: combine environmental clues with chaos perception and attempt resonance positioning. Risk: may trigger residual evil energy from the scroll. The system offered an extremely risky plan. Resonance positioning. Lu Ren looked at the twisted rune, then listened to the inhuman shrieks growing louder and clearer outside the window, the sound of bones grinding and rotting vocal cords, and the increasingly intense clash of weapons and shouts. Marius was already engaged in battle. He steeled himself. To hell with it. He closed his eyes again, ignoring the stabbing pain in his head, and forcibly mustered the trace of mental energy that had just recovered. This time, instead of simulating arcane energy, he attempted to tap into the core chaos perception trait of the Void Weaver. He tried to make his spiritual fluctuations mimic the residual cold, deathly blasphemous aura emanating from the twisted rune on the scroll. This was an extremely dangerous operation, like willingly embracing a venomous snake in the dark. The moment Lu Ren's spiritual fluctuations touched the residual aura of the rune, a dark will far colder, more venomous, and filled with endless despair like a lurking beast suddenly surged from the scroll and pounced back. It madly tore at Lu Ren's fragile spirit. Lu Ren let out a pained groan, his body trembling violently, his face turning as pale as paper. The icy whispers exploded in his mind again, clearer and more frenzied than before. Die. Join us. Eternal rest. No. Eternal servitude. The violent mental assault darkened Lu Ren's vision, and he nearly fainted again. But he bit his tongue hard, using the sharp pain to keep himself awake. He could not fall. Shanjin Town was in the midst of this fierce struggle between his spirit and the evil will. Lu Ren's outward-spreading chaos perception, like a pond disturbed by a pebble, rippled with a faint tremor. This ripple pierced through the inn's walls, through the waves of chaos, and sped toward a certain direction in the forest. Dimly, Lu Ren's perception seemed to catch a trace of a distant, yet resonantly identical cold and deathly fluctuation. Like a lighthouse in the darkness, But that direction was not due south where Marius was fighting but southeast, deviating from the main battlefield. East, southeast. Lu Ren suddenly opened his bloodshot eyes and shouted hoarsely, his trembling finger pointing toward the forest deep in the southeast beyond the inn window. That place is in the southeast. Far away, but I felt it. Very, very cold, very despairing. Southeast. How far exactly? Any features? Nomo asked urgently, while nervously watching the chaotic shadows approaching the inn's main door. Some townspeople were crying and fleeing toward the inn, pursued by stiff skeletons wielding rusted weapons. I don't know. Just that it's in that direction. Lu Ren panted, his spiritual energy nearly depleted again. It feels in a deep depression or canyon, surrounded by many, many old trees. Dead trees. Old, dead trees. Southeast direction. Nomo's tiny mind raced, his thick spectacle lenses reflecting the flickering firelight from the inn's hearth. I remember. It's the Fumu Forest, where the road to Donggu logging camp turns deep into the woods. It's full of dead giant oaks. Legend says it's a cursed place. No one dares to go near. That must be it. The gnome's engineering knowledge apparently also included geographical trivia. Fumu Forest. The Bone Whisper Ground. Someone must go there. Lu Ren steadied himself by the table, his voice weak but urgent. The scroll says, living blood as a guide, dead bodies as fuel. To awaken something. Servants of Shadowfawn. There must be a ritual there. If we don't stop it, the undead will keep coming. They'll go. Nomo didn't hesitate. His small face was filled with an adventurer's fervor and a rare seriousness. My little darlings, he patted the tool pouch on his waist and the two electric wrenches, love dealing with these stiff bone racks. Give me the coordinates. They'll blow up their altar. No, it's too dangerous. You alone. Lu Ren looked at Nomo's small frame and couldn't imagine him crossing the forest teeming with undead to reach the enemy's lair. Hey, don't underestimate a gnome engineer. Nomo puffed out his chest. When it comes to escaping and causing chaos, I'm an expert. Besides, he winked slyly. Have you forgotten my super portable, fully automatic bread baking assistant prototype Mark III? The coolant is gone, but the core energy furnace is still working. A little modification. He patted the bulging linen bag. Inside was Lu Ren's half-eaten super tough breadstick. Lu Ren, breadstick. Modification. This gnome's train of thought. Just then, boom. The heavy door of the inn let out a strained groan. The tables and chairs blocking the door shook violently. A skeletal arm stripped of flesh and hung with rotting meat forced its way through the crack in the door, clawing madly. They're here. Hold the line. Old John and several townsmen with kitchen knives and fire tongs, pale-faced, struggled to brace the door. No time to hesitate. Nomo shouted quickly, pulling a palm-sized metal box covered in knobs and wires from his multitudinous tool-laden overalls, and roughly shoved it into Lu Ren's arms. Take it. My disposable chaos energy field detector breadstick special edition. Wait for my signal. If it lights up. Alternating red and blue flashes, it means I've found the place and am about to strike. Then you find a way to tell Marius. He gave Lu Ren no time to react, then snatched up the super tough breadstick, pulled out a few thin metal tubes and several shiny blue crystals emitting unstable arcane fluctuations, probably inferior mana crystal fragments, and began inserting them into the breadstick at a dizzying speed. Wait, how are you getting out? The undead are everywhere. Lu Ren cried. Watch me. Nomo grinned, showing a row of white teeth. He strapped the breadstick, now bristling with crystals and metal tubes, looking extremely bizarre and dangerous, onto his back, then dashed to a back window facing a secluded alley. The back alley. Fewer bones here. Cover me. He pushed open the window and agilely climbed onto the sill. Cover you. Lu Ren looked at the dim silhouettes outside the back window. A few skeleton soldiers drawn by the commotion at the back door, and his scalp went numb. He couldn't even conjure a fireball now. Use your magic. Flower mage. Distract them, just like you did with the orcs. Nomo shouted back, then without hesitation, like a purple cannonball carrying a backpack containing the bomb breadstick, leaped into the dark alley outside the window. Nomo. Lu Ren rushed to the window, only to see Nomo's small figure land, roll, and vanish into the shadows at the corner of the alley with astonishing speed. In the alley, 3 skeleton soldiers, alerted by the noise, rattled their rusted swords and clattered after Nomo's disappearing direction. Another skeleton, seemingly attracted by the louder commotion at the inn's back door, turned and started walking back. That skeleton must not be allowed to return and report. Though they might lack the intelligence, they must not be allowed to catch up to gnawing. Taunt. Lu Ren exhausted his last vestige of spiritual energy, locking onto the skeleton soldier that had turned around. A faint but effective provocative thought struck the skeleton instantly. The soul fire in its hollow eye sockets leaped abruptly, abandoning the back door, and it clattered toward the window where Lu Ren stood, raising its rusty sword. And you, Lu Ren, fighting the dizziness, launched taunts at the other two skeleton soldiers in the alley that were pursuing gnawing. Over here, you bone scraps. The movements of those two skeleton soldiers visibly stalled, their soul fire flickering as if hesitating over which target to pursue. It worked, but it also infuriated them completely. All three skeleton soldiers abandoned their original targets, simultaneously brandishing weapons and charging toward the window, where Lu Ren stood, clattering all the way. Lu Ren was terrified out of his wits. In his hand, he only held the small metal box that gnawing had shoved at him. What could this thing do? Close the window. Close it now. Lu Ren shouted hoarsely at old Yuhan and the others while frantically pulling at the old wooden window. Bang! Crack! A bony claw suddenly thrust through the gap that had yet to be fully shut, grabbing the window frame. The decayed strength was astonishing. The window was stuck. The other two skeletons also rushed beneath the window, their rusty blades beginning to hack at the wooden bars. Hold it! Old Yuhan and several townsfolk rushed over, joining forces to push the window. But the bony claw held the window frame in a death grip, its strength immense. The two sides were locked in a stalemate. The other two rusty swords had already cut notches into the window bars. Lu Ren stared at the stinking skull and the burning soul fire in its hollow eyes, so close that the fear of death left his mind a complete blank. He instinctively swung his arm, trying to smash the small metal box in his hand against the bony claw. Just as he swung his arm, perhaps triggered by extreme mental tension, or perhaps because gnawing's Breadsticks Special Edition detector was inherently overly sensitive, the indicator lights on the small metal box suddenly began to flash frantically in alternating red and blue. At the same time, it emitted a sharp, piercing beep. The sudden close-range high-frequency noise and intense flashing seemed to have a special effect on the undead. The soul fire in the hollow eye sockets of the three skeleton soldiers who were frantically attacking the window suddenly began to churn wildly and chaotically. As if struck by an invisible hammer to the head, their movements instantly became stiff and convulsive. The bony claw gripping the window frame suddenly released. The other two skeletons hacking away also stopped clutching their bare skulls, emitting a silent soul-level shriek, spinning in place in agony. It worked. gnawing's shoddy contraption had hit the mark by sheer luck. Quick! Close the window. Lu Ren, seizing the precious opportunity together with old Yuhan and the others, slammed the window shut and bolted it. The three skeleton soldiers were still convulsing and spinning outside the window, temporarily neutralized. Lu Ren slid down against the cold wall, sitting on the floor, panting heavily, clutching the metal box that was still flashing red and blue and emitting a piercing screech. This thing is really noisy, old Yuhan said, looking apprehensively out the window. But Lu Ren stared fixedly at the alternating red and blue signal lights. This light, this rhythm. It was exactly the same as before gnawing jumped out the window. gnawing's signal. Had he found the Whispering Bones place? Was he about to make his move? Lu Ren's heart pounded wildly. He struggled to his feet, rushed to the window facing the street, reinforced with thick planks and left with a narrow observation slit, and peered out. The battle in the southern part of town was still fierce. Firelight blazed, mingled with shouts, the clash of weapons, and the howls of the undead. Maruisi's figure flickered in and out of the flames, his sword light like a ribbon of silk, each swing accompanied by the sound of shattering bones. Paite and the other guards, along with the organized townsfolk, were relying on burning houses and collapsed walls to desperately hold back the tide of skeletons and a few slow-moving zombies. The situation was precarious. He had to tell Maruisi immediately. gnawing's signal was an order. They had to support the Rottenwood Forest at once. Interrupt the ritual. But how to get there? The inn was surrounded by the undead. He would be throwing his life away if he rushed out. Shout! The chaotic battlefield would never hear him. Lu Ren looked around anxiously, his gaze finally landing on the blazing fireplace in the center of the inn's hall. Fire! Manager Yuhan, give me a torch. The biggest one. Lu Ren yelled hoarsely. Though old Yuhan didn't understand, he immediately grabbed a thick oil-soaked torch from beside the fireplace, lit it in the flames, and handed it to Lu Ren. Lu Ren took the heavy burning torch, took a deep breath, and leaned his upper body out of the observation slit, dodging stray arrows, and toward the southern part of town where Maruisi was fighting. Using all the air in his lungs, he shouted as loudly as he could, Maruisi. The sound was so faint in the chaos of the battlefield. But immediately he began to wildly wave the blazing torch in his hand. With all his strength, he traced a huge conspicuous X pattern in the air. Again and again, the firelight danced in the night, cutting through the darkness and confusion. Finally, Maruisi, who had just cleaved a tall zombie in two, seemed to sense something. He spun around abruptly, his sharp, gray eyes instantly locking onto the wildly waving torchlight, tracing an X in the window of the Lion's Pride Inn, and Lu Ren's anxious, twisted face in the window. Maruisi understood instantly. Rottenwood Forest. Direction. Signal. A resolute light blazed in his eyes. He swept aside 2 skeletons with a single sword stroke and roared at the blood-soaked Paite and the 2 remaining guards. Hold the line here. Hold fast. He'll be back. His voice thundered with unassailable authority. Sir, where are you going? Paite wiped the blood and sweat from his face urgently. To cut off the source. Maruisi didn't explain. His figure slipped out of the battle like a ghost, and in a few bounds he vanished into the shadows, racing toward the southeastern forest. His speed left afterimages. Seeing Maruisi's figure disappear into the southeastern forest, Lu Rin collapsed in exhaustion, dropping the torch and slumping to the floor, feeling completely drained. That was all he could do. Time passed minute by minute. The undead assault outside the inn seemed to grow even more frenzied, as if freed from the suppression of Maruisi's powerful presence. The doors and windows were pounded with loud thuds, and the furniture used to barricade them groaned under the strain. The battle in the southern part of town grew even more brutal. The roars of Pai Te and the others mingled with the howls of the undead, firelight illuminating the falling figures, both human and skeletal. Lu Rin gripped Nuo Mo's detector, which was still flashing red and blue and emitting a piercing screech as hard in his throat. Nuo Mo. Maruisi. You must succeed. Suddenly, a thunderous, earth-shattering roar, far deeper and more shocking than any explosion before, erupted from deep within the southeastern forest. The entire ground of Flash Gold Town trembled violently. The window panes of the inn shattered with a crash. Dust rained down from the walls. The roar, like the bellow of a colossal beast, instantly drowned out all the sounds of battle. Then an indescribable shockwave, a mixture of intense arcane energy storms, acrid burning smells, and a vast cloud of bone ash dust, swept in from the forest like an invisible tsunami. A howling wind carrying icy bone ash and wild arcane currents blasted through Flash Gold Town. The soul fire in the hollow eye sockets of all the frantically attacking undead, skeletons and zombies alike, was extinguished like candles blown out by a gale. They stopped moving as if their strings had been cut, collapsing into a heap of genuine dry bones. After that deafening roar and the ensuing shockwave, the clamorous battlefield fell into a deathly silence. Only the crackling of flames, the groans of the wounded, and the incredulous post-calamity gasps of the survivors remained. Did it work? Old Yuhan slumped to the floor, staring at the instantaneously disassembled undead outside the window, muttering to himself. Lu Rin crawled to the window and looked toward the southeastern forest. There the sky was covered by a slowly rising mushroom cloud, a mix of blue-violet arcane light and gray. The sight was eerie and magnificent. Nuo Mo's breadstick bomb. Was this powerful? Just then the metal detector in Lu Rin's hand, which had been flashing red and blue and emitting a piercing screech, abruptly stopped both its light and sound. A final line of extremely faint fragmentary gnome text, which Lu Rin couldn't read, flickered on the screen, and then it went completely dark. Lu Rin's heart sank. Nuo Mo. Maruisi. He stared anxiously toward the forest, waiting for their figures to appear. Time seemed to stretch into an eternity. Finally, the shadows at the edge of the forest stirred, and a tall, weary figure covered in dust and gray-white bone powder staggered out. It was Maruisi. His left arm hung limp, seemingly injured, but his right hand still gripped his longsword, its blade coated with a sticky, foul-smelling dark green liquid, not blood. In his arms, he seemed to be holding a small, motionless purple figure. Lu Rin's heart sank to the depths. Maruisi limped out of the forest and stopped in the open space at the edge of the town. He looked down at Nuo Mo in his arms. The little gnome's afro was singed in a large patch, the bright purple turned to charred black. His blue work jumpsuit was tattered, covered in dirt, bone ash, and unknown stains. One thick-bottomed lens was shattered, and the other was cracked. His eyes were tightly shut, his small body limp, showing no signs of life. Maruisi slowly crouched, carefully placing Nuo Mo on the ground. He reached out with his uninjured right hand, feeling for Nuo Mo's neck. Lu Rin held his breath, and everyone in the inn who saw this also held their breath. Just then, cough, cough, cough. Tui, tui, tui. Nuo Mo suddenly coughed violently, spitting out a mouthful of dust, and then opened the small eye not completely covered by the cracked lens. His gaze was slightly unfocused, but filled with the daze of having survived and a hint of smugness. Did it work? My super resilient breadstick annihilation bomb. Pretty good, huh? His voice was weak and hoarse, but he was unmistakably alive. It worked. Maruisi's voice carried unprecedented exhaustion along with a trace of relief. He withdrew his hand, pulled something from his pocket, and tossed it under the window where Lu Rin stood. The object reflected a cold metallic luster in the moonlight, a palm-sized twisted metal fragment covered in strange grooves and runes. It seemed to be the core component of a larger device with edges still bearing traces of high-temperature melting. The altar's core was destroyed. Maruisi's voice was low and hoarse, carrying a chill that penetrated to the bone. But the black-robed figure who conducted the ritual, that servant of Shadow Fawn, vanished with a part of this core fragment just before the explosion. He left one last sentence. Maruisi lifted his head, his gray eyes, weathered by countless battles seeing through life and death, now filled with unprecedented gravity and a hint of shock. He looked at Lu Ren's pale face through the crack in the window and said word by word, he said, "The key is broken, but the door shall open. The seed of chaos shall return." Nuamo's characteristic cough, laden with the relief of survival and a gnome's smugness like the dawn bell, dispelled the last vestiges of death's gloom over Shanjin town. The relief of survival, the ecstasy of disbelief, and the grief of lost loved ones intermingled on the faces of the surviving townsfolk, converging into a complex chorus of emotions. Lu Ren slumped by the window, watching Maruisi help the relatively lively Nuamo to his feet. His taut nerves finally relaxed, only to be replaced by a deeper exhaustion and the searing pain of mental overexertion. He still clutched Nuamo's detector, its screen now dark. The cool touch of metal helped him regain a sliver of clarity. The twisted metal fragment that Maruisi had tossed under the window reflected a cold, ominous gleam in the pale morning light. The whisper, "The key is broken, but the door shall open. The seed of chaos shall return," coiled around Lu Ren's heart like a freezing serpent, bringing an inescapable chill. What did the seed of chaos refer to? Was it the destroyed altar? Or was it him, the weaver of all things, from another world? Lu Ren, well done. Your signal was perfect timing. Nuamo, supported by Maruisi, limped toward the inn, waving his uninjured little arm from afar, his face beaming with the excitement of survival and pride in the power of his breadstick bomb, though he now looked like a soot-covered coal ball. How was my detector signal? Was it super clear? Flashing red and blue. So cool. Lao Yuan and several townsfolk quickly moved the barricade to let them in. Maruisi handed Nuamo over to the approaching Tang Mu, then walked over to Lu Ren. He bent down and picked up the cold metal fragment from under the window. His expression remained grim. The wound on his left arm was hastily bandaged with blood seeping through the reddened cloth. "You did well, Lu Ren." Maruisi's voice was low and hoarse, carrying an unprecedented seriousness. He looked at Lu Ren's pale, exhausted face. "Without your sensory positioning and signal, Nuamo and I could never have arrived in time to destroy that desecrated altar. You saved Shanjin town." He handed the metal fragment to Lu Ren. "Take this." Lu Ren was taken aback. "Me? Why? It belongs to you." Maruisi's gray eyes were deep as an abyss. "The last words of that black-robed figure were meant for you. Seed of chaos. I don't know what it means, but there seems to be a peculiar connection between this thing and you." In the Fumulant forest, when Nuamo detonated his masterpiece, I saw this fragment at the core of the explosion, emitting energy fluctuations that felt very similar to the chaotic sensation you gave off when you manipulated the chair or blinked. He paused, his tone carrying a warning. "But at the same time, it's also filled with the evil imprint of that black-robed figure. Take it, study it. Perhaps you can find clues from this cursed object to fight against those shadows. Shanjin town is too small to harbor such a secret, nor can it bear the consequences." Lu Ren looked at the fragment covered with strange grooves and runes, its edges still bearing traces of melting. He felt the faint but undeniable energy fluctuations emanating from it, both coldly evil and carrying a hint of familiar chaos, and his heart was filled with mixed emotions. It was both recognition and responsibility, and even more so, a hot potato. In the end, he reached out and carefully took the cold metal piece. The moment it touched his hand, an extremely faint resonant thrill traveled up his fingertips, giving him a slight mental jolt followed by a shiver from the cold, venomous aura attached to it. Acquired key item: profane altar core fragment, chaos-tainted item status, severely damaged energy, dissipating strong residual undead resentment, and faint chaos origin imprint. Warning: prolonged contact may trigger an undead curse or attract the attention of unknown entities. New hint: the composite profession weaver of all things origin resonates with the fragment's faint chaos imprint. Profession activation progress increased to 5. Mental recovery speed slightly boosted. The system displayed a complex feedback. Also, Maruisi pulled a small copper token from a pouch at his waist stamped with the griffin emblem of Baofeng City and handed it to Lu Ren. "This is a temporary credential for the special advisor of Baofeng City. With this, you can receive limited assistance in Shanjin town and the surrounding areas and freely travel to Baofeng. I will write a confidential report about everything that happened last night, including your special aspects, and send it through the channels of the Secret Service to the high-ranking officials of Baofeng City. Your matter is beyond what I can handle." His tone carried a hint of helplessness and relief. "Get some rest. Shanjin town needs to be rebuilt. Your troubles have only just begun." In the following days, Shanjin town was enveloped in an atmosphere interwoven with the bustle of reconstruction and the solemnity of mourning. Lao Yuehan arranged for Lu Ren to stay in a relatively quiet backroom, euphemistically claiming that the special advisor needs quiet recuperation, but in truth it was a way of keeping distance from this trouble magnet. Lu Ren was happy for the peace. While striving to recover his depleted mental and physical strength, he cautiously studied the metal fragment and the animal hide scroll. The map and text on the scroll had been copied by Maruisi and taken away, while the original was carefully kept by Lu Ren. He dared not hold the fragment for long. He wrapped it in cloth and occasionally took it out, trying to use chaos perception to cautiously touch the faint chaos imprint within it. Each touch was like dancing on the edge of a blade. He had to resist the erosion of the undead resentment while carefully guiding that thread of chaos imprint, trying to understand and assimilate it. The process was slow and painful, but each success granted him a slightly stronger sense of control over the power of the weaver of all things, and the profession activation progress inched upward. The reputation system also changed. Silently Shanjin Town residents friendly, 20,100, esteemed, 50100. The legend of the flower mage upgraded to signal hero of the undead knight. Though eccentric, he saved the entire town. Lao Yuehan Lion's pride in neutral 0100, friendly 40100. The inn suffered little damage during the undead attack, thanks to Nuam Mo's defenses. And with Lu Ren's status now vastly different, his attitude became much more enthusiastic. New OMO Bands Ho, exiled engineer from Norwegian, friendly 30,100, revered, 80,100, views Lu Ren as best blasting partner and pioneer of chaos energy research, constantly pestering him to discuss upgrading the breadstick bomb into a chaos annihilation cannon. Pai Qingyu, blacksmith apprentice of Shanjin Town, friendly 15,100, revered 75,100, completely become Lu Ren's little fanboy, firmly believing he is a hidden legendary mage coming every day to seek advice, though Lu Ren can teach nothing. Maruisi Sichuan neutral, 5,100, esteemed 60100, acknowledges Lu Ren's crucial role in the crisis regarding him as a potentially important force, also a trouble to be wary of. One afternoon, Lu Ren was sitting at a small table in the backyard gnawing on a super tough breadstick improved version with nuts even harder on the teeth, kindly provided by Noamo, while trying to use a faint thread of arcane energy to wipe away the stubborn remnants of undead resentment on the metal fragment surface. Suddenly, an unusual commotion arose from the front yard of the inn. It was not panic, but a clamor mixed with amazement, curiosity, and even a hint of awe. Lu Ren rose curiously and walked to the small door leading to the front yard. He lifted a crack to peer outside. There at the inn's entrance stood a carriage exquisitely ornate and elegant, utterly incongruous with the rustic style of Shanjin Town. The carriage body was crafted from a light wood that emitted a faint golden luster, its lines flowing and graceful, inlaid with intricate patterns of intertwined vines and stars etched in mithril. Two snow-white horses, magnificent and spirited, pulled the carriage, their manes meticulously groomed. But what drew everyone's gaze was the passenger who had just alighted. She was a female high elf. Tall and slender, she wore a silver-white velvet robe that flowed like moonlight, its edges embroidered with delicate, faintly breathing azure arcane runes. Her brilliant golden hair, like molten gold, was elegantly gathered behind her head by a mithril circlet adorned with a star sapphire, revealing a smooth, full forehead and a pair of iconic, slender, perfectly curved pointed ears. Her features were as exquisite as the finest work of art, her skin fair nearly to transparency, her nose high and straight, her lips a delicate shade of cherry blossom. Most striking were her eyes, like the purest winter spring's jade, clear cold, carrying a detached, lofty indifference that looked down upon all beings. In her hand, she held a staff taller than herself, crafted entirely from pristine crystal. At its tip floated a slowly rotating orb that emitted a soft lunar radiance, proclaiming her identity as a powerful mage. She stood there silently, and an invisible potent arcane field and an icy aloof aura emanated from her, instantly silencing the bustling townsfolk who held their breath involuntarily, their eyes filled with both awe and self-consciousness. A high elf, and such a noble, powerful mage. Why would she come to this remote little place like Shanjin? Lao Yuehan rubbed his hands together, his face creased into the most obsequious smile of his life, and cautiously approached. Venerable mage, welcome to the Lion's Pride Inn. May I ask? I am looking for someone. The high elf spoke. Her voice was like spring water striking jade, crisp and melodious, yet carrying a natural aloofness and unquestionable authority. She used standard common, but with a unique song-like elven accent. Her ice-blue eyes swept indifferently over the awed crowd at the inn's entrance, and finally, as if penetrating walls and distance, locked precisely onto Lu Ren, who was spying from behind the back door. A human named Lu Ren. Her voice clearly reached everyone's ears and pierced Lu Ren's heart like an icicle. I sense the ripples of chaos. Take me to him. Ripples of chaos. Lu Ren's heart clenched. Cold sweat instantly soaked his back. Was she here for this? A high elf? Inua City. Could it be related to that servant of Shadow Fawn? Or was she after the metal fragment in his hand? Fear seized him instantly. A high elf mage, one of the most powerful spell-casting races in Azeroth. Crushing him now would be easier than crushing an ant. Run. Where to? She had clearly locked onto him. Just as Lu Ren's mind went blank considering whether to use Shadow Dash, on a gamble, though he might only flash 3 meters and land face first. Lu Ren. Advisor Lu Ren. Lao Yuehan's voice, tinged with panic and a hint of sycophancy, came from outside the back door. There is a distinguished mage from Inua City looking for you. There was no escape. Lu Ren took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the storm within, striving to appear composed. He straightened the relatively clean linen shirt that Lao Yuehan had given him, still pathetically plain, clutched the cloth-wrapped metal fragment tightly in his hand hidden behind his back, and then pulled open the back door. When he stepped out exposed to the cold, scrutinizing gaze of the high elf female mage, the entire inn's front yard fell silent. Everyone's eyes focused on him, full of curiosity, awe, and a hint of sympathy. Lu Ren felt as if he were stripped naked and placed under a spotlight. He steeled himself, walked to a spot 5 paces from the female mage, stopped, bowed slightly, and said in as steady a voice as he could muster, "I am Lu Ren. May I ask, esteemed mage, what business do you have with me?" He could feel the aura emanating from her, a power that was both oppressive and enigmatic. The immense arcane pressure, like an invisible mountain, made it difficult for him to breathe. The female, Mage Lyadilla, Lu Ren later learned her name, had ice blue eyes that were like the most precise scanners, sizing up Lu Ren from top to bottom. Her gaze was sharp as a knife, as if it could pierce through skin and stare straight into the soul. When her gaze swept past Lu Ren's right hand hidden behind his back, where he held the metal fragment, Lu Ren clearly felt a very subtle wave-like ripple in her arcane force field. She really came for this. The energy fluctuation on you is very peculiar. Lyadilla finally spoke, her voice still cold, but with a hint of inquiry, chaotic yet containing the possibility of order. Like countless forces forcibly kneaded together, yet not immediately collapsing. She took a graceful step forward, and her powerful aura made Lu Ren instinctively step back half a step. What are you holding in your hand? I can feel. It emits a nauseating necromantic aura and a trace of an even more ancient chaotic echo that should not belong to this world. Lu Ren's heart leaped to his throat. He gripped the fragment tightly, his mind racing. Should he tell the truth? Or make up an excuse? Lady Lyadilla. A voice tinged with surprise and weakness broke the deadlock. Nomo, with his half-scorched afro hair supported by Little Tom, limped out of the inn. It really is you. How did you come to this backwater from Silvermoon City? Lyadilla's gaze moved away from Lu Ren to Nomo, and a faint, almost imperceptible trace of helplessness flickered in her ice-blue eyes. Nomo wrenched. I should have known. Your mentor Rom submitted 17 reports to the Silvermoon Council accusing you of stealing his portable spatial folding oven core prototype and half a warehouse of thorium ingots. The Silvermoon City Guard has been looking for you for a long time. Well, Nomo scratched his charred black hair awkwardly. That was just a minor academic disagreement. Yes, academic disagreement. Old Rom is too conservative. My design philosophy is ahead of its time. Look, I've made great achievements here. He pointed at himself, then at Lu Ren. Lu Ren and I. We teamed up with a breadstick. Plus a little bit of my genius modification. We blew up a necromantic summoning altar. Saved the entire town. Breadstick. Blowing up a necromantic altar. Lyadilla's delicate eyebrows flickered almost imperceptibly, and her gaze at Lu Ren became even more strange and curious. She obviously couldn't understand the mad logic of the gnome engineer, but Nomo's testimony seemed to give her a more concrete understanding of Lu Ren's peculiarity. Necromantic altar. Lyadilla's attention returned to the core issue, her voice turning serious. In Elwyn Forest. Recently, Dalaran's arcane monitoring network detected abnormal necromantic energy bursts and some kind of chaotic energy disturbance that is difficult to analyze in the southern end of the Eastern Kingdoms. The Kirin Tor sent investigators, but the clues pointed to an item lost by Silvermoon City years ago. Or rather, fragments of an item. Her gaze locked onto Lu Ren's right hand behind his back again. Does that fragment bear the phoenix emblem of Silvermoon City? Or elven runes? Lu Ren's heart trembled violently. A fragment of an item lost by Silvermoon City. He instinctively looked down at his clenched right hand. On that twisted metal shard. Seemed to, in the depths of a certain groove faintly visible, was half of an extremely vague molten damaged bird-shaped pattern, and a few twisted incomplete runic carvings. Indeed, not human language. Could it be that this fragment belonged to the High Elves, stolen and corrupted by that servant of Shadow Fawn? Lu Ren hesitated for a moment, then decided to take a gamble. He slowly extended his right hand, holding the fragment from behind his back, and opened his palm. The twisted metal shard wrapped in cloth was exposed under Lyadilla's cold gaze. We destroyed a necromantic altar, and this is part of the altar's core. Lu Ren's voice was a little hoarse, left by a black-robed figure who called himself Servant of Shadowfang. He said, "The key is broken, but the door will open eventually. The seed of chaos will return eventually." When Lyadila heard the word Shadowfang, the first obvious intense emotional fluctuation appeared on her eternally icy beautiful face. Her ice-blue pupils contracted sharply, and the powerful arcane force field around her vibrated violently for a moment, even producing a faint hum in the air. A chill instantly spread, dropping the surrounding temperature by several degrees. Shadowfang. Her voice lost its previous cold calm, replaced by a tinge of stunned anger and hidden fear. "Are you sure?" he said. Shadowfang. Lu Ren was startled by her reaction and quickly nodded. "Yes," he said. "Servant of Shadowfang." Lyadila's expression turned extremely ugly, as if covered with a layer of frost. She stared at the fragment in Lu Ren's hand, then suddenly looked up at Lu Ren, her eyes becoming incredibly sharp and complex, as if she wanted to see through him completely. "The seed of chaos will return eventually." She repeated Lu Ren's words softly, a storm seeming to brew in her ice-blue eyes. Her gaze swept back and forth between Lu Ren and the metal fragment, and finally a chilling guess seemed to take shape in her mind. She suddenly stepped forward, her powerful aura making it almost impossible for Lu Ren to breathe. She did not reach for the fragment, but extended her slender jade-like finger, its tip swirling with a faint blue arcane light, and pointed it at Lu Ren's forehead. "Let me see the seed in your soul." Lyadila's voice carried an irresistible authority and urgency. Lu Ren was terrified. Soul probing. That was 10,000 times more frightening than a body search. He had a system inside him. The secret of the Omni Weaver. If that were discovered. Without thinking, his survival instinct instantly overwhelmed his fear. His newly recovered mental energy surged wildly. "Shadow step," he roared in his heart. His body was instantly enveloped by thin shadow energy. With a buzz, his figure blurred in place. He tried to blink backward. However, Lyadila, as a high-elf archmage, reacted far faster than he imagined. The arcane light on her finger pointing at Lu Ren's forehead instantly surged, turning into a solid pale blue energy shackle that flew out faster than his movement, accurately wrapping around Lu Ren's fading shadow silhouette. With a puff, Lu Ren's figure only blinked, less than 2 meters before it hit an invisible arcane wall. The shadow energy instantly dissipated. The pale blue energy shackle coiled around his arms and body like a snake, bringing a cold restraint and powerful suppression. His mental energy froze as if instantly frozen. "Ugh!" Lu Ren grunted, pinned in place by the powerful arcane force, unable to move. He could only watch helplessly as Lyadila's arcane-lighted fingertip approached his forehead. Fear. Despair. Lu Ren felt his soul freezing. Just as Lyadila's fingertip was about to touch the skin of Lu Ren's forehead, and the cold arcane light was about to pierce into his consciousness. Buzz. An indescribable, chaotic, and violent will suddenly burst out from the cloth-wrapped metal fragment in Lu Ren's right hand. This will was full of blasphemy, venom, and endless hatred for the world of the living. It was the remnant necromantic resentment of the Servant of Shadowfang. It seemed to be enraged by Lyadila's powerful arcane force and her attempt to probe Lu Ren's soul. The fragment vibrated violently. The cloth wrapping it instantly turned to ash. The twisted metal surface, the remaining necromantic runes, erupted with blinding, filthy, dark red light. A visible evil energy shockwave mixed with gray-white bone dust and dark green viscous liquid exploded like a festering tumor, sweeping toward Lyadila and Lu Ren, who were close at hand. This sudden burst of evil energy from within the fragment completely caught Lyadila off guard. All her attention was on Lu Ren, and she never expected that the fragment itself still contained such a powerful passive counterattack mechanism. What a flash of astonishment crossed Lyadila's ice-blue eyes. She instantly withdrew her finger, pointing at Lu Ren's forehead, and her hands rapidly traced a complex arcane rune in front of her chest. "Ice barrier," she commanded. A thick, crystal-clear ice shield instantly condensed in front of her. Boom! The evil necromantic energy shockwave slammed violently into the ice shield. Crack! A piercing sound of shattering. The ice shield Lyadila hastily conjured only held for a moment before being covered with spiderweb-like cracks. The evil energy, though weakened by most of its corrosive and impact force, still slammed into Lyadila and Lu Ren. Bang! Bang! Lyadila grunted, staggering back several steps, her face even paler, her elegant robe stained with filthy gray-green slime. Lu Ren fared worse, directly thrown back by the explosion impact, crashing heavily onto the muddy ground of the inn's backyard, his whole body in pain, and the arcane shackles that bound him were also shaken loose. The metal fragment flew out of his hand, tumbling in the air, drawing a parabola, and clattered onto the ground not far from Lu Ren. The dark red light on the fragment's surface quickly dimmed, returning to its twisted, lifeless appearance, as if the terrifying explosion just now was just an illusion. The scene was a mess. The onlooking villagers fled in panic. Old John and Noma were dumbfounded. Lyodila steadied herself, looked at the stains on her robe, then at the disheveled Lu-Rin on the ground, and the fragment that had returned to calm, and for the first time a look of uncertainty and a hint of wariness appeared on her beautiful face. That evil energy just now was not just necromancy. It was also mixed with a kind of extremely ancient and pure void erosion power that she had never seen before. That was definitely not power that ordinary necromancers could control. Moreover, the fragment's protective reaction toward Lu-Rin. She looked at Lu-Rin, who was struggling to get up, with an extremely complex expression. This seemingly weak human not only had a peculiar chaotic energy entangled with him, but also had a strange connection with such a dangerous evil item involving void erosion, and even invoked the taboo name Shadow Fawn. You? Lyodila's voice carried a subtle gravity. Who exactly are you? Lu-Rin spat out the mud in his mouth, clutched his aching chest, and looked at the powerful and dangerous high elf mage in front of him with only one thought in his mind: big trouble. And this trouble seemed even more terrifying than the Defias and the undead. Just as the atmosphere was tense and the two sides were confronting each other, a clear, pleasant laugh, like wind chimes, suddenly rang out from the roof of the inn. So lively. Little Chromie just passed by for a nap and saw such a wonderful show. Everyone looked up. On the roof of the inn beside the chimney sat a little girl, who looked about 7 or 8 years old, wearing a bright red and white plaid dress, a matching small round hat, 2 golden braids, swinging her short legs in red leather shoes, holding a honey bread larger than her face that emitted a tempting sweet aroma, and munching on it with relish, her rosy little face covered in breadcrumbs and honey. She looked innocent and harmless. But the moment Lyodila saw this little girl, her pupils contracted sharply again. The powerful and restrained arcane force field around her rippled violently, like water disturbed by a stone. Her hand gripping the staff tightened instantly, her knuckles turning white. The usual icy arrogance on her face was replaced by a kind of near horrified shock and disbelief. Bronze Dragon. Lyodila's voice carried an uncontrollable tremor, shouting out. Time itself seemed to freeze solid at Lyodila's startled cry of Bronze Dragon. The inn's backyard was permeated with the foul aura of the undead fragment's explosion, the earthy scent of mud, and an indescribable eerie pressure that made the very fabric of space-time feel thick and sluggish. Lyodila, the high elf mage, as noble and aloof as an ice sculpture, now clutched her moonlight staff, like a startled snowy owl, her knuckles white from excessive force. The perfect beauty of her face had drained of color, and her icy blue eyes were filled with shocked disbelief and a deep-seated reverence. The powerful arcane aura around her flickered violently, like a candle flame in a storm, betraying her extreme inner turmoil. Nuomo's mouth gaped open, his thick-lensed glasses askew on his nose. The electric wrench in his hand clattered to the ground unnoticed. He looked at the little girl nibbling bread on the roof, then at Lyodila, who was on high alert, his small head filled with enormous question marks. Bronze Dragon. What's that? A new type of mechanical strider. Old John and the other braver townsfolk who hadn't fled far were utterly bewildered, completely clueless about what. In their eyes, the golden-haired little girl on the roof, though appearing strangely, looked nothing more than a greedy little creature. Lu-Rin struggled to his feet, his whole body aching as if his bones were dislocated, his chest throbbing from the blast wave, and the taste of mud still lingering in his mouth. He too stared blankly at the little girl on the roof. Bronze Dragon. What was Lyodila talking about? A dragon. The legendary sky-covering, flame-spewing creature. What did that have to do with this innocent-looking little thing holding honey bread? What did that have to do with this innocent-looking little thing holding honey bread? The little girl on the roof, Kelomi, let out another string of laughter as crisp as wind chimes. She swung her legs, utterly unconcerned by Lyodila's shock and the others' stunned gazes. She extended her pink little tongue, licking off the last traces of honey and breadcrumbs from the corner of her mouth with relish, then carefully tucked the remaining half of the bread into the pocket of her redand white checkered dress, a pocket that seemed small but easily swallowed the bread. Oh my, I've been recognized. Kelomi tilted her head. Her big emerald eyes, which should have been pure and childlike, now seemed to reflect the endless river of stars swirling with an inhuman, all-seeing wisdom and cunning. Lyodila Morningstar, high arcane mage of Silvermoon, the Morningstar of Quel'Thalas, whom you ran pretty fast, slipped out of the trouble at the Sunwell, and came to this backwater to look for seeds. Her tone carried a childlike innocence and curiosity, but the content of her words struck like thunder, precisely hitting Lyodila's deepest secret. Lyodila's body visibly swayed. Her face grew even paler, her lips pressed tightly together, and the hand holding her staff trembled slightly, yet she could not utter a single word of rebuttal. Before a true guardian of time, her pride and secrets were like thin ice under the sun. Keloami's gaze then turned to Lu Run, who was lying disheveled on the ground. Her emerald eyes sparkled with intriguing interest, as if she were looking at a novel, an amusing toy. As for you, Lu Ren, hee how interesting. A tangled mess from outside, yet somehow wrapped in the threads of this world. Her small chin pointed toward the metal fragment on the ground, which had returned to calm, but exuded an ominous aura. A broken toy from Shadowfang, and you dare to play with it. Careful not to get your fingers caught in the door crack. Lu Ren's heart pounded violently. A tangled mess from outside. Did she know he was a transmigrator? And she knew about Shadowfang and the door. Just what was this little girl? Keloami leaped lightly from the chimney, landing like a feather on the muddy, filthy backyard ground, without a sound. Her little red leather shoes didn't even pick up a speck of dust. She bounced over to the metal fragment, reached out her small fair hand, and seemed about to pick it up. Don't touch it. It's dangerous. Lu Ren shouted instinctively. The terrifying explosion moments ago was still vivid in his mind. Danger? Keloami laughed as if she had heard something hilarious, her big emerald eyes curving into crescents. It's pretty dangerous for little fish and shrimp splashing around in the river of time. Her small hand passed through the lingering undead resentment and void erosion aura around the fragment, an aura that even Lyadila found daunting, as if through a harmless mist. She effortlessly picked up the twisted fragment and even weighed it in her hand a couple of times. The fragment in her hand was like the most ordinary piece of iron, showing no abnormal reaction. Completely damaged. The little bug inside the lingering undead was scared out of its wits. Keloami pouted, seeming a bit disappointed. But still, this little echo of chaos makes it decent. As she spoke under Lyadila and Lu Ren's horrified gazes, she actually opened her small mouth, and with a loud awe bit into the metal fragment. Crack! A crisp sound like biting into a biscuit rang out. The metal fragment, which even Maris had feared containing undead resentment and void erosion, crumbled under Keloami's little white teeth, like the crispiest cookie, instantly breaking off a small piece. She actually chewed it. Her face even showed a satisfied expression, as if tasting a novel snack. The taste. So-so. A bit rusty and a hint of sour expired yogurt. Keloami chewed while giving a vague evaluation, then casually tossed the remaining large half of the fragment like garbage to the stunned Lu Ren. Lu Ren fumbled to catch it. The fragment was cold in his hand, still retaining the warmth of Keloami's little hand, and a row of clear tiny teeth marks. He felt his worldview being ground against the floor. What kind of monster was this? Lyadila watched Keloami's unbelievable actions, and the shock on her face gradually gave way to a deep sense of helplessness and awe. She put away her staff, calmed her arcane aura, and bowed slightly to Keloami with an extremely complex, even humble posture. Great guardian of time. Lady Keloami, your will is the flow of time. Silver Moon means no offense. Keloami waved her little hand dismissively. All right, don't be so serious, little star. I'm just a passing nosy gnome. Well now, a little girl. I couldn't care less about your fighting and killing, looking for seeds and opening doors. I'm just a passing nosy gnome. Well now, a little girl. I couldn't care less about your fighting and killing, looking for seeds and opening doors. She bounced over to Lu Ren, looked up at him with her small face, and stared into his eyes with emerald orbs that carried a penetrating, soul-searching power at close range. But you little one. Keloami extended a tiny finger covered in breadcrumbs and suspected metal shavings, poking Lu Ren's knee. It was as high as she could reach. The ripples on you have stirred up the surface of this stretch of the river of time. Many little waves have gone astray. That won't do. Her small face intentionally scrunched up, trying to look serious, but it only seemed like an imitation of an adult. Ripples. Waves. Lu Ren was completely lost. Oh, you're so dumb. Keloami put her hands on her hips. It's you. Your appearance. Your crazy maneuvers. She pointed at Lu Ren, then at the still bewildered Nwomo. Fighting with chairs, putting out fire with flour, destroying undead with breadsticks, and this unlucky elf trying to poke your head. All kinds of chaos. You've tangled up the threads of fate that should have flowed into different little puddles. She pointed at Lu Ren, then at the still bewildered Nwomo. Fighting with chairs, putting out fire with flour, destroying undead with breadsticks, and this unlucky elf trying to poke your head. All kinds of chaos. You've tangled up the threads of fate that should have flowed into different little puddles. She stood on tiptoe, trying hard to pat Lu Ren on the shoulder, still couldn't reach, so she finally patted his thigh. The little trouble you've stirred up, you have to clean it up yourself. The timeline hates messy tangles. You have to straighten them out. Otherwise, be careful of a big cleanup. She made a throat-slitting gesture which looked especially eerie on her delicate doll-like face. Lu Ren was utterly confused, but the words big cleanup and the throat-slitting gesture sent chills down his spine. He vaguely felt that the ripples and trouble Keloami mentioned were probably far more serious than he could imagine. Lady Keloami, Lyadila stepped forward, speaking respectfully, but firmly. That fragment. And him. She looked at Lu Run. This matter is of great importance, possibly involving ancient taboos and the threat of the void. Silvermoon. Silvermoon, Silvermoon. Kelomi interrupted her impatiently, her little mouth pouting high. So annoying. I told you to handle your own business. Isn't the fragment in his hand? She pointed at Lu Ren. As for him. He an interesting variable. For now you can't lock him in a cage for research. He has to work. As she spoke, she suddenly pulled something out of her seemingly ordinary little pocket, a palm-sized, ancient-looking brass hourglass. The frame of the hourglass was engraved with countless tiny, constantly flowing runes. The sand inside was not ordinary, but silvery sand shimmering with starlight flowing at an extremely slow, almost stagnant pace. Here, take this. Kelomi shoved the hourglass into Lu Ren's hands. Little time trick hourglass, one-time trial version. When you feel time, stuck, or about to be smashed by the waves, just turn it over. Remember, you can only use it once. Once it's gone, it's gone. Consider it. Advance payment for your work. She winked slyly. Lu Ren held the brass hourglass, which felt warm to the touch, yet emitted an indescribable temporal fluctuation, as if he were holding a bomb that could go off at any moment. A time hourglass. Was this something you could just give away? But Kelomi paid him no further attention. She turned and bounced toward Lyadila, spreading her little hands. All right, little star, you've seen the fragment, you've seen the person, and I've finished my snack. Time to go back and report to your son well, right? Remember about my part. Make it vague. I don't want to be nagged by those old fossils. Lyadila looked into Kelomi's emerald eyes, which held an all-seeing, unyielding power, and finally bowed her head deeply. As you command, Lady Kelomi. She understood that before a bronze dragon, especially this one known for pranks and unpredictability, any insistence was futile. She gave Lu Ren a deep, complex look. A gaze filled with warning inquiry, and a hint of helplessness at being forcibly overridden by a higher existence. Then, without another word, she turned gracefully, but with a touch of melancholy, and walked toward her ornate elven carriage. Hey, wait, my thorium ingots. Momo tried to chase after her, but was frozen in place by a cold glare from Lyadila, and could only shrink back. The carriage started, drawn by two magnificent white horses. Carrying the burdened high elf mage, it soon disappeared at the end of Gold's Hires Street, as if it had never been there. Kelomi nodded in satisfaction, clapped her little hands together, as if she had accomplished a trivial task. She turned to look at Lu Run, who was still holding the hourglass with a dazed expression, and a bright, innocent smile spread across her small face. All right. The meddling little butterfly. Your confusion period is over. Next. She deliberately drew out her words, her emerald eyes sparkling with mischievous light. Time to go to the newbie village and pull off some crazy maneuvers. Remember, the timeline is watching you. Have fun. Before her voice faded, Kelomi's small figure, like a soap bubble in the sunlight, instantly became transparent, blurred, and then, with a soft pop, it vanished completely into the air, leaving only a few breadcrumbs dusted with honey sweetness drifting slowly down, proof that she had once existed. The backyard fell into a dead silence. Lu Ren stared at his empty palm, the hourglass clutched tightly in his subconscious, then at the few breadcrumbs on the ground, and then at the stupefied Nomo, old John, and others. Everything that had just happened felt like a bizarre and absurd nightmare. A high elf mage. A mysterious bronze dragon little girl. Jaws that could bite through evil shards. The hourglass of time. Ripples in the timeline. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming, its impact too intense, causing Lu Ren, already mentally drained and physically aching, to completely short-circuit. He opened his mouth to say something, but a powerful, uncontrollable wave of nausea surged up from his stomach. Under the gaze of everyone, Consultant Lu Ren, the hero sought by the high elf, gifted a divine artifact by the mysterious little girl, considered an explosive kindred spirit by Nomo, and hailed as a legendary mage by Pete, bent over the muddy ground of the inn's backyard and vomited violently, utterly losing his composure. The few remaining breadstick scraps in his stomach mixed with sour bile, all expelled thoroughly. The violent retching pulled at his wounds, leaving him teary-eyed and utterly disheveled. Aftermath of mental exhaustion, severe somatic reaction, vomiting triggered. Hybrid class activation, progress 5. Status stable. New quest prompt, newbie villages wild, moves chapter unlocked. Main quest, straighten the ripples of the timeline 0. Side quest, adapt to life in Azeroth, improve strength, resolve the minor troubles caused by you undefined. The system's prompt remained calm and detached, as if the thrilling events just moments ago had nothing to do with it. Nomo finally snapped out of his petrified state. He picked up the electric wrench from the ground, looked at Lu Run, who was vomiting his guts out, and his small face was filled with sympathy and a hint of shared experience. Buddy, I know the feeling. The first time I saw Old Man Romer's beard get singed off by his experiment explosion, I threw up too. You'll get used to it after a while. Old John, grimacing, looked at the mud soiled by Lu Ren's vomit and at the remnants of undead slime and explosion marks on the back door and walls. He wailed in anguish, "My backyard. My wall. Cleaning fees. Repair costs. Consultant Lu Ren. This calls for extra pay. No extra work." Lu Ren vomited until he was nearly faint. He finally straightened up, wiped his mouth roughly with his sleeve, his face pale as paper. He looked at Old John's pained expression, then at his own disheveled state, and at the metal fragment with teeth marks and the warm, mysterious hourglass in his hand. A profound sense of absurdity washed over him. The state of confusion was over, and it ended in such a brutal way. Lyadra's warnings, Chrome's riddles, the threat of the metal fragment, the burden of the hourglass, and that ripple in the timeline, and the troubles needing to be straightened. All these things weighed on his mind like mountains. But at the same time, a strange feeling was taking root. He no longer seemed to be the completely passive, drifting, invisible figure. He had been swept into a vast vortex, but he had also touched the deeper secrets of this world, and the possibility of power. Weaver of all things. Seed of chaos. Variable of the timeline. These labels were heavy and dangerous, but they also meant opportunity. He tightened his grip on the fragment and the hourglass. The cold touch slightly cleared his chaotic thoughts. No matter what, survival, growing stronger, unraveling the mysteries, finding a way home. That was the foundation. Mr. John. Lu Ren's voice was hoarse, but carried a calm. After surviving a disaster. Cleaning fees. Repair costs. Deduct them from my wages. He'll keep working. He paused, looking toward the southeast, the direction of the Rotwood Forest, also the location of the trouble Chromie had hinted at. But before that, I need to find a place to take a bath. Also, I think I need a, well, more suitable weapon. He couldn't rely on throwing chairs with his mind or dodging axes by wrestling next time, could he? Old John stared at Lu Ren's calm, yet resolute eyes, hesitated, then waved his hand helplessly. "Tom, take the consultant to the back well to fetch water. Then go to the storeroom. There's a rusty old sword in the corner that apprentice Frankrun made for practice, couldn't sell it anyway. Give it to him for now." Nomo scurried over, his small eyes gleaming at the metal fragment and hourglass in Lu Ren's hand. "Buddy, bathing is so boring. Come to my temporary workshop, the inn's woodshed. Let's study this fragment. And this hourglass. The power of time. If we can extract just a little. Add it to my breadstick bombs." He seemed already envisioning a grand blueprint of time reversal breadsticks or future predicting explosions. Lu Ren looked at Nomo's fanatical expression, then down at the 2 hot potatoes in his hands, and twitched the corner of his mouth. The wild moves of the newbie village. It seemed there was no avoiding them. A few days later, the wounds of Gold's Hire were slowly healing. The grief from the undead attack had not yet faded, but life had to go on. The townsfolk cleared debris, repaired houses, and the guards increased patrols, especially along the forest edge to the southeast. Lu Ren's days seemed to return to peace. During the day, he worked odd jobs at the Lion's Pride and practicing the most basic swings with the rusty chipped iron sword that Nomo said couldn't even split firewood, much to Old John's anguish, as he ruined plenty of kindling. Nomo, true to form, had set up his temporary workshop in the woodshed, banging and clanging all day, with occasional small explosions and black smoke accompanied by the gnome's excited or frustrated shrieks, all under the banner of researching fragment energy residue and the feasibility of applying time power, which kept Old John's blood pressure skyrocketing. Lu Ren used every spare moment to both recover his mental strength and cautiously attempt to use chaos perception to communicate with the faint chaos imprint within the metal fragment. The process was still painful and slow, like groping through a thorn-filled darkness, but each tiny success deepened his understanding of the weaver of all things power, and his class activation progress crawled up to 6. The reputation system was also shifting. Gold's Hire residents respect 50,100 reverence 70100. Note the heroic aura of the Knight of the Undead persists, and the events of High Elf Mage visit and mysterious little girl rumored to be Lu Ren's magical pet added a layer of mystery. Nomo Spanner reverence 80,100 worship 90100. Note sees Lu Ren as sole partner in chaos energy research, convinced they will usher in a new era of engineering at the cost of explosions. Pete Whisper reverence 75,100 worship 85100. Note witnessed the High Elf Mage's reverence, and Lu Ren being gifted a divine artifact, the hourglass, by a mysterious entity. His admiration flows like a mighty river. That afternoon, Lu Ren was sweating profusely, practicing a mental version of heroic throw against a wooden post, trying to will a stone to fly and hit the post, but the stone wobbled half a meter, then fell when Marshal Marius' figure appeared in the inn's backyard. His left arm was still in a sling, but his complexion had improved and his eyes regained their sharpness and steadiness. "Lu Ren." Marius' voice was calm. "Marshal." Lu Ren stopped practicing and wiped his sweat. "Your special consultant credentials." "From Stormwind." There's still no clear reply yet. The higher-ups seem divided. The involvement of Lady Lyodra and her report have made things more complicated. He glanced at the metal fragment hidden in Lu Ren's clothes. Lu Ren had wrapped it in cloth and kept it close. Silvermoon's stance is unclear, but the pressure is considerable. Lu Ren's heart sank. This was not good news. However, Marius paused, then changed the subject. Goldtire's crisis, you deserve the credit. I, Marius Stoutman, acknowledge your value as an ally. He unclasped a small money pouch from his belt and tossed it to Lu Ren. This is your reward for assisting in defending Goldtire and dealing with the subsequent troubles. Not much, but enough to buy you decent clothes and a slightly better weapon. That rusty sword at old John's place is beneath you. Lu Ren caught the pouch. It was heavy in his hand. Dozens of gleaming gold coins and quite a few silver and copper. A fortune for him. He looked at Marius in surprise. Don't get too excited, Marius said flatly. The money isn't free. Goldtire's reconstruction needs resources. Our supply route to the Eastvale logging camp and jade mine has been unstable lately. Not the Defias, not the undead. It's the forest itself. The forest itself. Lu Ren was puzzled. Wolves, Marius frowned. The forest wolves of Elwyn Forest have become unusually aggressive and hostile. They roam in packs, attacking lone lumberjacks and miners, even daring to assault small escort groups. Their behavior is nothing like ordinary beasts. Captain Black suspects something deep in the forest might be affecting the beast's minds, or a powerful alpha wolf. He looked at Lu Ren, his eyes meaningful. Your perception might come in handy. Black will lead a team to the Eastvale logging camp tomorrow to escort a batch of urgently needed timber. I need you to go with them. Find the cause of the wolves' anomaly, or at least ensure the timber's safe return. This is your first official assignment as consultant, and a chance to prove you can straighten out troubles. He emphasized the last words, clearly having taken Chromie's words to heart. Lu Ren tightened his grip on the money pouch and the rusty iron sword. The Eastvale logging camp. Abnormal wolves. A new mission, new troubles. This was clearly the first ripple that Chromie had said needed his wild moves and straightening. He watched Marius' receding figure, then looked down at his shabby equipment and still weak state. Buy new gear, or keep using this broken sword. Just then from the woodshed came Nomo's excited, piercing scream. Success. Lu Ren. Come quick. My arcane spark breadcrumb bait launcher prototype Mark I. Powered by the fragment's residual energy. ITLL totally bamboozle those dumb wolves. We're gonna be rich. Ow. Don't explode. Wait. Don't touch that. Boom. With a muffled explosion and a cloud of smoke, the woodshed door was blown open and Nomo rushed out sporting a new soot-black hairstyle and covered in ash, coughing violently. In his hands, he clutched a smoking, oddly shaped metal device that looked like a cross between a slingshot and a morning glory flower. Lu Ren. He suddenly felt that facing the frenzied wolf pack with Captain Black might be safer than staying near Nomo's workshop. He silently tucked the money pouch into his chest, tightened his grip on the rusty iron sword, and headed toward the blacksmith shop at the front of the inn. The wild moves of the newbie village. It seemed he needed to first get himself a decent prop. He just wondered if Frankrin's blacksmith shop had any weapon that could withstand Nomo's creativity and the echo of the undead fragment. He looked up at the sky. The setting sun painted the sky a golden red. Tomorrow would be another unknown journey. And in his chest, the metal fragment with teeth marks seemed to flicker extremely faintly. In the twilight, Lu Ren forced his back straight, mimicking the steady posture of the guards, but the rough inner lining of the new hard leather armor chafed his neck, each jolt bringing a fiery sting. The iron sword he had acquired from Franklin's smithy finally sharpened, its scabbard thumped against his outer thigh, with every jolt of the old horse the dull rhythm a constant reminder of his own clumsiness and his incongruity in this grim environment. The old horse beneath him snorted irritably, its breath mingling with the thick fog. At his side, Pete Chinyu followed closely. The young blacksmith's apprentice wore a face flushed with excessive excitement and barely concealed tension, his eyes startlingly bright, like a startled fawn, constantly seeking reassurance from Lu Ren, yet darting quickly to the shadowy forest edges that seemed to swallow everything. He clutched a makeshift hardwood spear, its tip glistening with moist cold light in the mist, his knuckles white for Consultant Lu. Pete's voice was barely a whisper, carrying the unique adolescent awe catalyzed by fear and an irrepressible urge to confide, yet it sounded piercingly loud in the deathly silence of the forest. Do you think those wolves can really become that twisted? Even Captain Black. His gaze swept again to the relatively decent iron sword at Lu Ren's waist, as if it were a sacred emblem that could dispel fear. Lu Ren's throat felt as if scoured by sandpaper, dry and tight. The increasingly thick stench of blood and musk from the forest depths became almost a tangible pressure. At the rolling edges of the dense fog, shadowy, distorted figures seemed to flicker and vanish so fast they seemed like illusions, yet leaving icy claws in the depths of the heart. The arcane spark breadcrumb bait launcher prototype that Nomo had forced into his hands before departure. A crude contraption of rough animal hide and unknown metal wires emanating a faint, but highly unstable arcane fluctuation, now weighed heavily in his inner armor pocket, like a mini-bomb ready to detonate at any moment, each jolt jarring his sensitive nerves. Deeper still pressed against his chest was the metal shard with the cold bite marks and that faint yet stubborn imprint of chaos. It seemed to sense the pervasive malice around them, pulsing with a faint, deep throb, like a distant, muffled heartbeat from the abyss. The captain said, "There's something unusual," Lu Run replied vaguely, his voice dry, struggling to keep his gaze alert, fixed on a patch of unusually dense dark bushes to his right that loomed like a crouching beast in the mist. "Stay sharp, Pete, keep close, don't fall behind." He instinctively tightened his grip on the rough, cold reins, his knuckles white from the strain, the cold sweat on his palms, making the leather slick and sticky. "Yes, consultant." Pete straightened his thin chest, his voice carrying a solemnity bordering on tragic, as if Lu Ren's simple words were the most solid talisman. He gripped his wooden spear tightly, his knuckles whitening again. Silence. The thick, tangible fog swallowed all sound, leaving only the oppressive heartbeat and the dull thud of hooves. Time stretched infinitely in the stagnant air. Suddenly Captain Black reined in his horse, raising his clenched fist in a silent, absolute command to halt. All guards instantly froze, holding their breath, their spears, slightly raised tips, glinting coldly in the... Lu Ren's heart clenched violently, nearly leaping into his throat. Pete trembled in terror, almost dropping his wooden spear. Then it came. A piercing howl, sharp and shrill enough to tear the soul, erupted without warning from the dense, ink-black bushes. The howl was short, piercing, filled with a pure, extreme, irrational savagery, like frozen, venomous fangs stabbing into every eardrum. Before the sound faded, the thick bushes were violently ripped apart from within, as if by an invisible giant. 5 or 6 massive gray-black shadows carrying a nauseating thick stench of blood and death shot out, like venomous arrows from the abyss, tearing through the mist and charging. Their speed surpassed visual capture, leaving only blurred afterimages and a foul odor. Their target was precise and deadly, the vulnerable flank of the group, especially Pete, who was positioned on the outer edge, thin and holding only a fragile wooden spear. This was no ordinary forest wolf's speed, nor the gaze of a wild beast. The leading wolf, huge as a half-grown calf, its gray-black fur like steel needles soaked in blood, bristled. Its fangs were bared, thick, stinking drool dripping in strands onto the muddy ground. Its eyes were a murky dark red, like 2 seething pools of blood, burning not with hunger or wildness, but with a pure, mindless, consuming desire for destruction, utterly devoured by some invisible madness. It was an unnatural, spine-chilling madness. Enemy attack. Right flank. Protect the newcomers. Captain Black's roar was like a sudden thunderclap, instantly overpowering the chilling howl. His massive frame exploded with astonishing power, twisting his horse around, his heavy two-handed sword already drawn, its broad blade cutting a cold arc through the mist. But distance and position left him helpless to watch the giant wolf, its eyes burning with destruction, pounce with thunderous force upon the terrified Pete. Pete. Lu Ren's pupils contracted to pinpoints. Overwhelming fear flooded his consciousness like a freezing sea. He saw the young face drain of all color under the shadow of death, leaving only extreme terror and despair. Those eyes which had sparkled with admiration moments ago were now empty and unfocused. The arm holding the wooden spear rose stiffly, its movements sluggish as if frozen in thick time. No thought, no weighing. Pete could not die. This boy who saw him as a hero with clear eyes could not die here. A primal impulse from the depths of his soul mingled with all the loneliness suppressed since his arrival, and the protective urge for the only one who had shown him kindness erupted like a dormant volcano. Taunt. This thought exploded like a violent mental storm in his soul. An invisible, intangible shockwave laced with intense spiritual contamination, accompanied by a hoarse, soul-tearing roar. Lu Ren himself was unaware of, slammed like a heavy hammer into the mad wolf, about to sink its fangs into Pete's neck. Buzz. A strange change occurred. The moment Lu Ren's will erupted, and he roared, a faint, barely perceptible golden ripple, clearly distorting the air around him, spread outward from him. This ripple was not light, but a fold in space, a tangible distortion of pure spiritual energy. It seemed to contain the simultaneous sneers and curses of countless beings, filled with extreme contempt and insult, forming a chaotic, piercing spiritual noise that poured precisely and forcefully into the chaotic mind of the mad wolf. The giant wolf with red eyes and slobbering jaws froze mid-pounce. In its burning dark red pupils, the madness was instantly replaced by a more primal, chaotic rage. As if Lu Ren's silent, willful roar could ignite the deepest fury in its soul more than Pete's tender flesh. It was an unbearable humiliation from being challenged by an ant. Roar. The mad wolf let out a deafening, rage-filled howl. Its powerful hind legs dug 2 deep pits into the slippery mud, and its massive body twisted midair in an unnatural arc, abandoning the easy prey. Its murky red gaze like 2 hot brands locked onto Lu Ren on horseback. With an even more ferocious, reckless, destructive momentum, it opened its maw-spattering, stinking saliva and charged like an out-of-control battering ram directly at Lu Ren. Its fangs aimed straight for Lu Ren's vulnerable throat. The stench of the charge nearly suffocated him. Pete felt only a foul wind rush over his head, the icy touch of death raising every hair on his body, his mind blank. The overwhelming relief of survival made his legs go weak. He collapsed onto the cold mud with a thud, gasping for air like a fish out of water, his body trembling uncontrollably, unable to move a finger. But now Lu Ren was plunged into an abyss of doom. The mad wolf, having turned, charged faster, stronger. The stench of blood and foulness nearly solidified. The old horse beneath him, terrified by the murderous aura and death, let out a desperate shrill whinny and reared up. Caught off guard, Lu Ren was hurled from the saddle by the momentum. The world spun. He could only watch in despair as the slobbering white fangs grew larger and larger in his vision. He could even see the dark red throat deep in the wolf's maw and the rotting flesh stuck between its sharp teeth. The stench flooded his nostrils and the icy grip of death seized his heart. Time seemed to stretch, then compress in an instant. Beast died. A thunderous roar sounded beside. A massive iron tower-like figure with unwavering killing intent appeared between him and death, as if teleported. Captain Black. Captain Black, his beard and hair bristling, eyes wide with fury, bulging muscles swelling under his leather armor, swung his greatsword with a terrifying screech that tore the air. The blade rose from below, drawing a fierce mountain-splitting crescent arc. No flourish, only the purest killing power condensed from a lifetime of battle will. The target was the relatively soft chest and abdomen of the lunging wolf. A wet, heavy thud followed as the sharp blade buried deep into the wolf's body. The sickening crack of splintering bones along with gushing hot, iron-tasting blood and shattered organs sprayed out like a sudden rain, drenching Lu Ren's head and face. The overwhelming stench of blood and entrails overwhelmed his olfactory defenses. The giant wolf let out a sky-shaking, agonized, and unwilling howl. Its massive body, struck by the unstoppable force, was hurled away, crashing heavily into a patch of wet ferns a few meters away with a dull thud. It convulsed violently, its limbs thrashing uselessly, its dark red eyes dying like guttering candles, fading to empty stillness. The hot wolf blood quickly spread beneath it, staining the dark green ferns and deep brown earth. Lu Ren hit the cold, sticky mud hard, feeling as if every bone had been shattered and reassembled. Intense pain and nausea made his vision darken and his stomach churn. He struggled to push himself up, but his limbs were as weak as boiled noodles, lacking any strength. The warm, stinking wolf blood dripped from his forehead, cheeks, and neck, falling into his mouth, which was slightly open from fear and revulsion. The strong iron taste and stench made him want to vomit. The battle around him did not end with the death of the alpha wolf. The remaining wolves, though smaller, showed no less of the dark red madness in their eyes. They emitted low, threatening growls and charged fearlessly at the guards. The sound of spears thrusting, the dull thud of blades cutting flesh, the angry shouts of the guards, and the dying screams of the wolves mingled fiercely in the misty forest clearing. Pete was quickly dragged by a guard into the relative safety of the circle's center. He collapsed, his fingers digging into the cold mud, his face ashen, his body trembling like a leaf still in shock from the bloody scene. Captain Black did not immediately go to aid the other guards. He stood like a war god, pulled from a pool of blood, his greatsword planted in the blood-soaked earth, still dripping sticky wolf blood. His chest heaved heavily, each breath expelling a cloud of white vapor. Slowly, very slowly, he turned, his gaze like two red-hot pincers fresh from the forge, with a soul-searing intensity fixed firmly on Lu Ren, who was struggling to sit up from the muddy blood. The wolf blood on Lu Ren's face was still warm, its sticky feel like countless cold maggots crawling on his skin. He wanted to wipe it off, but his arm was too heavy, trembling uselessly. Captain Black's eyes were terrifying. It was not mere anger or confusion, but a cold, piercing scrutiny that penetrated flesh and blood, reaching the deepest part of the soul. As if in that fleeting life-or-death instant, all the anomalies hidden by the mist, all the unnatural details were laid bare under those eagle-sharp, stormy gray-brown eyes. The fierce sounds of battle, the clash of weapons, the dying screams, all seemed to recede, blur, and become distorted, fading into a hollow background noise. The entire world suddenly shrank, collapsed, leaving only Captain Black's heavy, blood-tinged breathing and his deep, unfathomable eyes like a volcano about to erupt. Lu Ren's heart pounded wildly in his chest, each beat pulling at the pain of his fall and the fear that nearly froze his soul. His throat felt strangled by an invisible hand, dry and burning, unable to make a sound. It's over. That golden ripple. That spiritual wave that distorted the air. Black saw it. He definitely saw it. He was at that angle with that terrifying battlefield intuition. What did he see? How much did he guess? The hidden identity. That damn myriad weaver. That fatal shard. Even Chromie. All exposed. Icy despair swallowed him like a deep ocean current. Cold sweat mixed with the sticky, stinking wolf blood on his face dripped from his temples and brow into his mouth, which was wide open from extreme tension. Salty, stinking bitter. The complex flavors stimulated his taste buds and intensified his soul's trembling. He felt his blood freeze under that icy gaze, his fingertips numb and lifeless. Finally, Captain Black moved. He took a heavy step, his iron boots caked with mud and dark wolf blood crunching on the blood-soaked sticky leaves and humus with a sickening sound. Each step was like an invisible hammer striking Lu Ren's taut, nerves making them groan on the verge of break. He stopped in front of Lu Ren, his tall shadow falling like the heaviest night, engulfing Lu Ren, who was slumped in the mud and blood. The suffocating stench of blood, the iron-like, killing intent, and an invisible oppressive weight from a superior being pressed down, almost draining all the air around Lu Ren. Captain Black leaned forward slightly, his weathered face now as cold and hard as steel coming close. The wolf blood splattered on his face had not yet dried, making him look especially ferocious in the pale morning light. His low voice rumbled like thunder across a dry riverbed, carrying a suppressed storm that seemed about to explode. Each word was like a cold nail driven deep into Lu Ren's crumbling soul. What did you just do, boy? The shadow cast by Captain Blake, like an icy iron curtain, completely enveloped Lu Ren. The question, as low as muffled thunder, demanded, "What did you do just now, boy?" Each word, like a heavy hammer wrapped in ice shards, pounded fiercely against Lu Ren's wavering conscience. The thick smell of blood, the metallic reek of murderous intent, and the suffocating pressure of Blake's battle-hardened presence mingled with the sticky, stinking wolf blood still wet on his face, formed a devastating force that threatened to crush Lu Ren into the mud. Fear, like freezing mercury, instantly flooded Lu Ren's limbs, freezing his thoughts and congealing his. He opened his mouth, but only a dry, rasping sound like a broken bellows escaped his throat, unable to form a single complete syllable. Explanation. Excuse. Before Blake's gray-brown eyes, which seemed to see through everything and burned with suspicion and cold scrutiny, any words appeared pale, powerless, even ridiculous. What could he say? That the pale golden ripples were an illusion? That the mental shock was a stress reaction from sheer terror? Who would believe that? Blake was not Pete. He was a veteran who had crawled out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. He had seen real magic, witnessed stranger powers. He could tell the difference between fear and abnormality. It's over. Completely over. Lu Ren's vision darkened, and he could almost see the cold dungeon of Shanjin Town, the stake, and the horrifying scene of being dissected as a heretical monster. The metal fragment in his bosom remained cold, but the faint chaos mark seemed to sense his master's despair on the brink of collapse, and it throbbed violently, desperately right against his chest. Just when Lu Ren thought all was lost, and expected Captain Blake to grab him like a chicken or slay him on the spot with the still-dripping greatsword. Boom. A terrifying thunderclap, as if it would split the entire Erwin forest, erupted without warning from the dense dark clouds above. A blinding, glaring lightning bolt, like the furious whip of a giant god, tore through the gloomy sky, instantly illuminating the blood-soaked, fog-shrouded clearing in a stark, ghastly white. Everything. The muddy, blood-stained ground, the guards' startled faces, the dead wolf with unseeing eyes, Pete sprawled on the ground, the frozen fear and wolf blood on Lu Ren's face, and Captain Blake's ice-cold, iron-like countenance. All lost their color in that instant, leaving only chilling black and white silhouettes. Then the long-gathering rain, like a river pouring from the heavens, finally burst down in a violent deluge. Whooshed! The cold, dense rain, lashing down like whips, instantly covered everything. The thick fog was brutally torn apart and dispersed. The strong smell of blood was wildly washed away and diluted. The hot wolf blood mixed with mud into a murky, sticky, dark red stream, spreading and flowing under Lu Ren. The icy rain poured down, washing away the sticky blood on his face and giving his fear-heated mind a brief, piercing clarity. This sudden, violent primal force, like a bucket of ice water, briefly extinguished the surging storm and almost tangible killing intent in Captain Blake's eyes. His large hands, stained with blood and dirt, ready to grab Lu Ren's collar like a steel vice, abruptly stopped less than half a foot from its target. In the flash of lightning, his gray-brown pupils contracted slightly, revealing not only suspicion, but also a hint of shock at being interrupted by an external force and a barely perceptible instinctive wariness. He jerked his head up, his sharp, eagle-like gaze piercing the dense rain curtain, scanning the dark, ink-black depths of the forest where the thunder rolled, as if alert to whether this celestial change concealed other, more deadly dangers. "Captain, watch out!" a guard shouted hoarsely in the downpour. In that split second of Blake's distraction, a forest wolf, its fur plastered by rain, and its eyes still burning with dark red frenzy, fearlessly charged at him from the side. Its fangs glinted coldly in the rain. Captain Blake reacted like lightning. His Bodis instinct instantly overrode the interrogation of Lu Ren. He let out a low growl like a provoked lion, and abruptly pulled back his hand that had stopped in front of Lu Ren the Force, sending up a spray of mud and blood. At the same time he twisted his waist, and the heavy greatsword stained with wolf blood cut through the rain, with a howl tracing a fierce perfect semicircle. Thud! The blade bit precisely into the charging wolf's neck. The wolf's head was nearly severed by the immense kinetic force, hanging only by a shred of skin, and stinking wolf blood spurted like a fountain mixing with the cold rain. The headless wolf carcass crashed heavily into the mud beside Blake, twitched a few times, and lay still. Form up. Clean up the rest. Move. Captain Blake wiped the rain and blood from his face, his voice still ringing like metal filled with unyielding authority. He did not glance again at Lu Ren in the mud, but threw his burly figure back into the slaughter of the remaining mad wolf. The downpour became the perfect cover, diluting the unsettling abnormal moment, and the battlefield was once again dominated by primal killing instinct. Lu Ren slumped in the cold, bloody mud, the icy rain mercilessly washing his body, draining his warmth, and bringing a sense of post-survival exhaustion. He gasped heavily, each breath carrying the thick smell of blood and the cold metallic scent of rain. The stopped hand of Captain Blake, the instant shift of killing intent and alertness, was branded into his mind like a scar. Safe for now. Just for now. The downpour had saved him once, but what about when the battle ended? Blake's eyes would never forget what he had seen. He struggled to stand, but his body felt like it was falling apart. His arm gave way, and he instinctively braced himself with his hand. His palm touched something cold and hard. The iron sword he had just acquired, now covered in mud and dark blood. The rough texture of the hilt sent a shock through his heart. When he fell from the horse, had this sword not slipped from him? He looked down. Rust and bloodstains covered the already dull blade, and under the heavy rain it appeared so battered and fragile, just like himself. An indescribable sense of sorrow and absurdity surged within him. Was this his reliance in this dangerous world? A rusty sword, and the treacherous weaver of all things ability that could expose him at any moment and bring death. Advisor Lu Ren, are you all right? Pete's voice, choked with tears and broken by the rain, came through. He struggled up from the mud, staggered, and crawled to Lu Ren's side, his face a mixture of rain tears and terrified fear. His trembling hands wanted to help Lu Ren, but dared not touch him, as if Lu Ren were fragile porcelain. You're bleeding. So much blood. He pointed at the bloodstains on Lu Ren's face, washed thin, but still savage, his voice full of fear, and obviously he had not seen or not understood the abnormality of the pale golden ripples. He only saw Lu Ren luring away the most terrifying wolf to save him, getting drenched in the wolf's blood, falling from the horse, and nearly dying. Lu Ren raised his head through the dense rain curtain, looking at Pete's young, terrified face, yet filled with those eyes which had sparkled with admiration not long ago were now occupied by immense fear and afterfright. But when they looked at Lu Ren, the dependence and trust remained undiminished. A complex emotion like vines entangled Lu Ren's heart. Guilt, fear, a trace of warmth, and a deeper, heavy sense of responsibility. He had protected this boy at the cost of exposing his greatest secret and inviting deadly suspicion. Was it worth it? He didn't know. But looking at Pete's alive face and feeling his pure concern, a cold, hard place deep inside Lu Ren seemed to melt a little under the icy rain and the boy's burning worry. I am fine. Lu Ren's voice was hoarse, almost drowned by the rain. He forcefully wiped the mixture of rain and blood from his face, forcing a smile that was uglier than crying, trying to soothe Pete. It's all wolf blood. Minor scratches. Don't be afraid. He struggled, leaning on Pete's support, and staggered to his feet from the mud. The icy rain flowed down his hair and neck into his leather armor, making his teeth chatter. The rusty sword covered in mud and blood was unconsciously clutched tightly in his hand, the cold metal sensation his only anchor. At that moment the last dying wolf howl abruptly ceased. The battle was over. The remaining mad wolves had been slain by the guards' coordinated efforts. The clearing was a mess. Rain washed away the dark blood, mixing with mud into patches of murky sludge. Several wolf carcasses lay scattered rapidly, losing warmth in the downpour. The guards leaned on their spears or swords, breathing heavily, rain streaming down their tired faces and armor, washing away the traces of battle and fatigue. Captain Blake, carrying the greatsword still dripping pale red water lines, walked forward with heavy steps, treading through blood and mud. His gaze like a cold probe locked onto Lu Ren, who was supported by Pete, drenched and wretched. The downpour diluted the blood, but could not wash away the heavy, tangible scrutiny and suspicion in his eyes. The brief battle interlude had not made him forget the inexplicable abnormality about Lu Ren. Lu Ren's heart leaped to his throat again, and his hand holding the rusty sword tightened uncontrollably, his knuckles white from the strain. He could feel Blake's gaze cutting through his body like a knife, trying to strip away his fragile disguise and reach the core secret called the Weaver of all things. Pete seemed to feel the heavy atmosphere too, his arm supporting Lu Ren, tightening unconsciously, his body trembling slightly, his eyes toward Captain Blake, filled with awe and a barely perceptible fear. Captain Blake stopped 2 steps away from Lu Ren, rain dripping continuously from his chiseled jaw. He did not speak immediately, but fixed his deep-set hawk-like gray-brown eyes on Lu Ren, scrutinizing him inch. The weight of that gaze made it almost impossible for Lu Ren to breathe, as if the air had solidified into lead. Time seemed to stretch and freeze in the clamor of the storm. Each second felt like an eternity. Lu Ren felt his nerves stretched to the limit, and the faint throbbing of the metal fragment in his chest seemed to grow clearer and more rapid, echoing his frantic heartbeat. Just as Lu Ren felt he was about to be crushed by the silent pressure on the verge of mental collapse. Clang! A crisp metallic sound rang out abruptly. The rusty sword in Lu Ren's hand, covered in mud and blood and clenched so tightly suddenly. The upper half of the blade, with a small piece of the heavily rusted hilt, arced briefly through the rain, then plunged with a thud into the thick mud at Lu Ren's feet, leaving only a short section of jagged blade exposed, quickly darkening under the rain. In Lu Ren's hand, only the half-hilt remained bare, covered in rust and mud, the rough metal edge glaringly conspicuous under the dim light. This sudden turn of events stunned everyone, including Captain Blake. His sharp knife-like gaze instinctively fell on the half-buried broken sword. A break. An iron sword of such poor quality and severe rusting, after withstanding the impact of a fall, the force of being gripped and soaking in the rain. Suddenly breaking seemed not entirely impossible, especially in this damnable downpour that could rust anything. A faint, almost imperceptible flash of pale golden light flickered at the edge of Lu Ren's palm, gripping the broken hilt, vanishing so quickly it seemed like an illusion. It was an unconscious leak of the feeble, chaotic energy within him, under extreme mental tension, like the last whimper of a bowstring before snapping. But this extremely faint light against the backdrop of the rain and under the reasonable cover of the broken sword went unnoticed by anyone. Lu Ren stared blankly at the half-hilt in his hand, then at the broken blade in the mud. A wave of immense absurdity and powerlessness washed over him again. Even the last symbolic armament had been lost in such a ridiculous and pathetic way. He instinctively bent down to pick up the broken blade, as if grasping it would give him one last shred of dignity or security. Enough! Captain Blake's low voice rang out again, interrupting Lu Ren's movement. His gaze finally lifted from the broken blade, returning to Lu Ren's pale, blood-stained face, shivering in the rain. The scrutiny and coldness in his eyes had not completely vanished, but seemed replaced by something deeper and more complex. A mixture of exhaustion, doubt, and a hint of almost ruthlessly pragmatic calculation. Take it. Captain Blake did not look at the broken sword again, but instead gestured with his chin toward a smaller wolf carcass on the ground, where a standard Stormwind Guard's short sword lay covered in mud and blood. The blade, though also filthy, was clearly more refined and sturdy than Lu Ren's completely ruined rusty iron. Stay with the squad. Head to the lumber mill. Don't fall behind again, and don't. He paused, his gray-brown eyes piercing through the rain, through the flesh, straight into the restless seed hidden deep in Lu Ren's soul. Cause trouble. Put your luck to good use. Living to deliver the timber is your only task now. The rest. His voice dropped with an air of finality. We'll talk after we get back. With that, Captain Blake turned away from Lu Ren as if the heart-stopping abnormality had never happened. He turned to the other guards and barked, "Clean the battlefield. Pile the wolf carcasses aside. Check your gear. We move out in 5 minutes. Target Donggu Timber Mill. This damn rain won't stop. Pull yourselves together." The guards responded in unison and began silently moving, dragging the wolf carcasses to the edge of the clearing and checking their weapons and armor. Pete quickly let go of Lu Ren, ran over and struggled to pull the guard's short sword out of the mud. He wiped the mud and blood off the blade with his sleeve, then carefully held it out to Lu Ren with both hands, his eyes full of post-survival relief and gratitude for Lu Ren's luck. He thought Lu Ren's bravery in luring the giant wolf and the coincidental sword break had saved them. "Advisor. Here. For you." Pete's voice still trembled. Lu Ren looked at the short sword in Pete's hands, the cold metal reflecting a faint glint in the rain. He reached out his fingertips, touching the cold hilt. The real heavy sensation pulled him back from the edge of absurdity and collapsed to a semblance of reality. He took the short sword and gripped it. The residual mud and cold rain on the hilt, along with its solid weight, gave him a weak but tangible sense of support. He looked up, catching sight of Captain Blake's commanding back in the rain. Safe for now. Blake had chosen to shelve the matter to pragmatically complete the mission, but this was only temporary calm. The deep suspicion, like an undercurrent beneath the storm, could erupt again, and the metal fragment in his chest, the faint but increasingly clear, chaotic throbbing, like a restless, awakening entity, pressed against his heart, reminding him of the inescapable identity of the Chaos Seed. The rain still poured heavily, the cold water washing away the blood in the forest and the fatigue and shock on everyone's faces. The squad regrouped, and under Captain Blake's silent, but forceful leadership like a wounded, but still tenacious iron chain, they once again disappeared into the deep forest path, shrouded by the storm and unknown dangers leading to Donggu Timber Mill. Lu Ren, holding the Cold Guard's short sword, trudged along in the middle of the squad. Each step in the mud spattered dirty water. The icy rain flowed down his neck into his clothes, making his teeth chatter. Pete stayed close beside him, casting worried glances from time to time. Mental exhaustion washed over him in waves, and each breath pulled at the dull pain from his fall. The metal fragment in his chest grew hot, the throb of the chaos mark stronger and clearer, like a parasitic heart beating powerfully and rhythmically beneath his cold chest. Thump, thump, thump. The beating seemed to penetrate flesh and bone, echoing directly in Lu Ren's eardrums, even drowning out the sound of the rain. An indescribable tremor spread from where the fragment touched his chest, like a subtle electric current coursing through his limbs. His feeling was both familiar and strange. Familiar was the tremor from the primordial chaos, strange was a hint of something awakened, a greedy longing. Lu Ren stopped abruptly. His face turned even paler than the rain. He instinctively clutched his chest, as if trying to suppress the increasingly violent and undeniable throbbing and tremor. This fragment, what did it want? Advisor, what's wrong? Is it the wound? Pete immediately supported him nervously. Captain Blake, walking ahead, seemed to notice the abnormal halt at the rear of the squad. He whipped his head around, his sharp, eagle-like gaze piercing the dense rain, once again precisely nailing Lu Ren's terrified face. This time his gray-brown pupils contracted sharply, because he clearly saw on the back of Lu Ren's hand covering his chest, under the unusually pale skin washed by the rain, a fleeting, indescribable, twisted, dark, golden light flash by. What was that? Captain Blake's hand instantly went to the sword hilt at his waist. Captain Black abruptly turned his head, his hawk-like sharp gaze piercing through the dense icy rain, precisely pinning down Lu Ren's face, which had instantly drained of all color. He saw it. On the back of the hand, desperately clutching his chest, the skin appeared a morbid pallor under the torrential rain, and beneath that pallid skin an extremely faint, extremely brief, phantom-like streak of dark golden light, twisted like a dying viper's struggle, flashing and vanishing. What was that? Captain Black's heart sank like a stone, a chill more piercing than the cold downpour instantly. No illusion. That was definitely not something a human should possess. A curse, a dark art, or the chaos seed that the high elf and that mysterious little girl warned about wreaking havoc. His fingers on the sword hilt tightened abruptly, veins bulging on the back of his hand. The cold, killing intent like a drawn blade surged once more. Whatever it was, this uncontrollable, evil-emanating anomaly could not be left in this team, especially in this perilous forest on the verge of facing the unknown situation at the lumber mill. Lu Ren. Captain Black's roar like a thunderclap drowned out the hissing rain, filled with unyielding resolve and chilling command. Stay where you are. Don't move. His burly frame like an enraged bear spun abruptly, his heavy iron boots crushing the mud as he strode menacingly toward Lu Ren. The giant sword, dripping with raindrops, gleamed with a cold metallic luster in the dim light. Advise! Pete screamed in terror, utterly bewildered, only seeing Captain Black's unprecedented horrific gaze, as if looking at a monster, and the impending thunderous fury. Instinctively he wanted to shield Lu Ren, but his body was frozen with fear. Lu Ren felt as if he were nailed to the spot by invisible ice spikes. His heart pounded wildly in his chest, almost shattering his ribs. Not because of Black's killing intent, but because of the fragment in his bosom. The violent throbbing and eerie pulsation did not cease. Instead, under the stimulation of Black's roar and closing murderous aura, it erupted like oil doused with flame. Thump, 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 thump. No longer a faint throbbing, but a violent pounding like a heavy hammer on a drum. An indescribable torrent, as if from the depths of the soul, mingled with searing heat, tearing, and an extreme greedy craving burst from the metal fragment pressed against his chest. In an instant, it overwhelmed his already crumbling mental dam. This power was so domineering, so chaotic, carrying a primal desire to tear, devour, and assimilate everything. Lu Ren let out an inhuman, agonized scream. His body, as if seized by an invisible giant hand, arched violently. The guard's short sword he had just held clattered into the mud. He dug his fingers into the leather armor on his chest, nails gouging deep into his own flesh through the fabric. Before his eyes, instead of the forest and the downpour, there was a terrifying vision of madly spinning, twisting chaos, filled with countless dark golden vortices. Agony. Unspeakable agony ravaged every nerve, as if countless red-hot steel needles were piercing and churning inside him. Stop him. Captain Black's pupils contracted. Lu Ren's inhuman reaction and contorted posture of agony confirmed his worst suspicions. This was no pretense. It was a sign of some terrifying powers spiraling out of control. He hesitated, no longer roaring, as he charged forward, the giant sword already raised its cold blade aimed at Lu Ren. He had to subdue him before he completely lost control and endangered everyone. Or destroy him. However, just as Captain Black was within 3 steps of Lu Rin, the giant sword about to descend a hum, an invisible, violently extreme energy shockwave erupted from Lu Rin as the epicenter. No light, no thunderous sound, only an instantaneous heart-stopping distortion and collapse of space like a calm surface shattered by an invisible boulder. Where the shockwave passed, the dense falling rain was forcibly twisted, torn, and scattered into a white mist. The viscous mud on the ground churned and bubbled as if boiling. Pete, the closest, was struck heat-like by an invisible battering ram. He screamed, sent flying through the air, crashing heavily into the muddy water several meters away, and instantly fell unconscious. Captain Black, bearing the brunt, felt an overwhelming chaotic force smash into his chest. His thick leather armor groaned under the strain. His burly frame, like a kite with a broken string, staggered back 7 or 8 steps, each step plowing a deep furrow in the mud. Finally, he barely steadied himself by driving the giant sword into the ground, a coppery taste of blood rising in his throat, which he forced down. He looked up sharply, his gray-brown eyes filled with unprecedented shock and horror. What had happened? Around Lu Rin, within a radius of several meters, a bizarre vacuum had formed. The torrential rain seemed blocked by an invisible barrier, unable to fall. The air was thick with heavy mist, and an indescribable, unsettling faint hum, as if space itself were moaning. Lu Rin was still bent in agony, his hands clawing at his chest, but around his body, a hair-raising spectacle began to emerge. Wispy, twisted, lifelike strands of dark golden mist seeped from the area he was clutching. This mist was not material, more like a pure energy manifestation. They whipped, writhed, and grew wildly in the air like greedy tentacles. Where they passed, space seemed to sizzle with faint crackling sounds, and even the falling raindrops were silently annihilated upon contact. An invisible, suffocating pressure, like an ancient beast awakening, slowly spread, crushing the breath of all surviving guards, turning their faces pale, nearly making them drop their weapons. Out of control. Completely out of control. That seed, ignited by Black's killing intent and Lu Rin's own despair. It was greedily absorbing something struggling to break free, wanting to hatch. Roar. In that eerie silence that froze the soul, a roar filled with boundless savagery and bloodlust, like a death knell from hell, erupted from deep within the forest path ahead, leading toward the lumber mill. The madness in that roar surpassed even the forest wolves, twisted by some force earlier. Then the dense rain curtain was violently torn apart. Dozens of figures in dark red, tattered robes, drenched, but radiating intense killing intent and madness, like hyenas catching the scent of blood, charged out of the dense woods on both sides of the path, howling. They brandished rusty lumber axes, heavy spiked maces, and even glistening poison daggers. Their eyes were cloudy, bloodshot, filled with pure craving for slaughter and destruction. The Defias Brotherhood. And a pack of Defias thugs, their madness fully ignited by some force. Even more chilling, at the forefront of these mad thugs, advancing like a spearhead, were 3 unusually tall and burly figures, their movements slightly stiff. They also wore Defias dark red hoods, but under the tattered hoods were not the faces of the living. 3 horrifying visages, highly decayed, crawling with maggots, with white bone exposed in places. In their hollow eye sockets burned 2 balls of cold, malevolent soulfire. Zombies. Defias zombies raised by necromancy. They let out silent roars, brandishing equally rusty but shockingly powerful weapons, advancing with heavy steps, like human battering rams, bearing down on the guards who had just been hit by the energy shockwave, their formation broken and shaken. Internal strife. External threat. Both erupted at once. Captain Black's eyes nearly split. The dark golden energy tendrils spreading uncontrollably from Lu Rin, radiating terror. And ahead, the Defias desperados and zombie driven by necromancy surged like a tide. Attack from both sides. A desperate situation. Form up. Engage. Captain Black roared with all his might, forcing down the surging blood and chest pain, pulling the giant sword from the mud, standing like a rock at the front of the formation. His roar, like a stabilizing pillar, brought the panicked and terrified guards back to their senses. They instinctively contracted their formation, spears and blades tremblingly pointing at the surging enemies. But the Defias thugs and zombies moved too fast. Especially the 3 zombies, immensely strong and ignoring pain, they instantly reached the hastily formed defensive line. A guard spear thrust deep into a zombie's rotting chest, but it was like piercing rotten wood. The zombie only paused briefly, the green fire in its hollow eye sockets flickering, then its rusted great axe still swung down with a dull whoosh. Crack. The spear was snapped by the force. The guard watched in horror as the axe blade enlarged in his vision. Oh! The scream was cut short. Blood and rain splashed. The line was torn open instantly. The frenzied Defias thugs howled with bloodlust like sharks, smelling blood pouring through the breach. The dull thud of axes against armor, the harsh crack of breaking bones, the dying screams, and mad roars interwove into a bloody symphony of death. Though the guards were well trained, they were greatly weakened by the shockwave of Lu Ren's uncontrolled energy, and caught off guard by the mad charge of thugs and zombies, they were instantly locked in a bitter struggle, suffering heavy casualties. Captain Black roared repeatedly, his giant sword whirling like a windmill, each strike carrying the power to split rocks, sending the Defias thugs flying along with their weapons. But he alone could not hold. The three zombies clung like burrs, as seemingly attracted by Black's intense life force and power. They ignored the other guards, roaring, advancing with heavy and steady steps, lunging at Black from three directions. Rusty great axe, heavy flail, and a spiked mace carrying the wind of death sealed off all his escape routes. Just as Captain Black seemed about to fall into a death trap, surrounded and torn apart by the three immensely strong zombies, in that life or death moment, get back. A roar like that of a wounded beast filled with extreme agony and wild fury burst from the twisted dark golden energy mist at the rear of the formation. It was Lu Ren. The extreme pain and the despair of near collapse at the moment he witnessed Pete flung away, guards slaughtered, and Black trapped, actually overwhelmed the tearing sensation of the uncontrolled energy. A more primal, more violent emotion, protection, annihilate those enemies, bringing death, erupted like magma in his chaotic consciousness. He no longer tried to suppress the rampaging chaos energy. Instead, with all his remaining willpower, like grabbing the reins of a runaway horse, he forcibly guided it, directing it at the zombies lunging at Black and the surging Defias thugs. Get back! His will surged like a flood bursting a dam. The wildly writhing dark golden energy tendrils around Lu Ren, as if receiving a supreme command, instantly stopped their chaotic twisting. The next moment they straightened like giant pythons infused with life and will. With a tearing shriek through the air at a speed beyond visual limits, they shot toward the battlefield ahead, especially the three zombies lunging at Black. Uft, 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 uft. No earth-shattering explosion. Only a series of scalp-numbing muffled sounds like a hot knife through butter. The zombie at the forefront wielding the great axe stiffened in its decaying body. The soul fire in its hollow eye sockets flickered and wavered violently. Several dark golden energy tendrils like solid sharp spears had silently and precisely pierced its relatively intact knee-rotting waist joint and the spine supporting its movement. The dark golden energy crazily flowed and eroded within its decayed body. The zombie let out a silent soul-level shriek, its movements instantly becoming like rusted machinery, stiff and sluggish. The rusted great axe it raised high could no longer fall. The other two zombies suffered the same fate. Several dark golden tendrils like clinging burrs precisely stabbed into their joint vulnerabilities. The violent chaos energy, like the deadliest poison, frantically corroded the necromantic energy, sustaining their movements. Their actions instantly became extremely slow and distorted like puppets with their key strings cut. Captain Black's pressure eased instantly. Surprise flashed in his eyes, but a warrior's instinct made him seize this priceless opportunity. With a roar, his giant sword swept out with accumulated explosive power. Crack, crack, crack. Three highly decayed green flame-burning heads were severed simultaneously by the heavy sharp blade, like rotten wood. Flying into the air, the headless zombie bodies tottered for a moment, then crashed to the ground, the dark golden energy tendrils withdrawing from the severed necks, trailing wisps of dissipating green soulfire and decayed filth. The battlefield froze briefly. All surviving Defias thugs were stunned by the unbelievable sight. They watched helplessly as the three invulnerable, immensely strong zombies were pinned by several dark golden spears that suddenly appeared and radiated terror, then beheaded by Black like chopping vegetables. The immense fear of the unknown instantly overwhelmed their incited madness. "Mo monster! Retreat! Quick retreat!" Someone let out a terrified, distorted scream, and the remaining Defias thugs instantly broke. They no longer cared about the mission or plunder. Like stray dogs, they dropped their weapons and turned to flee back into the dense forest in panic. Trying to run, Captain Black, his eyes bloodshot from killing, would not let these executioners of his comrades escape. He was about to swing his sword in pursuit when a dull thud came from behind. Captain Black whirled around. The dark golden energy tendrils around Lu Ren, after delivering that fatal strike, seemed to have exhausted all their power, instantly dimming, turning transparent, and dissipating in the air like shattered glass. Lu Ren himself, as if all his bones had been removed, his eyes rolled back, the last trace of color draining from his face, fell straight forward, crashing heavily into the cold, muddy pool of blood, motionless, his fate unknown. Forcing himself to guide the unruly chaos energy for that attack, the price was draining his last shred of mental strength and vitality. Advisor Pete, just waking from his faint, happened to see Lu Ren fall and let out a heart-wrenching cry as he scrambled over. Captain Black looked at Lu Run lying in the mud, his breath faint like a candle in the wind, then at the three headless zombies on the ground, and the fleeing Defias thugs. The hand gripping the giant sword trembled slightly. On his weathered face, muscles twitched violently. His expression was complex beyond measure. Shock, doubt, lingering fear, and even a fleeting, barely perceptible, even to himself, sense of awe. The scene of the dark golden energy tendrils piercing the zombies and turning the tide was etched into his mind like a brand. Was it a monster? Or some forbidden power? But regardless, it was this monster that at the most critical moment saved him and the remaining comrades. Captain, should we pursue? A guard, his face bloodied and arm injured, asked breathlessly, his eyes filled with hatred as he watched the fleeing Defias disappear into the dense forest. Captain Black took a deep breath of the air thick with blood, rain, and mud forcing down his turbulent emotions. He glanced at the unconscious Lu Run, then toward the direction the Defias thugs had fled, and finally his gaze settled on the distant blurry outline of the East Valley lumber mill, in the rain, like a wounded beast crouching at the edge of the forest, now faintly visible. The lumber, the mission, and the shadows hiding in the dark, manipulating the zombies. Don't chase a cornered enemy. Black's voice regained its usual low, decisive tone tinged with deep exhaustion. Tend to the wounded. Bring. Advisor Lu Run and Pete. Same objective, East Valley lumber mill. Move. We have no time to waste. He chose the most pragmatic path. Lu Ren's problem had to be dealt with, but not now, not in this forest filled with death and the unknown. The lumber mill might hold the answers they needed, or a deeper trap. The guards moved in silence, hastily gathering the bodies of fallen comrades and helping the wounded. Pete, with tears streaming along with another guard, carefully lifted Lu Ren's cold, barely breathing body from the muddy pool of blood. The team set off again, but the atmosphere was heavier and more oppressive than before. The rain washed away the blood mercilessly, yet could not dispel the deathly aura and the unsettling mystery lingering in the air. Captain Black walked at the front, his back like a silent mountain. His gaze occasionally swept over the carried Lu Run, and in the depths of his eyes doubt grew like tangled vines. Lu Run, what are you? The spark of hope sleeping within you, or the harbinger of destruction? The rain still poured. The forest path leading to the East Valley lumber mill stretched into the rain curtain, as if leading to a devouring maw. And from the direction of the lumber mill, that blurred outline twisted in the rain, and faintly a new, richer scent of blood seemed to drift on the wind, mingling with the cold raindrops silently approaching.